This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate fourth and final part of What If Naruto Was Trained by a Forgotten Clan. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
With his eyes closed and a broad smile, Naruto walked with a bounce in his step. Returning Tsunade to Konoha and healing the one person who gave his life purpose made him extremely happy and excited. Although his mother was almost very important to him, Hinata had been there for a longer period of time. It simply meant that he was more anticipating Hinata's awakening, not that he didn't want his mother to wake up or anything. Naruto let out a loud, satisfied sigh and slid into step with his traveling companions, who had been following the blonde with the hyperactive gait just a moment before. Naruto knew that nothing could make him stop smiling, but he was unable to do so. In 2 more minutes, he would see the front gates leading to the shopping district of Konoha, and everything would be perfect. The words, happy, go, lucky, eager, impatient, and zealous, could all be used to characterize the feelings that crossed Naruto's mind. In order for Hinata to wake up and allow him to see her stunning lavender eyes, he wanted to run all the way down to the hospital and start working on her. Tsunade gave the boy a funny, happy look. It was becoming amusing because he was so determined to take her to Konoha in order for her to heal the boy's first love. Tsunade initially believed that was all he wanted, that he was only bringing her back to heal the girl before discarding her like a used napkin. Before she and Naruto had a brief conversation not too long ago, that was the impression she had. With Shizune and Jiraiya in front of her and Taunton in her hands, Tsunade strolled along the path. With a sigh, Tsunade gazed up at the sky with a mixture of sadness and awe. She had transformed from a hopeless wanderer with a problem with drinking and gambling to a Hokage with the same issues in the past week. Additionally, 2 separate people got into a fight that same week so she could support them. Did she truly exist only as a prize to be won in a duel? To be put to use until she was useless and discarded? She was essentially returning to Konoha to heal the injured and guide a village full of idiots and hypocrites. And why? Because, in a sense, Naruto had defeated her former teammate. He had succeeded in persuading her to support him rather than Orochimaru. Tsunade felt a vein pop out of her head and fought the urge to punch the child all the way back to Konoha. "Hey Ba-chan, what's wrong?" she asked. Tsunade exclaimed, "I told you to stop calling me that, too loudly." As he walked forward, she noticed Naruto grinning at her with his hands behind his back. He walked to her left, his head turned toward her. Tsunade grunted and averted her gaze. "Yes, you did, but it's no fun if I just called you Tsunade-sama." She questioned, "Yeah, well, what do you want, brat?" "I don't want anything more than what I've already asked of you, but what I would like is to know what's bothering you." He paused to think. The seriousness in Naruto's eyes made Tsunade sigh as she met his gaze. "What do you care, brat? All you need is for someone to heal your girlfriend and mom and that's it. You could probably care less what's bothering me," Tsunade replied. Tsunade was shocked when Naruto said, "That's not true. Of course I care. I wouldn't have asked if I didn't care. While it is true that you are coming back to Konoha to heal my mom and girlfriend, you're also part of my family now." Naruto grinned broadly. Tsunade watched Naruto in utter disbelief, unable to speak. She stammered, Family?" Naruto looked ahead and nodded his head. Naruto turned to face her, and she could see a big smile beneath his mask. "Family. You're now part of my family. Why, I have no clue, but you just are. I got this feeling that's telling me that you're part of my family now, Ba-chan," he said, "Sucks for you," before accelerating his pace to catch Jiraiya. Tsunade had remained behind to consider what Naruto had said. Tsunade wiped away the lone tear that had formed on her left eye and asked, "Family huh?" Grinning, she brushed the tear from her index finger. "I like the sound of that." The tear fell on a lone colt's foot without the group noticing, slipping down its yellow petal and onto the ground. With boundless energy, he exclaimed, "Arrow! Senin! Ba-chan! Shizune.ne-chan! Do you see it? Do ya?" Tsunade and Jiraiya both lowered their heads so that only Shizune could hear what they were going to say, and their perspiration fell. In a monotone, they questioned, "Why do you get the normal nickname?" Shizune couldn't help but laugh sheepishly and perspire. They entered Konoha after a few minutes of strolling past Naruto on Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Shizune's parts. Tsunade stepped forward and surveyed Konoha. She gave a sentimental smile. Apart from the area where Shukaku was released and the destruction of a few buildings, not much change. Tsunade looked down as Naruto drew her forward. Naruto halted his speech as his skin turned pale and his senses went into overdrive. "Come on Ba-chan, the hospital's this way. You'll love Hinata. Chan, she's funny, smart. As the presence he had sensed a moment before confirmed his worst fear, he turned his head. Numerous girls yelled, "Naruto!" and hurried over to him. Naruto turned to Tsunade and laughed sheepishly, his perspiration dropping. Using a swirl of wind and leaves, Naruto exclaimed, "Actually, I'll be seeing you, Chan. I got to lose these maniacal girls first and then I'll meet you in the hospital. Bye." As Naruto had done. At least half of his fangirls grinned and carried on looking for the masked blonde-haired genin. Shizune, Jiraiya, and Tsunade looked on in shock and disbelief. Jiraiya swiftly retaliated with a glare from Tsunade. Tsunade questioned, "I thought he said he had only one girlfriend?" Jiraiya gave a quick nod of his head. He does. With her teeth clenched, she questioned, "So why does he have the Kunoichi populace chasing after him?" With an evil gleam in her eyes, Tsunade faced Jiraiya and said, I don't know, I guess he was a very popular kid when he was younger. If I find out you've been teaching the kid more than just jutsus." Jiraiya swiftly responded, forcing Tsunade to back off and accept his response, "I haven't, promise." With a stiff shoulder shrug, she made her way to the hospital. Shizune fell idly behind her master, sweating, "Well, let's go to the hospital, not like anyone else can heal whoever I'm supposed to heal." Tsunade shouted as Jiraiya turned to go. Jiraiya hung his head in defeat and walked beside Shizune as the three of them made their way to the hospital, muttering, "You're coming too, you no good pervert." As he dodged under kunai after kunai, Naruto shouted at the top of his lungs. His fangirls wanted to tie his clothes down or at least slow him down, but they weren't necessarily trying to kill him or anything. Naruto turned around and stopped the kunais as he ran backwards, grabbing the swords behind his back and drawing them out. This further perplexed Naruto as the fangirls squealed. One fangirl exclaimed, "He's so talented. He can block and still run backwards." That was the most foolish thing Naruto had ever heard, and he nearly fell over. He shook his head and resumed his regular running, dodging the swarm of shuriken and kunai. As he began to consider his options, Naruto repeated, gotta think. To make matters worse, he was followed by a horde of Kunoichi fangirls. They were subduing him with deadly force so they could do whatever they wanted with him. They were all in the middle, ranging from low chunin to average genin. Half of the villagers hated him because he was a Jinchuriki, while the other 4 were enamored with him because of his mask and enigmatic demeanor. The indifferent part was becoming more and more appealing to him. In any case, he was also trained in the ways of the immortal and the Sannin Jiraiya, the notorious clan murderer Itachi Uchiha, and the elusive Kakashi Hitaki's pupil. He learned a few things from his third and final teacher, even though the old pervert simply left him to work on the jutsus himself and the lazy and perpetually late sensei didn't really teach him anything. Shutting his eyes, Naruto leapt from the building's roof and dashed into the forest. He grinned as Itachi's words replayed in his mind. Itachi, with his eyes closed and in the lotus position, said, "Stealth, an important term for a shinobi to know and practice." Naruto was also in the lotus position across from him. Itachi held up his hand to silence Naruto, saying, "But not everyone was meant for this and you, Naruto, are one of those people. Yes, you are very stealthy when you need to be, but you are not that type of shinobi. You are more of the heads-on, powerhouse type. This isn't necessarily bad, but it could get you in a tight spot. That is why I am going to teach you a genjutsu. But I don't have the chakra control to handle genjutsus. If I did, I'm pretty sure I'd have a whole arsenal of them along with nin and taijutsu," Itachi chuckled. As he began to explain the basics of the genjutsu, Naruto focused entirely on Itachi. "I know that is why I will show you a genjutsu that doesn't need that much chakra control, just a lot of chakra." As he quickly mastered the hand signals, Naruto thought, time to see if it paid off. Shadow Clone Jutsu. To keep the fangirls from realizing that Naruto had created a clone, a second Naruto materialized in front of the original. The first clone ran past, followed by the crowd of fangirls, while Naruto hid behind a tree. Naruto directed a lot of his chakra into the surroundings using a different set of hand signals. Even though the fangirls stumbled a little, they continued to move forward when they saw Naruto sprinting ahead of them. After witnessing his clone and the fangirls come to a screeching halt, Naruto burst out laughing. As the second genjutsu was locked in place, Naruto made more signs and grinned, saying, "Demonic illusion. Double false surroundings, check. Just to make sure, demonic illusion. Double false surroundings." Naruto pivoted and made his way directly to the hospital. "Hinata-chan, please wait a little while longer, I'll be right over." With a smug expression, Tsunade strode up the fourth-floor hallway of the hospital. The physicians and nurses she went past all paused their work to ensure they weren't insane. The greatest medical nin Konoha has ever produced, Tsunade of the Sannin, had returned. With pride in their friend and master, Shizune and Jiraiya trailed behind her. Shizune and Jiraiya both raised an eyebrow as she abruptly stopped. Shizune inquired, "What's wrong, Tsunade?" "Sama." Tsunade laughed sheepishly and smiled. She confessed, "I don't know where I'm going." Jiraiya had to take responsibility and Shizune started to perspire. Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Shizune finally located the correct room and went inside to examine the person lying in bed. Jiraiya nodded in response to Tsunade's question, "So this is her?" Tsunade nodded her head in agreement as Jiraiya stated, "One of the two people you need to heal. I'm sure by now you know how important it is that she awakens." Tsunade questioned, "So what exactly is wrong with her?" An unidentified nurse entered the room grinning shyly. She hurried out of the room after giving Tsunade a chart. Tsunade glanced at Shizune and Jiraiya, who both gave bewildered shoulder shrugs. When Tsunade finished reading the chart she was given, her eyes widened. With little expectation of a response, she questioned, "And she's still alive after all of this?" When Tsunade turned around, Minato was grinning and had his arms folded across his chest. "What else would you expect from the woman who gave birth to Naruto?" she asked. A few seconds ago, he had his back to the window that was closed. As though she had seen a ghost, Tsunade gazed at him. With a serious expression, he asked, "So can you heal her?" Amid her hysteria, she said, "Why? Yeah, but aren't you supposed to be, well you know, dead?" Minato gave a head nod. For Tsunade, Minato's response was insufficient. "Yes, I am, but after some complications thanks to Orochimaru and some SEAL SG, I'm alive and well now." Minato sighed as she said, "I find that very hard to believe." "Okay, it's like this. Orochimaru used a jutsu to bring me back to life. Afterwards, he tried to use a seal to control me but I was able to overpower it and bend it to my will. While Jiraiya and Naruto went looking for you, I decided to research the seal. I managed to decode the matrix of it and sort of messed it," Minato said with a slight blush on his face. "So now," Jiraiya said, attempting to persuade his pupil to go on. "So now, I basically got my body back. Thanks to the fact that Orochimaru used my original DNA to support my structure, I was able to make it dominant in this body and now it's mine to command, so to speak," Minato said. There was silence in the room. Jiraiya leaned on Tsunade and laughed, breaking the silence. He shouted, "I told you he was a genius." Jiraiya fell on his face as Tsunade grunted as she quickly slipped out from under him. Then she seized Minato and Jiraiya and pushed them from the room. Jiraiya and Minato exchanged glances as Tsunade slammed the door and said, "Be that as it may, I still need both of you to get out of the room so I can start the healing process." "Did she?" Jiraiya nodded in response to Minato's incomplete query. Jiraiya shook his head at this one, asking, "Should we?" Jiraiya shrugged his shoulders and said, "So what?" Minato shook his head and let out a sigh. "Let's go back to my place, at least I'm sure we won't get kicked out there." Jiraiya said, "Actually, now it's called the Uzumaki compound." Jiraiya nodded and said, "What? That woman took my house too." Knowing there was nothing more to say in light of what had just transpired, Jiraiya silently followed Minato, saying, "Whatever, at least I know I bought the house." Minato could only move forward 2 paces after arriving at their house before the icy metal touched his neck and threatened to sever it. Minato shifted his gaze to the left, and a pair of icy cobalt eyes met his own. With a tone of rage, Naruto rhetorically questioned, "Is this some kind of joke?" His voice grew lower and more menacing as he went on, "Is someone really trying to break into my house pretending to be my dad?" A drop of perspiration trickled down Minato's face. He has encountered a horde of skilled shinobi and defeated them all without flinching. Suddenly, though, his own son has managed to take him by surprise and nearly frighten him. With his son refusing to budge, Minato cursed his own negligence and misfortune. His shape was ideal for this kind of circumstance, and he even appeared to have a backup plan in case he needed to escape. "This isn't a joke," Minato interrupted as Naruto pressed harder on his throat. Some skin was broken by Naruto's sword, and a tiny bit of blood trickled down its blade. "You expect me to believe that my father, the 4th Hokage, who sealed the Kyuubi in me and died doing so, came back from the dead because he forgot to get something from his house?" replied Naruto. Naruto jumped away from Minato and avoided the deadly weapon when he heard something moving through the air. Jiraiya glared at Naruto as he looked up. Jiraiya questioned, "What the hell are you doing?" Naruto looked up and scowled at Minato, who had his right hand around his neck, saying, "What's it look like? I'm defending my home." When he took his hand away, Naruto's cut healed fast, leaving no scar behind. Naruto dropped into his battle stance as his glare grew more intense. "This is the first and last time I ask this. Who are you really?" replied Naruto. Minato stated gravely, "I'm your father." He quickly removed his kunai and stopped Naruto's double vertical arcs. Both Minato and Naruto exerted a great deal of pressure on the strike, but they both struggled. After shifting his weight to his left leg, Naruto used his right leg to kick Minato in the stomach. Flying back, Minato landed in the front yard. He rolled back and leapt to his feet, using the momentum from the kick. As Naruto charged at him, he hurled the three-pronged kunai at him. Naruto moved the sword's grip until the blade was pointing down. He noticed the oddity of its structure before he parried it off. It resembled the one the fourth used to make use of the. Behind Naruto, a voice said, "I don't want to hurt you, son." Minato was holding the same kunai that Naruto had thrown against his neck when he turned to look behind him. Before his eyes narrowed and he tossed his swords aside, Naruto's eyes widened. Minato stepped back from Naruto and lowered his kunai slowly. However, Naruto was far from finished. After falling to his knees, he raised his left leg and made contact with Minato's chin. Naruto grabbed a kunai from his pouch and flipped back at the same time. Minato grunted and felt pain shoot up his back as he landed. Then, landing on top of him, Naruto held a kunai in his face, just above his nose. Jiraiya shouted, "Naruto, he really is your father," but Naruto remained motionless. Naruto exclaimed, "How do I know that for sure? How do you arrow, Sennin?" "I am your father," Minato uttered almost audibly. Naruto questioned, "Dad, how did you seal Kyuubi into me?" Minato responded without hesitation, "I used the sealing jutsu, Reaper Death Seal, and used the 8 trigram sealing style to let you access Kyuubi's chakra over time." Naruto's hold on the kunai briefly slipped. "Is the Rasengan a finished form of jutsu?" Still doubting that Minato was his real father, Naruto inquired. "No, why not?" He repeated his response, but Naruto resisted, saying, "Because I planned on adding an element with it, but because of my premature death, I was unable to finish it." "Who is my mom?" Kushina Uzumaki. As each tidbit of information was addressed, Naruto's hold on the kunai weakened until he was unable to keep it upright at all, and he tilted his head forward, covering his eyes with his bangs. With concern, Minato turned to face his son. Naruto lifted his head and wept silently. "Last one, why did you use me? To seal the Kyuubi into?" Too embarrassed to meet Naruto's eyes, Minato turned her head away. "Why your own son?" Since he couldn't face his son with this yet, Minato refused to look at him. Naruto closed his eyes and pushed the kunai forward with a yell. Minato felt nothing touch him, so he closed them again and saw that Naruto was gone. He sat up and noticed that Jiraiya was also looking away from him with a solemn expression on his face. Next to him, Minato saw Naruto's kunai, but his swords were gone. Regardless of who heard him, Minato declared, "I really did it this time." Naruto climbed the hospital's outer wall until he was outside a fourth-floor window, cautiously opened it, and crept into the room, only to turn around and see Tsunade and Shizune standing over Hinata's unconscious body, holding green liquid. Not wanting to cause them any trouble, Naruto waited until they were done before asking what they were doing. Shizune then carefully moved it over to an empty pan and let it drop, and Naruto used this moment of ignorance to wipe the last of the tears from his eyes before frowning when he saw the green liquid remove something black that came out of Hinata. When Shizune noticed Naruto in the room, she wiped some perspiration from her brow, smiled, and went to where he was. With a joyful tone, she said, "Hey Naruto-kun." Naruto raised an eyebrow in response. Shizune. "Chan. Hello. How come Hinata Chan is with you and Ba Chan?" Shizune turned to face Tsunade, who scarcely noticed her absence. "After learning about the substance in Hinata's brain, we assembled the components required to create a unique kind of liquid. With its help, we can carefully remove the agent while also fixing any harm it has caused. To guarantee a full recovery, the agent can be extracted and used to make an antidote or medication that can be administered to the patient. This technique requires the utmost care and ability in diagnosis and incising and unmatched chakra control. Therefore, it is considered an extremely difficult technique, even among medical ninjutsu. That's probably why they need Tsunade Sama and me to heal her," Shizune clarified. Once more, Naruto smiled and nodded, understanding the main idea even though he didn't fully grasp it. Shortly afterward, Tsunade sighed and used her forearm to wipe the perspiration from her head. Without hesitation, Naruto got up and approached Tsunade. Naruto questioned, "So, is she going to be alright?" Tsunade gave him a strange look and then grinned. She approached him and tousled his hair. Naruto grinned broadly and even laughed as he said, "Yeah, she should be fine now. We got the agent out and we should have the antidote ready before tomorrow." Everyone turned to see Hinata's eyes squinting and straining to wake up as they heard moaning sounds behind Tsunade. Tsunade winked and said, "Come on Shizune. I'm sure there are more people who still need our help." Shizune grinned. Naruto watched as they both walked out of the room. He was relieved that Tsunade did not also have to leave Konoha, Shizune. He heard Hinata moan once more before he could come up with another idea. He heard her say, "Naruto-kun," in a shaky voice. With a cup in hand, Naruto hurried into the bathroom and filled it with water. A second later, he emerged and sprinted over to Hinata's side. After placing the water cup on her bedside table, he took a seat in the nearest chair. "Again," she said, "Naruto-kun." Grabbing her right hand, Naruto sandwiched it between his left and right. "It's okay, Hinata. I'm here." Hinata squeezed her eyes shut until they opened on their own. She closed her eyes once more, her vision hazy. Her vision improved when she opened them again. She used her left hand to rub her left eye, but her right hand felt a little stiff. She could hardly see her own hand being restrained by someone else's as she looked down. She glanced up slowly and saw the face of a person with very bright blonde hair. With hesitation, she said, "Naruto-kun?" She rubbed her right eye after Naruto released her right arm. After that, Hinata blinked repeatedly as she turned back to face Naruto. She finally got to see Naruto after a long time, and she grinned. Tears filled her eyes as she said, "Naruto-kun, it is you." She took the cup of water Naruto gave her and drank it. She glanced at Naruto and returned the cup to the nightstand. Even though he was crying a little, his smile was genuine and endearing, just like she remembered. Without saying a word, Naruto walked from the chair to Hinata's bed and gave her a tight hug. Without hesitation, Hinata gave him a hug in return and began to cry in his chest. After allowing her to cry for a few minutes, Naruto took her chin and forced her to look up into his eyes. Hinata was shocked by how much love, happiness, and sorrow she could see in Naruto's blue eyes. They talked about how lonely he felt without her, how sad he was, and how happy and loved he was to see her awake. Hinata's flawless lavender eyes seemed to read Naruto like a book and pierce his very soul, leaving him speechless. Both of them were able to sense each other's pain, joy, and love during the brief moments they spent looking into each other's eyes. Naruto-kun. Before Hinata could finish uttering his name, Naruto pressed his lips to hers. Sorely missing the sensation of his lips perfectly aligned with her own, Hinata closed her eyes and gave him a back kiss. Naruto opened her mouth and nibbled on Hinata's bottom lip, their mouths moving in perfect unison. Hinata opened her mouth and let his tongue in without hesitation. They relished every moment as their tongues moved in time with their perfectly timed heartbeats. Naruto lifted his hand and dabbed at Hinata's eyes and cheeks, wiping away the tears. Their tongues soon became tired, and they realized they would have to take a breather. Reluctant to leave her lips, Naruto began to break the kiss slowly. With Naruto in a similar state, Hinata began to pant, gasping for air. The words, "I love you," came out of his exhausted voice. Grinning, Hinata gave Naruto a tight embrace. That's when Naruto broke down and began crying on Hinata's shoulder, saying, "I love you too Naruto-kun." Hinata comforted him by patting his back as he tightened his grip. "I thought I would have lost you Hinata-chan, I swear I did. For a while, I thought you weren't going to wake up and I would have followed you." Naruto acknowledged. "If you weren't here with me Hinata-chan, I would have made sure I'd follow you." Naruto went on. Hinata touched his cheek tenderly. Before Hinata pushed it back slightly and gave Naruto a face slap, Naruto leaned into it. Naruto gave Hinata a startled look. Her eyes were back there, sad and angry. As more tears spilled out of their captivity, she said, "Don't ever say that, please don't. Promise me if I die, you won't kill yourself." "Hinata-chan," she shouted, "promise me." "No," he retorted. Naruto kissed her tenderly and then laid his forehead against hers. "I won't because you know just as much as I do that you'd do the same for me. If I died, I'm sure you'd do the same. No matter if I wouldn't want you to, I know you enough to know that you would anyway. If you can promise me that if I die, you won't follow, then I'll do the same." After a moment, Hinata turned her attention away and then back to his eyes. She shook her head slowly. She said, I can't do it." Naruto kissed her again, this time for a longer duration. After taking a breath, he said, "I know, and as much as I don't want you to, I know you'd do it." Naruto moved beside Hinata and lay down on the bed with her, drawing her closer to him. When she looked at the clock and saw that it was 7 minutes to 8 o'clock, she did her best not to yawn. He had his eyes closed when she looked up at him. Hinata cuddled his chest and grinned. "Hinata-chan?" inquired Naruto. She said. "Are you sleepy?" Hinata yawned and nodded wearily. Naruto laughed and started to stand up, but Hinata restrained him. "What is it, Hinata-chan?" Hinata blushed and began using her left index finger to draw circles on his chest. Naruto's smile widened as she said, I was wonder if you could stay with me tonight. He took the covers from underneath them and covered them, saying, "Of course, Hinata-chan." After finding a comfortable position, Hinata and Naruto fell asleep together, holding each other close. Tsunade entered after a while to find Naruto and Hinata smiling and sleeping together. She sighed and shut the door after smiling and deciding she couldn't bring herself to wake the two teenagers. Heishi appeared somewhat disappointed, or so Tsunade assumed, but his expression returned to its typical stoic one. "I think you should come at a later time, Heishi-san. She's terribly tired and is currently sleeping." Tsunade nodded her head in agreement as he said, "I see. Can I come back tomorrow then?" Then Heishi bowed and walked away, saying, "Good evening, Tsunade-sama." Certain that Kushina was awake by now, Tsunade bowed back and approached her. Hinata shivered as she woke up startled. Naruto tightened his hold on her side, drawing her in. Hinata noticed that she was in the hospital when she looked around. She also noticed that she was still in Naruto's arms, with both of their left legs intertwined and her left side directly over his left. He was staring down at her when she looked up at him. He questioned, "What's wrong, Hinata?" She swallowed and flushed. She stammered, I'm sorry I woke you up, and Naruto-kun." He repeated, "Forget about it, so what's wrong?" Heaving a sigh, Hinata laid her head on his chest. She said, "I had a nightmare." He said, "Oh, about what?" She went on, "That you died, trying to protect me." He inquired, "Did I protect you?" She blushed more deeply and said, "Why? Yes." All Naruto could do was smile like a fox. He kissed the top of her head and said, "Even in your dreams, I'll be there to make sure you're safe." Naruto saw that she still had more on her mind when he began drawing circles on his chest once more. "Is there something you want to talk about?" Actually, there is." Hinata landed on top of Naruto, with only her long, indigo hair touching the bed. When Naruto felt her breast prod his chest, he flushed violently. He concentrated on Hinata, ignoring his inappropriate thoughts. She said, "Why? You love me, right?" She grinned as he gave her a gentle peck on the lips and said, "Of course, even when in death's door, I will continue to love you." Naruto nodded, saying, "And you know I love you, right? Naruto-kun, I want to go to the next level." Uncertain of her meaning, he asked, "Next level? Hinata turned her head away, her face a deep red. Naruto's face became shocked and his blush darkened like Hinata's as he said, I want to go all the way, with you and only you." Hinata-chan, ARUS. "Sure? This is a big step?" he inquired. Hinata merely gave a nod. Naruto recalled believing Hinata had passed away. "In my dream, Naruto-kun, I realized, we can die in any mission we receive, whether or not it's a simple C rank or an S rank. Remember how dangerous our first C rank mission was?" He prayed that it wouldn't occur again. "I don't want to go out on missions with regrets. I want my first time to be with you, Naruto-kun." She admitted it. Naruto was struggling with himself. On the one hand, he shared her desire to do it. He was aware that they had acknowledged the possibility of death while performing their duties as Konoha shinobi when they decided to follow the shinobi's path. In light of this, they were also aware that they might never return home, leaving behind their loved ones and belongings. His chances of dying were even higher than those of regular shinobis, especially when you consider that a group of S-rank rogue shinobis were pursuing him because of the being ceiling inside of him. He didn't have much time to enjoy a leisurely life, and if he didn't take advantage of this chance, he might not do so in the future. But he didn't want to rush things either. What would he do if he got Hinata pregnant if they went all the way? Then what? He would be despised by her father and clan, who might even force her to forsake the unborn child and wed her to a stranger. Even if it were his last resort, he would not allow that to occur. Naruto-kun, she called out his name, jolting Naruto out of his reverie. He gazed up into lavender eyes that begged, "Please." Warning. Lemon. After another moment of hesitation, Naruto gave Hinata a passionate kiss on the lips. He licked her lower lip, opening his mouth. She let him inside, and her tongue battled his for supremacy. She took hold of his blonde hair and combed through it. Naruto rolled over so he was on top of her as they fought for control. He began attacking her neck after breaking the kiss. He spoke in a tired tone as he took a brief break. As Naruto began kissing her neck once more, Hinata groaned and grinned gleefully, saying, "I will do this only because you asked for it, my Heim." He began massaging her slender stomach as his hands moved down her hospital gown. As his fingers moved over her skin, she felt a spark that made her shiver. They began massaging both breasts after moving upward. As he persisted in attacking her breast, Hinata let out a loud moan. Naruto had an idea and began to make hand signals before placing his hand on the wall in front of him. Hinata blushed and nodded her head, saying, "I put a silencing jutsu over the room so no one, well, you know, hears us." In order to lock the door, Naruto then created a shadow clone and then scattered. Naruto proceeded to take off Hinata's hospital gown after everything was finished. Hinata raised her hands to facilitate its removal. Naruto used his left hand to seize both of her wrists and hold them over her head before she could put them down. Hinata had to bite her lip to keep the exotic groan from escaping her lips as she flushed. Naruto began kissing her all the way from the base of her breast to her collarbone. Naruto moved his mouth over Hinata's right breast and began sucking on it while using his free hand to knead her left breast while she was using both hands. She found it more difficult to control her groaning as he licked around her nipple and occasionally nibbled on it affectionately. Naruto smiled as he kept licking Hinata's breast, but Hinata couldn't contain her groaning and let it out louder. Naruto swapped his left hand for his right, kneading Hinata's right breast with his now free left hand while using his mouth to take in her other breast. Naruto was more than pleased to provide Hinata with the treatment she was enjoying. He took her left breast out of his mouth and blew lightly at the moist area. Hinata's back arched as her senses were awakened by the novel experience. She was obviously out of breath when she said, "Ah, Naruto-kun, don't stop." Naruto blew at her nipple once more while grinning. She let out another moan, and Naruto couldn't help but notice that his pants were getting smaller. Then, with both hands still above her head, Naruto took hold of her wrists and gave her another kiss. Hinata put her tongue in his mouth and gave him a hungry kiss in return this time. A new battle broke out in Hinata's mouth as Naruto, never one to be outdone, retaliated with his own tongue. In order to remember how smooth Hinata's skin was, Naruto moved his hands slowly down her arms and down to her body. He then cupped her breasts and rubbed against them again. With a whine of pleasure, Hinata gave Naruto permission to subdue her and end the kiss. Hinata appeared to be about to faint from the excitement and was breathing heavily. Naruto grinned as he lowered his mouth to her ear. As Naruto descended to her womanhood, Hinata felt her heartbeat quicken. "Hang on, my Heim, we're not done yet." The scent of her sweet juice on her sky-blue underwear assaulted Naruto's nostrils as he slowly separated her legs. A sigh of satisfaction went through his nose and his heart began to beat faster. Naruto pushed her legs apart a bit more and kissed her inner thigh on both sides. As his kisses approached her womanhood, Hinata groaned. Naruto took off Hinata's underwear after giving her a final kiss over them and gaped at her incredible figure. Naruto felt ecstatic and fortunate as it lay before him in all its splendor. The moonlight shining through the open window only made her creamy skin glisten with his saliva and a little of her perspiration. Her skin's texture and softness were beckoning to him, pleading for his approval. Naruto's gaze was fixed on her amazing body, and he rubbed her legs absently. Hinata asked, a little uneasy about him looking at her in that way, "En, Naruto-kun?" She thought he was attempting to pass judgment on her or something. Naruto looked her in the eyes and blushed. I'm sorry, Hinata. I was just admiring your body," he said. Hinata grinned broadly and Naruto sighed once more as she said, "But it still can't compare to the beauty of your eyes. Hold on." Naruto licked the exterior fluids from Hinata's entrance after moving in front of it. Hinata's back stiffened as she gasped with pleasure. Until the majority of her fluids were gone, Naruto kept licking her. After finishing that, Naruto put his mouth on her lower lips and continuously moved his tongue up and down them. Hinata groaned as the whole of her was overcome by this new sensation. Grabbing the pillow behind her head, she arched her back. After some time, Naruto pressed his tongue into her, continuously brushing and tasting her inner walls. Hinata's back reached higher levels, and her moan grew louder. Naruto raised his hands, which had nothing to do with it, and each groped her butt. He kneaded, squeezed, pushed, and even lightly slapped them with his hands. Hinata felt herself getting closer to her climax and bit her lip. In an attempt to delay the inevitable and give herself even more pleasure, she put her legs around his head. Hinata was beginning to shout Naruto's name aloud while panting. Before she could finish, she had already reached her climax. Naruto. K.kun. I feel like, she attempted to say. She screamed, Naruto. Kun. As she passed over Naruto's mouth. After licking his lips, Naruto used his tongue to wipe her away. Even though Hinata was already worn out, she still had the energy to complain while Naruto did his best to clean her womanhood. Lemon End. When he was done, Naruto stood up to help Hinata put on her hospital gown, which had been sloppily thrown aside. Naruto watched as Hinata's chest rose and fell while her eyes were half closed. With another smile, he gently put on her hospital gown. She gave him a drowsy glance before opening her eyes fully. N. Naruto.kun, A. Aren't you going T.to? Naruto shook his head and stopped her by placing his index finger on her lips. No, I'm not, Hinata. Hime. He took his finger off, and Hinata was only able to observe him sharing her bed. As he brought her body closer to him by placing his right hand on the small of her back, he added, at least, not this time. Unconsciously, she placed her right hand over his chest and began to silently massage her back. But Naruto.kun, don't you want to? Naruto cut in, I just want you to be happy, my Hime. But what if, as Naruto put it, it won't happen? I promise you, Hinata. Hime. I will always be there for you, to protect you and make sure you are out of harm's way. And if I should die doing so, I will wait faithfully in the dark until your arrival. Whether you follow me right away, like I'm guessing you would, or live and continue moving forward, like I want you to. Naruto gave Hinata another kiss, full of innocence and love. Naruto closed his eyes and grinned, saying, and don't worry, Hinata. Hime, we'll have enough time to finish up what we started here. With her eyes as big as saucers, Hinata looked up and said, I have plans for us and the major one I'm working on is marrying you. Without pausing, Naruto nodded, why? You want to marry, M.Me? Yup. I plan on making you my wife and even having some kids, said Naruto. Hinata had no words to express her shock. When Naruto saw this, he gave her a direct look. Hinata snapped out of her daze and turned to face him. Hinata. Hime, she said. When I say, I love you, I mean I love you. I don't say it just to make myself feel better, I don't say it because I feel obligated. I say it because it's true, I say it because that's how I feel. I plan on making you my wife, unless of course, you don't want to be, he said with a solemn voice. Hinata began to worry that she might lose him permanently if she didn't speak up right away. She blushed, but she made herself maintain eye contact. I love you too, Naruto.kun, and, she said. Naruto grinned and reclined on his pillow, saying, I'd be very happy to be your wife and maybe have our own kids. Hinata gave him a weary smile before feeling her eyelids heavy and closing. Someday, Hinata. Hime. Someday we will. After giving Naruto a hug, she started to lose consciousness. Hinata had one final thought before the siren call of sleep put her to sleep, and Naruto was already asleep. I will be anticipating that day, Naruto.kun. A brand new day had begun. The sun shone so brightly over Konoha that no living thing could continue to sleep, and the birds joyfully twitched their morning songs. The same was true of Kushina Uzumaki. She pulled her covers over her head and moaned as she turned her head away from the sun. She detested the sunlight when she woke up. Now that the world would have to deal with the fear of an enraged Kushina, she would much rather wake up whenever she wants and be happier. Kushina heaved her covers and sighed in anger before sitting up and rubbing her eyes wearily. She jumped out of bed, shifting her legs to the side, but her legs gave way abruptly, causing her to fall forward. Shutting her eyes, she braced herself for the blow. As muscular arms encircled her body, Kushina made contact with a warm, soft object rather than the hard, cold floor. When she raised her head, Minato's face was grinning back at her. Kushina's pale skin turned red, and she was powerless to stop it. Minato's cerulean eyes vanished behind his eyelids as his smile grew. He teased, there's that blush. Kushina sulked and pushed herself away from him, but she grunted as she fell back on the bed due to her leg's current state. She sat up again and muttered something incoherent under her breath. Minato continued to smile smugly, and Kushina experienced a mixture of happiness and rage. She detested the moody, erratic person she was in the morning. Minato was always so damn happy, and that was the only reason he hadn't left her. After just staring at each other, Kushina's perspiration stopped and Minato's smile remained unwavering. Where on earth does he get the energy to wake up feeling so incredibly joyful? As she got to her feet and steadied herself, she asked. Minato approached her and gave her a passionate kiss. Although that was her moody side, Kushina wanted to push him away, curse at him, and go back to sleep. Minato was kissed back by her more composed side. As his tongue attacked her tongue and pierced her defenses, she groaned. Kushina's head felt dizzy after she had stopped breathing. She mentally cursed and shook it off. She questioned whether she was truly so unpracticed that she couldn't even kiss her husband without feeling dizzy. According to Minato, morning. Even though she was exhausted, Kushina couldn't help but smile as she looked at him. As he gazed at her body, Kushina saw a tiny trickle of blood trickle down his nose and Minato's face flushed abruptly. "Morning, so what's going on?" he asked. "What?" she asked, and a sudden gust of wind behind her informed her of the precise situation. When she looked down, she noticed that her hospital gown had somehow fallen off, exposing her entire body. As Kushina picked up the hospital gown and put it back on, her blush darkened. "Well, your hospital gown fell off, for starters." As her patience wore thin, she said, "What do you want, Minato-kun?" With the exception of their son, she adored the man above all else, but he could be quite annoying when he avoided talking about it. Kushina stiffened as his words sank into her consciousness. "Nothing. I just wanted to visit my wife after she'd been sleeping for, a month or so." Minato nodded his head and said, A month? I've been asleep for that long?" she inquired. "Where's Naruto-kun?" Unsurprised by the abruptness of the question, Minato dismissed it as maternal instinct and turned his head away as he approached her. He responded with a small hesitancy that could be easily missed. "He's good." But Kushina was the type of person who didn't let anything get lost. She put both hands on her hips and raised an eyebrow. Asking, "What's wrong?" She was suspicious and worried because Minato wasn't looking at her. "Did something happen while I was asleep?" she inquired. Minato grinned and said, "Sort of, at least now Naruto-kun knows I'm alive." However, Kushina saw through it and recognized his anguish and regret. She looked around the room for her clothes and said, "I'm guessing your first encounter with him wasn't as happy as you'd thought it'd go." Minato sighed and shook his head. He sat on a nearby chair and remarked, "I didn't expect it to be happy, just not as violent." After halting her search, Kushina turned to face Minato in disbelief. Minato placed his head on his palm as it rested against the armrest and said, "Don't worry. He's fine and so am I. I just didn't expect him to react the way he did, or at least, as violent as he did." His voice was sunk into a deep depression as he said, "I'm a horrible father. Not only did I seal Kyuubi into my own son, I can't even stop a fight from ensuing in my own home." Kushina saw him regret his previous behavior and scowled. She approached him, put his head on her shoulder, and sat in his lap. "You're not a horrible father. You did what you had to, and that was to make sure that not only the village but your family remained safe from Kyuubi's rampage. The only way you could have done that was sealing it into Naruto. While I'm not really crazy about our son having the greatest tailed beast, besides the Jubi, sealed within him, I understand that because of the circumstances, it had to be done." Kushina gave him a kiss before running her fingers through his locks. Minato smiled and said, "Thank you. Also, Minato-kun." Kushina laughed and said, "It's not your house anymore." Minato put his arms around her waist and sighed. "That's what Jiraiya told me. So when exactly did you buy it?" he inquired. Kushina began to twirl some of his hair in her finger while giggling once more. Minato slowly nodded his head, wondering where his wife was taking this. "A week before Naruto-kun was born. You remember that one morning while you were working and were so tired you fell asleep for an hour or so?" Minato asked. She smiled sheepishly and said, "Well, I snuck in and made you sign some paperwork that legally made me the owner of the house." Still in shock over what his wife had done, Minato said softly, "Why would you do that?" Kushina looked everywhere but Minato's eyes as she shifted around in his lap. "Well, it's like this. To get to the Hyuga compound, Kushina, Haruka, and Kakashi strolled down the deserted road. As Kushina and Haruka giggled and held each other from falling, Kakashi sighed. As Haruka stammered something in an attempt to communicate with Kushina, he shook his head. Both were clearly intoxicated and unable to distinguish between the ground and the sky. Inquiring as to how a 15-year-old Anbu was assigned to escort two inebriated women, Kakashi said, "Will you both be quiet for a moment please?" He was sweating and felt both women's inebriated breath on his neck. The voice was slurred as Kushina said, "Ah, come on Kakashi-kun, lighten up." Haruka drank more sake directly from the bottle and nodded in agreement. Haruka slurred, "Hey Kushina-chan, wasn't your anniversary with Minato-kun yesterday?" Which caused Kushina's face to twist into a contemplative pose. Kushina said, "Yes, at least, I think it was. What's today?" In a deadpan voice, Kakashi said, "October the 3rd. He was aware that neither would recall, and he didn't want to experience the hysterics that he knew would ensue if Kushina and Haruka attempted to do so. Kushina ruffled his hair and said, "Right, thanks Kakashi-kun." He mumbled something about getting his sensei back for this while he moaned and straightened his hair. As Haruka put it, "So what did you do?" Kushina put her index finger to her lower lip and giggled. "Well, Kakashi interrupted, saying, "Did absolutely nothing." Kushina gave him a strange look before frowning. The walking scarecrow's right. That jerk didn't do anything with me. He didn't even buy me a present, she screamed. Sweat fell from the walking scarecrow's face. Was she truly so inebriated that she thought he was a scarecrow? He didn't really want to hear an answer, so he was fortunate not to say it aloud. Did you get him anything? Kushina swayed her hips and boasted, of course, I got him the best gift a woman can give a man, if you catch my drift. You know, a little boom. Boom. Pow! With a flush, Kakashi covered both eyes with his headband. Haruka snapped her fingers together after giggling. Haruka said, you should get him back, which caused Kushina to smile and Kakashi to moan. She put her hand on her chin in a contemplative position and asked herself, you're right. But what should I do? Haruka gave her a quick glance before emulating her posture and formulating a strategy of her own. Kakashi grinned beneath his mask as he pulled his headband over his head. The scarecrow thought, perfect. When Kakashi ran out of things to do to Minato, he stopped midway through the idea. Why not steal his home, prank him every day and, well, he said. The faces of Haruka and Kushina glowed like a Christmas tree. Laughing drunkenly, Haruka exclaimed, that's perfect. After you take the house away from him, you can kick him out. Kushina lifted her sake bottle into the air and nodded in agreement. She exclaimed, that sounds perfect. After toasting to the plan, Kushina and Haruka drank more sake, but Kakashi merely grinned. Kakashi thought, that will teach you to make me walk drunks home. Minato was at a loss for words. He was simply stunned that his own student had conspired against him in addition to Haruka and Kushina. He narrowed his eyes and made a mental note to bring Kakashi back later. Kushina could only laugh sheepishly, wondering what else she had done while intoxicated. Lighten up Minato-kun, it's not like I would have kicked you out, that was just the sake talking, she replied. Minato raised the brow of his left eye. He questioned, so why do you own my house? She shrugged her shoulders and replied, I was still drunk when I snuck into your office and made you sign the paper. With a sigh, Minato clutched his head in agony. The question he posed was rhetorical. Why'd I put up with you? Before Kushina saw him smile, she felt hurt. She took hold of his chin and grinned too. She forced him to look at her with a sensual smile. When she saw him blushing violently, she forced herself to stay straddling him and fought the urge to laugh. Then she reached down to his chest with her hands. She forced him to stand by grabbing his collar and pushing him back, causing him to fall back onto the bed behind him. Kushina straddled his lap once more, climbing on top of him like a predator would its victim. She felt a bump go by her inner thigh this time, and she giggled. The bump she had felt earlier hit her again as she said in a seductive voice, if you want, I can show you why you put up with me. Sweat trickled down Minato's head as she giggled. Kushina began to rub Minato's shoulders and said sweetly, why Minato? Sama, why are you so tense? Minato stammered out a sentence, but it was ineffective because he was already captivated. As some of her skin touched his, Kushina laughed once more. He was utterly enthralled and hypnotized, and she was now free to enjoy herself. Kushina gave him a shy look and bit her index finger gently before adding, it's okay Minato. Sama, I can help you remove some of your tension if that is your wish. That was the final nail in the coffin. As his instincts took over, Minato's will and conscious thoughts vanished, and he pulled Kushina down for a passionate kiss. With a start, Naruto sat up shrewdly. Sweat trickled down his brow as he glanced around the room. He noted that the hospital room was still where he was. He saw 2 chairs for each bed and a cleanly made bed across from him. Additionally, he saw that the bathroom door and the exit door were still closed. As Naruto examined the state of his body, an idea struck him. What on earth had brought him to the hospital? Naruto looked up and got to his feet when he heard a flush coming from the restroom. He approached the bathroom cautiously, and when it opened, he stepped back. With a sigh, Hinata went outside with her eyes closed. Then Naruto recalled his purpose for being there, and a flashback of what had happened the night before flashed through his mind. After he and Hinata exchanged glances, he turned red and turned his head away. Even though Hinata turned red and turned her head away, she continued to approach Naruto. She was within arm's reach when Naruto looked up, so he extended his arm to embrace her. Still somewhat inebriated, he said, "Good morning Hinata. How'd you? Asleep?" Hinata stood on her toes, trying not to topple over, and grinned. She kissed him once on the lips and then embraced him. Curling her cheek against his shirt, she said, "Thank you Naruto-kun." Naruto gave her a perplexed glance. "What do you mean Hinata? What are you thanking me for?" he inquired. After that, Naruto sensed Hinata relying more on him until she was no longer even able to support herself. She grinned at Naruto as he picked her up in bridal style. She hugged Naruto closer and said, I'm sorry, I guess my muscles are still a little weary. And I'm thanking you for yesterday. And not for doing what you did, but for not doing what I asked of you, she responded. Hinata nodded when he said, I still don't. Oh, you mean for not going all the way? Hinata blushed violently and turned her head away as she said, I was being rash last night. It was just, the idea of you dying was too much and the fact that we've never done much more than kiss wasn't helping. Please don't misunderstand me Naruto-kun. I truly love you and wouldn't not regret making love to you. I just wasn't thinking clearly and if you would have listened to me, I probably would have gotten pregnant. Hinata gave a wide grin as she gazed up at Naruto nodded his head in response to her question, but you already knew that didn't you? You already thought about the downsides with going all the way with me didn't you? I also knew that you and I weren't ready, at least to go all the way. The level we went to was appropriate, at least for someone of our age and besides that, you weren't in condition for it. You've just woken up from a month-long coma and such stress on your heart might have caused it to shut down. Naruto continued. After giving another nod, Hinata lay back in Naruto's embrace. Naruto laughed when she said, I wonder how many girls can say that their boyfriends said no to sex. Naruto opened the window of the room and stepped on top of the windowsill, saying, me too, but how about we get you dressed, we can talk more about that later. Hinata tensed and grabbed his shirt. Looking down, she said, Naruto. K.kun. What or why you doing? She was a little taken aback by the height but quickly got used to it. He asked as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, taking you on a date, what else? Despite blushing, Hinata shook her head. Naruto shrugged his shoulders in response to her statement, but I wasn't released yet. I do it all the time and besides if anything happens, I'll be here for you. She tried to deter Naruto from asking her out on a date by saying, but I'm not even dressed yet. The fact that she wasn't dressed for a date was more of an issue than the fact that she didn't want to. He jumped back into the room and went to her bed, saying, oh, hey, right. Tsunade was seen behind the door with her index finger forward as the room's door exploded off its hinges before he could take any further action. Hinata buried her face in Naruto's chest and, eeped. Naruto and Hinata were standing close to the bed when Tsunade turned to look around the room. As she walked into the room, she said, I see you two are awake, good. Tsunade took the first 3 and then stopped, looking at something on the floor. She refrained from bringing it up immediately and instead chose to smile. Naruto exclaimed, what the hell Chan? As Hinata tried to recall who the woman reminded her of, she looked up and squinted her eyes. Tsunade was next to Naruto and flicked his forehead at a speed that only a ninja could achieve. Naruto frowned and stepped back. Although she wasn't yet shouting, she exclaimed, I told you not to call me that brat, loudly. She questioned suspiciously, and no one told you to lock the door. Why was it locked anyways? Both Naruto and Hinata tensed, but Naruto recovered first. Naruto blushed and replied, because I didn't want anyone interrupting Hinata while she slept. Tsunade turned to face Hinata, who gave her a nod. Hinata suddenly recognized the person she was staring at. She exclaimed in surprise, are you Tsunade? Tsunade of the Sanin? Tsunade put her hands on her hips and closed her eyes, grinning. Hinata gave Tsunade a slow nod when she said, yes I am and by the way I see the brat holding you. I'd have to guess that you were Hinata, am I right? I heard so much about you. Why? You have? Inquired Hinata. It was always, Hinata. Chan this and, Hinata. Chan that, he wouldn't shut up about you. Tsunade said, making Hinata feel warm inside and making Naruto blush and uneasy. Yup, it's hard not to when you hang around the brat all the time. Naruto nodded his head rapidly and placed Hinata back on her bed, saying, by the way, brat, your mom's awake and she wants to talk to you, right now. While Naruto was covering her with the covers, Hinata stole a kiss from his lips. Grinning, Naruto walked out of the room and disappeared. On the floor, Tsunade walked to the door and replaced it. Tsunade stood across Hinata's bed and remarked, you're lucky to have someone as devoted to you as him. Hinata shook her head and her eyes widened in surprise as she asked, did you know he faced my old teammate just to make sure I came here to heal you? Tsunade shook her head and grinned. Tsunade leaned down and picked up a piece of clothing that was lying close to the edge of the bed, saying, don't take that kid for granted, trust me. Oh and Hinata. Chan. Tsunade held Hinata's underwear up by the tips of her fingers and said, mind explaining to me why this is here? After blushing the deepest shade of red, Hinata pulled her covers over the lower portion of her face. Tsunade raised an eyebrow and chuckled to herself at her expression. Well, I'm waiting. Naruto pondered his actions as he stood outside his mother's room. Naruto started to open the door but stopped when he noticed Minato giving him a serious look in return. Not with animosity or hatred, but with seriousness and perhaps some remorse. Naruto returned the look with equal solemnity. Naruto took another step forward, bracing himself for anything. The only thing Minato said was, "Morning, Naruto." Naruto sneered but took no further action. He inquired, "What do you want?" When Minato shook his head, he was perplexed. "It's not what I want but what your mother wants," he replied. The door slammed behind him as if he had received his response to the question, "Where is she?" He saw his mother with her arms folded across her chest and a look of indifference on her face. Moving Naruto to Minato, Kushina said, "Sit down, Naruto-kun, we need to talk, as a family." Despite his best efforts, Naruto was unable to break free from her grip. Then she made her take a seat on a chair 2 feet away from the Minato. He had taped down the ends of his blue shirt and pants, which he wore over his Jonin jacket. When Naruto looked up, he noticed that his mother was dressed in a blood-red shirt and Anbu black pants. As he relaxed in his mother's hold, Naruto let out a sigh. "Fine. So what's there to talk about?" he inquired. Kushina and Minato exchanged glances and nodded. Minato inquired, "What's bothering you, Naruto?" Naruto couldn't resist giving him a scowl. Being so mean to someone he had never even met before was against his nature, but it was also the reason he was upset. Since he was his father, he should have supported him, but instead he kills himself and seals the Kyuubi within him. Naruto heard Kyuubi say, "Calm down, kid. I'd like you to listen to them." Naruto pondered, "Not you too," but he heard no further response. He snarled and shifted around in his chair. At last, Naruto replied, "You are." This response made Minato sad, but she kept it to herself. Naruto-kun. How dare you say that to your... Minato and Kushina were startled when Naruto yelled, "Don't you dare finish that sentence." He went on, "Don't call this man my father." Kushina retorted, "First of all, you don't yell at me, and second, this man is your father." Naruto took a slight step back, but he didn't give up. In frustration, Naruto screamed, "No he isn't, Ero. Sennin was more of a father than he was. Even that lazy sensei of mine was more of a father to me." They were curious as to what was troubling him. Did they wish to speak? Naruto was okay with that. "I was treated more like a father by Iruka. Sensei, Itachi. Sensei, Ero. Sennin, and Kakashi. Sensei than by this man, who sealed my fate with Kyuubi. I endured the enmity of the village, was frequently beaten, received spoiled food, and was even overcharged for it. My teachers ignored me because of my inner Kyuubi, so I had to learn things on my own. I discovered that family is there for you no matter what. While the mother took care of the entire family, the father is the one who provides for and protects the family. Growing up, I had neither." As he continued to discuss the delicate subject, Naruto's sadness and rage reached new heights. Naruto sobbed and buried his face in his hands as he said, "I already forgive you, Mom, for not being there, but if Dad hadn't sealed Kyuubi in me, I wouldn't have suffered as much as I did. So tell me, why me? Why did you seal Kyuubi in me?" Minato was unable to meet Naruto's gaze once more as he asked his father, and Naruto snarled. His answers were on the way. Minato was slammed against the wall by Naruto, who leapt from his chair and grabbed him by the throat. "Reply to me." His nails grew longer and sharper, and Minato still didn't respond immediately, instead staring at the floor as he yelled, his eyes turning red and ferocious like his fangs. "Because..." Minato's right eye squinted in pain as a grunt came out of his mouth as Naruto reared the hand that was holding him back and slammed it back against the wall. "Observe me." Minato looked up and his eyes met Naruto's teary, red, slitted, angry, sad, and hurt eyes as he demanded. "Because I was unable to ask another parent to take my place. As the Hokage, it was my responsibility to safeguard not only the village but also my own family. How could I expect anyone else to do what I have done if I am unwilling to do it myself?" Minato responded, and Naruto sneered as he released his grip on his throat. Minato collapsed to the ground and held his throat as Naruto retreated, wiping away his tears. With his head down and his bangs covering his eyes, Naruto said, "That's not a good enough reason." He went to the door and opened it without going outside, then took one last look at his father as his mother helped him up and said, "I hate you. I don't think I can ever forgive you." He then walked out of the room and slammed the door shut. Minato's world was shattered by those 8 words. "I detest you, and I doubt that I will ever be able to forgive you." Like Naruto, Minato stood up straight, his head forward, his bangs over his eyes, and silent tears trickled down his face as Kushina, her own tears streaming down her cheek, comforted Minato with an embrace. "Don't worry, Minato-kun. I have faith that he will be able to forgive you in the future." In an attempt to console Minato, Kushina remarked, "I think he just needs time for now." Minato whispered in a broken voice, I failed as a father." Kushina held him closer and prayed for a miracle, anything to help her family. Naruto was sitting outside the room with his back to the wall, his knees up against his chest, and his head buried in his crossed arms on top of his knees. Naruto.kun. When Naruto looked up, he saw a worried Hinata wearing a blue long-sleeve shirt with dark lavender capris. She slid down slowly until she was beside him, and he automatically tipped his head to the left, exactly on top of her shoulder. "Are you okay?" Naruto shook his head in response to her question. "Want to discuss it?" Once more, Naruto shook his head. Naruto nodded his head and placed his hands around her neck, saying, "It's okay, I'm sure you'll tell me when you're ready." He said, "Thanks Hinata. You're always there for me." Hinata grinned and gave Naruto a side hug with her right hand. After a week, it seemed that simply being associated with Naruto made life a bit more complicated than it should be, and Hinata was walking down the Konoha shopping district with a bag of groceries and a frown on her face. She closed her eyes and let out a half-hearted sigh. She didn't let that deter her. The love and affection he showed her outweighed all the difficulties that followed, and she smirked instead of frowning. With her right hand, Hinata pushed the stray strand of indigo hair back behind her left ear as she glanced up at the sky and saw the passing clouds move in front of the sun, forming a giant shade that covered most of Konoha. A slight breeze blew by, carrying Hinata's hair in its direction. Turning around, Hinata saw a woman with a blood-red shirt, black anbu pants, a katana tied to the pants, and black shinobi shoes. Her long, red hair moved past her shoulders and onto her back as she stood, and her light blue eyes gazed at Hinata without emotion. "Hinata-chan. Have you seen or heard from Naruto-kun yet?" "Hinata-chan?" Kushina asked in a monotone, and Hinata became concerned because of the emotionlessness of her tone. Although it sounded normal and serious, Kushina was anything but, and Hinata knew that she was in a panic and worried about the safety of her only child. Hinata sadly shook her head, but Naruto had mysteriously vanished the same day his father and mother confronted him and he yelled at them. "I apologized to Kushina-san, but Naruto-kun hasn't gotten back to me." With her bangs covering her eyes and her shoulders beginning to twitch, Hinata said, "But I can't help it, I can't help worry for him." She tried to hold back her tears as she focused on the concrete floor, and Kushina's eye dulled. "He sent me a letter a few days ago saying he was okay and not to worry." Kushina forced a smile and said, "It's okay, Hinata-chan, I'm sure he'll show up soon. In any case, I have to leave, I'm sure Tsunade-sama has some missions to keep me busy. Goodbye." Kushina put on her anbu mask and vanished in a rush of wind and leaves. Hinata watched her leave and carried on, but she stopped when a new wind gust appeared in front of her. Before her, an anbu knelt with his head down, dressed in standard anbu garb except for the hood over his head. "Hyuga-san, I apologize for troubling you, but have you noticed Kushina-chan around here?" the anbu inquired. "You simply didn't see her." Hinata responded, and the anbu nodded his head. She had mentioned that Hokage-sama had given her a mission. "Thank you." The anbu then departed, heading to find Kushina. Hinata's eyes hardened as she moved forward, feeling terrible because she had no right to lie to Kushina in the way she had, but she knew that what she had done had to be done. As she passed random Konoha residents, she saw a sullen Sasuke strolling in the same direction as her. She approached him and called his name, but he didn't respond. In fact, he accelerated his pace, which confused Hinata. Had she done something to offend the Uchiha? She was soon drawn to the great stone faces, the Hokage monument, and in particular, the fourth Hokage. She felt a twinge of pain when she recalled Naruto telling her about his own father enclosing the greatest of the nine-tailed beast in him. She felt pity for her Naruto. The poor guy had been through a lot in his life, and meeting the man who made the entire village hate him must be weighing heavily on his mind. As she walked through the forest to a river, Hinata shook her head. Still thinking about Naruto and his family problem, she followed the river downstream until it came to a dead end at a giant lake. Using her chakra, Hinata crossed the lake and returned to shore, walking up to a giant rock. Hinata inhaled deeply, exhaled in a sigh, and then stepped forward and through the rock, smiling as she emerged into the hidden cave. There was a note written on a piece of paper that was stuck on the other end of the small pool of water that led to the outside world. Hinata walked over to the note and tore it off the wall. There was no sound in this cave, not even a whisper in the wind. It was quiet and remote, but it was warm and inviting to whoever found it. "Close your eyes and put down the groceries." After setting the groceries down, Hinata followed the note's instructions and closed her eyes, opening her left eye slightly before closing it again as a voice echoed throughout the cave. "Ah. No peeking." Hinata laughed as she shifted in her spot. With the quickness that only a shinobi can possess, warm arms encircled her in an embrace, and a gentle kiss was planted on her cheek. When Hinata opened her eyes, she saw a beaming Naruto, and she returned the smile, relieved that his smiles weren't phony like they had been a few days prior. "When will you emerge from hiding, Naruto-kun?" Hinata inquired, and Naruto's smile faltered but did not change. "When I clear my head, Naruto-kun. Have you not made up your mind after a week?" The smile vanished entirely from Naruto's face. "Please, Naruto-kun. Every time your parents ask me if I've seen you, I'm sick of lying to them. Come back, Naruto-kun, please. I want to go out with you." Naruto gave her a perplexed look. "We are going out," Hinata persisted in pleading. "I want to go on a date, Naruto-kun. We haven't even had our first one." Naruto sighed and gave Hinata a tight hug, not a suffocating one, just a close one. Despite his best efforts to avoid looking into her eyes, which always caught his attention, and now he was paying for it. Hinata's eyes opened and she looked up at him. "Only because you asked me, Hinata." Hinata grinned and rested her head on his chest. "But I'm not going back home. I will be returning to Amir Sensei's house, but not with my parents. I'll remain there until one of those two confronts me," Hinata said with a sigh, and then she gave Naruto a forceful shove that knocked him back to the ground. In a display of courage and boldness, Hinata undressed until she was only wearing her bra and underwear. When she winked at him and dove into the cool water, Naruto's eyes widened like saucers. He quickly stripped down to his boxers and followed Hinata, who then gestured for him to come here with her index finger. Naruto obeyed, swimming swiftly in front of her as her indigo hair flowed freely around her and the sun's rays of light shone on her creamy skin, causing Naruto to feel his boxers shrink. Hinata held Naruto by the back and kissed him, and Naruto returned the kiss with a smile. As they began to lose the air they had stored in their lungs, they swam up and filled them up again, and then Hinata put her arms around Naruto's neck and they floated on top of the water. "You realize how adorable you look right now?" Naruto inquired. "You're implying that I'm unattractive every other time?" Naruto shook his head and laughed as Hinata pouted in jest. Naruto smirked as he started the game of tag. "You're beautiful all the other times, but right now, you're cute." Hinata laughed and shifted her feet to his chest. Perplexed by her behavior, Naruto could only watch as she waved goodbye to him and pushed herself back using him as leverage. After capturing Hinata at last, Naruto and her packed their belongings and departed the cave, holding hands and savoring the moment of being together once more. A figure smirked in the distance, identifying its targets, and a feminine voice followed by a static noise emanating from inside the figure's cloak. "Have you found our targets, Shadow One?" The figure rose from his perch atop a tree and stretched as the female voice within his cloak inquired. The figure said, "I have both targets in sight, permission to pursue." "No, it's not appropriate to attack right now. You'll hit them the next time they leave their village. You do recall the genjutsu you were expected to employ, correct?" the voice answered. "What caused that genjutsu? Why am I unable to simply knock them out and win them back?" the figure inquired. "You moron, such unnecessary violence is unnecessary. Do you forget what the master asked us to do? We need them back alive and unharmed." The figure moaned as he sat back down on a branch, and the feminine voice asked impatiently. "So I'm expected to wait until those two depart on a mission for an unknown amount of time?" the form whimpered. "Yes, you are aware that these two are at the top of the master's list." The voice reminded the figure, "He will be happy with us and not kill us with these two in his collection." The figure moaned again, then sat back and laughed. "Whatever." The figure didn't respond because he already knew, "Remember, if you fail, Master will kill us." Then, suddenly, he noticed something and smiled when he saw a couple holding hands and walking to Konoha while following the trail. The figure stood tall and leapt down from the tree he was on, slowly stalking the unwary couple, saying, "Looks like I get to practice that genjutsu a little more." After hours of training, Naruto and Hinata entered Amir's home and shut the door. Then Naruto became aware of something that caused him to stiffen and let out a loud moan. On the wall across from him and Hinata was a three-pronged kunai. Naruto sensed two more people in the room after the kunai repeatedly blinked and shone. Hinata could only gasp in shock as two Anbu kneeled in front of Naruto and her. The Anbu rose, and the man with the blood-red shirt on his left was about a foot shorter than the one with the hood over his head. The person in the blood-red shirt removed her mask and gave Naruto and Hinata a distressed look. Her stare made Hinata uncomfortable, but Naruto did nothing but stand by. That is, until the Anbu with the hood removed it. In a deadpan voice, Kushina commanded, "We need to talk Naruto. Hinata, please leave." Hinata saw Naruto growl and tighten his hold on her left hand. He appeared to be furious and about to attack his parents, but Hinata knew better. She was able to look past that and see a helpless boy who wished to die by himself in a corner, crying. As she shook her head and quickly squeezed Naruto's hand, Hinata braced herself. Hinata declared firmly, "I'm not going." Kushina was really caught off guard by this. She has always been the voice of reason and has always acted with reason and etiquette during her time with Hinata. However, Kushina was truly taken aback by this. What? Stumbled Kushina. With a growl, Naruto took his hand away from Hinata's and shielded her with his right arm. She said she doesn't want to go. If she doesn't want to go, then she's not going anywhere, he said. Something in Minato exploded, and he found himself standing in front of Kushina, who appeared poised to respond with a few of her own words. Minato shocked everyone except Naruto by warning, "Don't yell at your mother like that." Naruto merely scoffed and narrowed his eyes. "You have no say in what I do." Minato responded, "I do when it concerns your mother and you." However, Naruto wasn't finished. Naruto shouted, "You weren't here for us, so don't act like it." Minato yelled, "Why are you treating me like I abandoned you and your mother?" Naruto roared back, "Because you did. You left after sealing Kyuubi in me." At the end, Naruto growled, "Like I said before, I hate you and I won't forgive you for what you've done." Naruto, you have to understand that I couldn't have asked another parent to give up their child and go through what you have in. And why not? Is it you care more about those hypocritical villagers more than me, your own son? Replied Naruto. In order to prevent Naruto from attacking his father, Hinata was embracing him from behind. Kushina was only holding Minato's left arm, but she was acting similarly. Is it that you hate me too? Just like some of the other villagers? I don't hate you, Naruto, I lo. Naruto screamed, "Don't say it," as he fought to escape Hinata's hold. Hinata tried to hold Naruto down while closing her eyes. "How dare you try to tell me that?" "It's the truth," exclaimed Minato. Continuing to free himself, Naruto roared, "That's a lie. Once more. Don't you tell me you'll love me, or. Hinata said, "Naruto-kun, please calm down." However, she did little to help him relax. "Or what, Naruto?" Minato inquired, not admiring Naruto's implicit danger. "Minato-kun," chastised Kushina. Minato questioned, "What will you do if I tell you I love you?" Looking back at Hinata, Naruto uttered in the smallest whisper, "I'm sorry, Hinata. Chan." All of a sudden, Minato was punched in the face by a blur that had not been hugging anyone. This caught him off guard, and he flew through the air, smashing through the walls of the house and rolling out. As Minato struggled to stand, his vision briefly blurred before clearing up. Minato looked up to see Naruto slowly fingering his swords strapped to his back, and she heard the sound of a sword unsheathing. It was simpler to unsheath the hilts because they were pointing downward, but Naruto dropped his hands and chose to use his own hands instead. As Naruto dropped to his hands and knees, his nails grew longer and his eyes turned blood red, but his pupil did not change. Minato cleaned the corner of his mouth of the blood and braced himself for anything. And then, in a flash, Naruto was gone. Naruto used his momentum to attempt to kick Minato's skull with an axe, but Minato ducked under his right claw swipe and rolled to the side. Pulling a kunai from his pouch, Minato used his instincts and experience to block another claw swipe. Without thinking about his personal safety, Naruto swung forward, reared his left fist back, and grabbed the kunai with his bare hands, pushing it aside. Minato kicked Naruto in the stomach after grabbing his left fist with his right hand. Naruto landed on his feet and flipped backwards. He gave a modified ram sign, grunting but continuing. Shadow Clone Jutsu. The original Naruto stood over the 7 others, his arms folded across his chest, while the others all dropped to their knees. All of the clones nodded and sprinted in Minato's direction as he extended his right arm forward, pointing with his index finger. Halfway between them, Minato deftly sidestepped the first clone's right punch and seized his arm, flinging him to the second Naruto as he attempted to leap on him. Minato was far from finished, though, as both clones vanished in a cloud of smoke. He grunted and took hold of the third clone's fist, twisting it so that it faced the other 4 clones. After pushing him forward, Minato ran and dispatched more kunai. Minato leapt into the air and tossed 5 kunais to each of the clones, using the off-balance clone as leverage. After being struck behind the neck and scattered, the leverage clone was followed by another who was too slow to avoid or parry the kunai. The smoke cleared, and the 2 shadow clones that remained joined forces to rush Minato. While the other stood in front of him, Minato saw a Naruto clone leap over him and land behind him. Both Narutos pulled out a kunai as they ran in his direction with an unsaid go. Minato's neck was the target of the Naruto in front of him swinging his kunai high, while his kneecaps were the target of the Naruto in back swinging his kunai low. High enough to avoid the lower attack, but low enough to avoid the higher one, Minato leapt into the air. By twisting his body, Minato reached out with both feet, one of which made contact with the chest of one clone and the other with the chin of the other. Minato's vision was momentarily obscured by the clone's smoke cloud, but he could still hear the sounds of wind converging in one place. When he saw that Naruto was now sprinting toward him while the Rasengan was spinning dangerously fast, he opened his eyes wide. He attempted, but was unable, to leap up and away from Naruto. He noticed two hands holding him down when he looked down. Minato could only watch as Naruto quickly closed the distance between them and threw the Rasengan forward, pointing at his stomach, while muttering a curse for being so reckless. With just one thought going through his mind, Minato closed his eyes. This is going to be painful. Kushina and Hinata had been observing from the start and had nothing to say. The fact that Naruto had incited a fight between his father and that his father was retaliating shocked them both. When Naruto fell to his knees and hurried to break up the fight, Hinata was the first to awaken from her daze. However, Kushina's right arm jerked up and prevented her from moving forward before she could take a second step. Kushina's eyes never left the fight, but Hinata gave her a strange look. Let them be Hinata. Chan. Naruto needs to vent and getting this out of his system will help him think clearly. Minato won't hurt Naruto much but just enough to knock some sense in him. Kushina said. Although Hinata preferred not to use violence to resolve conflicts, she was forced to do so because she had no other option. But Kushina became alarmed as soon as Naruto charged at Minato with a Rasengan. She knew she wouldn't make it, so she ran outside and attempted to stop Naruto. He would have already attached the Rasengan to Minato's stomach by the time she got to him. Naruto used the Rasengan to strike Minato in the stomach after gaining one last burst of speed. Naruto screamed, "Rasengan!" as Minato's expression revealed the agony he was currently feeling. Minato was flung back by the force of the Rasengan after it drilled into his skin. Naruto reached down and took the underground clone's hand, hurling him high into the air before dousing his shoes' soles with chakra and pursuing the clone. The clone Naruto grabbed hold of Naruto's left hand and began spinning after both had risen as high as they could. The clone released Naruto when he reached the desired speed, and Naruto proceeded at the current speed toward the location where he and Minato would eventually meet, like a speeding bullet. As he flew back, Minato could feel the world around his belly becoming duller. His back skidded on the ground and then back into the air, causing him to squint his eyes. He opened his eyes, but as soon as he saw Naruto racing in his direction, his eyes widened like saucers. When Naruto's head struck his chest, he closed his eyes and let out a loud grunt. Both of them were pushed into the ground by Naruto's greater momentum than Minato's, and the ensuing collision left a crater. The whole area was covered in dust that had been kicked up into the air. After such a devastating attack, Kushina and Hinata nearly passed out back at Amir's house, but they quickly gathered themselves and fled for their respective lovers. When Kushina and Hinata finally arrived at the enormous crater, which was likely to hold 500 gallons of water, they saw two blondes make a valiant attempt to stand. In agony, one was clutching his head, the other his stomach. The blonde who was holding his head in agony punched the other blonde down and leapt over him, preventing Kushina and Hinata from jumping down to assist them. Naruto extracts one of Minato's kunai from his pouch and thrusts it into his shoulder. Minato bit his lip to keep from yelling in agony. Then Naruto brandished one of his swords, the blade looming over Minato's heart as he pointed it at his chest. When Kushina began to freak out once more, Hinata intervened to prevent him from jumping to the ground. "Have faith in him Kushina-san and you'll be surprised by what he will do," said Hinata. Naruto saw that the skin that had been torn from the Rasengan was gradually healing itself while Minato was gasping for air. When Minato attempted to sit up, Naruto narrowed his eyes. Naruto questioned, "Why didn't you fight back?" Minato's vivid blue eyes gazed regretfully and sorrowfully into Naruto's blood-red eyes. Minato managed to move his hand over the kunai that was stuck to his shoulder with some effort, but Naruto swiftly grabbed the handle and violently tore the kunai away from his shoulder. Minato turned back to his son and let out a stifled cry of agony. Naruto swung his sword blade to the side and gave Minato a hard slap across the face, saying, "Because you are my son." He yelled, "Bull! Why didn't you fight back?" more loudly than ever. After sitting up, Minato shifted Naruto's blade point to his heart. "Because you are my son and I love you. You are the result of my love for your mother and her love for me. I could never intentionally hurt you for no reason. I didn't mean to ruin your life or abandon you. I didn't want to seal the Kyuubi into you and make the entire village scorn you. My last wish was for them to see you as a hero for keeping the Kyuubi at bay, but I had a feeling they wouldn't. Minato wiped away the stray tears that entered his face. I failed you as a father and only wish to repay my debt to you for my actions. I don't deserve your forgiveness and I don't ask for it. I just want you to know that even if you hate me, I will always be here for you. Minato kept on crying quietly. But if you don't want me here, then go ahead, stab my heart and end me. By this point, Naruto was crying, his strength ebbing away and returning intermittently. He felt foolish, heartless, and cold on the inside. He detested and mocked his father for treating him in this way. Why, then, did he feel so bad about attempting to murder him? The only sound produced when Naruto dropped his sword was the blade striking the ground. Shut up, Naruto muttered. Naruto questioned, why are you doing this to me? Knowing that he wasn't seeking an answer, Minato remained silent. I hate you. I should feel nothing. I shouldn't feel bad for attacking you and almost killing you, said Naruto. He was trembling and shocked that he was still upright. In a whispery voice, he questioned, so why die? Turning around, Naruto saw Hinata grinning at him and said, because you're human Naruto.kun. Kushina simply materialized beside her before sprinting in Minato's direction. She dropped to her knees and gave him a hug. After observing her, Naruto turned to face Hinata. Then, as he glanced down at his feet, a tiny flame began to swiftly engulf him until he vanished. Everyone was taken aback and questioned when he had mastered body flame jutsu. Minato grunted in agony and Kushina helped him stand. Hinata glanced at Naruto's recent arrival. I'll go. Hinata nodded her head in response to Kushina's question. No, I'll go. If you would, can you please get Minato.kun to the Hokage's office without being spotted? Kushina quickly used a series of hand gestures to subdue Minato with powerful genjutsu. Kushina then hands the wounded Namikaze to Hinata and the two of them slowly walk toward the Hokage tower as Kushina goes in search of Naruto. Thank you. Curiosity overcame Hinata, who asked, did you mean what you said, Hokage? Sama? Minato shook his head and grinned beneath the genjutsu. You can call me Minato, Hinata, and yes, I meant what I said. Even if he hates me, I will try my best to be there for him when he needs me, replied Minato. As he took another painful step, he moaned a little, but after a few more seconds, he was okay, growing accustomed to the pain. Can you do me a favor, Hinata? Minato grunted once more as Hinata nodded her head. Hinata nodded her head and asked, can you tell me how Naruto's life has been? He told me that he was constantly ignored or beaten between the ages of 3 and 5, after which he met a guy who took him in as an apprentice and taught him how to fight for a year. When he came back, he entered the academy and ended up saving me from Kumo's second attempt to steal the Byakugan. Minato questioned in astonishment, Naruto managed to stop a second kidnapping? With a proud nod, Hinata went on to tell him about Naruto's experiences and accomplishments. Minato observed that each time Hinata spoke of his fangirls, her eyes narrowed. He scowled at the things that happened to him and laughed at some of the things he did. Kushina was having trouble locating Naruto. He was adept at concealing his trail and even knew how to make a phony one to trick his assailants. She would have paused to appreciate her son's work if she hadn't been expecting him to discuss something important. She bit her thumb until it bled and made some hand signals, deciding she needed help finding him. She slammed her hand down after stopping on a random branch. Summoning Jutsu. A cloud gathered around her, and as it dissipated, a tiny lion pup emerged, contented and sitting upright. The little tan pup said, Hey Kushina-san, what's going on? Kimi nodded and sniffed the air as she said, I need your help, Kimi. I need you to track down my son. Following a few seconds, Kimi gave a headshake. Kimi then leapt from the tree she was perched on and began running in the direction of Konoha's northern gates, saying, It's very faint and starting to get weaker by the second, but I think I can follow. Kushina trailed behind, wondering why Naruto was traveling across Konoha. Kimi stopped in front of a tree a few meters from the gates, and Kushina followed her until she stopped. Kushina glanced up and saw Naruto seated on the tree's tallest branch. Before returning to her world and leaping up to get closer to Naruto, Kushina thanked Kimi. As long as he didn't attempt to flee when she got to him, Kushina didn't care if he was unaware of her or not. Naruto shifts his position on the branch and closes his eyes after reaching the top. Naruto remarked, I don't really want to talk about it, Mom. The sun was nearly lowering as he gazed out. The argument with his father hadn't helped much, and it had been a long day. Kushina sat on a branch above him and watched the nearly sunset, saying, That's okay. I just wanted to make sure you were fine. Even as the sun sank below the horizon, they sat silently together. The creatures of the night then awoke from their slumber and began their usual activities as the dark blanket of night enveloped Konoha. Naruto sighed as the sun took away his patience. He detested his tendency to be impatient. At last, Naruto said, "So what is it that you want to talk about, Mom?" When he didn't hear back, he looked up to find his mother asleep. Sweating, he broke off a small branch and began prodding her with it. "Wake up, Mom." With her eyes wide open, Kushina snatched up a kunai and cut the stick Naruto was holding in half, just missing his fingers. Satisfied that he still had all 10 of them, Naruto gazed at his fingers and sighed. Then Kushina gasped when she realized what she had done. "I'm sorry, Naruto, it was reflex." Naruto asked directly, "It's okay, I get, so what is it you want to talk about?" Kushina turned her body to face Naruto and cleared her throat. Naruto followed suit, waiting for her to speak. She also got right to the point when she asked, "Why did you say you shouldn't feel bad for attacking your father?" Kushina was anything but subtle, as everyone in Konoha's Enbu ranks knew. After the speech of the birds and bees, Naruto had to learn that the hard way. With a little hesitancy, Naruto uttered, "Because I hate him." "You do? So why did you waver when you said you hate him?" replied Kushina. Naruto attempted, but struggled mightily, to break eye contact with his mother. When he didn't respond, Kushina grinned slightly. "Because you don't," said she. Naruto grasped his head and snapped his eyes shut. Naruto uttered the words, I do, hate him, I don't," with increasing insecurity. Naruto said solemnly, I can't find it in me, to hate him. I know he can't take another couple's child and put Kyuubi in it, but I don't want to," Kushina said, looking perplexed. "You don't want to what?" "I don't want to understand. It makes sense that he use his own kid for it, but I don't want it to. It's just not fair that I be subjected to the village's scorn for it. I want to hate him for doing this to me. I want him to pay for what he's done." Naruto began to cry. Kushina questioned, "Why not? Why don't you want to understand?" "I don't expect you to understand, but I just don't want to. My life sucks because of the ceiling and I just want to hate him, but I just can't find it in me to hate him," Naruto replied. Kushina scowled and embraced Naruto, saying, "I know I'm being redundant, but I just don't know how else to put it." As she ruffled his hair, Kushina remarked, "Naruto, if you harbor resentment, you're only preventing your own happiness." Naruto nodded his head while grunting. "I get what you're trying to tell me, but I'm still mad at him," Naruto replied. With a smile, Kushina gave him a tighter hug. "But you don't hate him." Kushina dismissed Naruto's repeated statement, "But I'm still mad at him." When she felt a chilly breeze suddenly blow past, she said, "It's progress." As he and Kushina leapt from the tree and made their way to Konoha, Naruto nodded his head and said, "Let's go inside, it's getting cold out here." Kushina cocked her head slightly and scowled at the woods behind her. "Someone is out there. They were observing Naruto and me. The only questions are, who are they pursuing, and for what purpose?" Kushina pondered. "Mom?" Kushina asked, blinking, expecting to see Naruto staring at her strangely. Kushina approached him and nodded her head, asking, "Are you okay?" Naruto nodded and turned to face the Uzumaki compound, saying, "Yeah, just a little exhausted from today's missions." He beat Kushina to it as she fell into step with him and was ready to ask him a question. "You felt it too?" inquired Naruto. Kushina nodded her head, but he was also a little taken aback. Without needing to hear the rest, Kushina nodded her head. "I felt it earlier today. I found it odd that whoever it is hasn't attacked yet. At first I thought nothing of it, but now." Naruto nodded his head and said, "Just be careful next time you leave Konoha." The remainder of the journey home was quiet. The following day, a strong breeze blew through the area as the sun chose to hide behind some rain clouds. Many people who didn't have skin protection shivered from the cold it brought. Naruto sat down and rested his head on Hinata's lap, panting. She runs her fingers through his blonde hair and smiles. He smiles as Hinata giggles and his perspiration runs down his face. Naruto was able to reach a sort of truce with his father last night after a brief altercation. Although it was never made clear when, he promised to discuss it in greater detail later. Naruto didn't have time to say goodbye to his parents because they left early that morning to embark on a mission that Tsunade had given them. Naruto looks up and glares at Sasuke, who was barely able to stand, asking, "Tired already, Dobi?" He's been nothing more than a stick wielding prick ever since Tsunade roused him from his unconsciousness. "Sad, and here I thought you were actually strong." Kakashi slapped his face with his right hand as Sasuke turned and left. Kakashi thought to himself, "And here I thought he gave up the whole Solemn Avenger theme." A second before Sasuke departed, Haku arrived at the training area. "HKAU!" exclaimed joyfully, "Hey Sasuke!" But Sasuke gave her a quick glance before scoffing and turning to leave. Haku scowled as he walked away. When she approached Naruto and Hinata, she inquired, "What's his problem?" Naruto put his head back on Hinata's lap after she shrugged and shook her head. Naruto replied nonchalantly, closing his eyes, "Who knows, then again, it could be because of his run-in with his brother about 2 months ago." Haku glanced at Hinata and Naruto before turning back to where Sasuke had vanished to. "So what's up, Haku?" "Nothing much, I came to talk to Sasuke for a while but I guess that's not happening. Anyways, I got a message from Hokage Sama saying that she wants you to come to her office, along with Hinata and Sasuke but I guess he's out." Haku responded. Kakashi's eye waved, smiled, and vanished in a whirl of leaves. "Well, since Sasuke left and you two are too tired to continue training, I might as well check up on a certain someone. Bye," she said. Then Haku saw that Hinata was giving her a strange look. "What?" she inquired. Without raising his head or opening his eyes, Naruto said, "So you and Sasuke huh?" Echoing Hinata's thought and causing Haku to flush. Naruto sat up straight and looked around, asking, "Did I get it right?" When he saw Haku blush and Hinata nod while smiling and closing her eyes, he grinned and nodded his head. Repositioning himself on Hinata's lap, Naruto remarked, "I'm just that good." Haku sulked. Haku avoided making eye contact with anyone and asked, "Are you going or not?" Naruto grinned as he stood up and stretched his limbs by performing a rising handspring. Then, being the gentleman that he is, he extended his hand to assist Hinata in standing up from her chair. Grabbing his hands, she stood up and giggled. As she walked back from her starting point and disappeared among a cluster of trees, Haku waved to them and said, "Well, I'm going to go find Shino-kun then, bye." Hinata questioned, "Do you think there's something going on there?" After shaking his head, Naruto shrugged and turned to face space. "Maybe, I mean from what I heard, those two have been hanging around each other more often," replied Naruto. Hinata inquired, "And where did you hear that from?" "Well, I went looking for Shikamaru to ask him something but instead ran into Ino and she started talking about, well something, I'm not sure, I blanked out at that point but before I did, I heard her say something about Haku and Shino hanging out together." Naruto sighed and began to shake his head in agreement. Naruto remarked, "I wonder if she ever trains instead of gossiping." After giving him a playful slap on the left arm, Hinata took his left hand in her right and entwined them. Hinata went on, "Of course she does, she just likes gossiping more." Hinata laid her head on Naruto's shoulder and he laughed. Naruto and Hinata encountered looks of enmity, jealousy, and hatred as they entered the civilized area of Konoha. Naruto was the target of the majority of the hostility, and he would sometimes glare back. The majority of the glares that Naruto's fangirls gave Hinata were motivated by jealousy and annoyance. Naruto received the remaining ones from the older generation, seasoned shinobi, or a few fanboys who had emerged since the Chunin exams. Every time Naruto saw them, his scowl became more intense. Naruto had noticed that a few boys his age began to show interest in the timid Hyuga princess, though it was hardly perceptible to others. It's been terrible for Naruto ever since he managed to persuade her to take off the bulky jacket. Some of the people his age hated him not only because of the influence their parents had on them, but also because they were envious of him and felt jealous of him. But despite everything, Naruto could only smile when he realized he was the first to find the stunning diamond in the rough. He closed his eyes contentedly and tightened his grip on Hinata's hand. Hinata was the most beautiful girl Naruto had ever seen, despite her navy blue capris, blue ninja shoes, and light lavender sweater with the Hyuga symbol on the left shoulder. As she made her way to the Hokage tower, Hinata grinned. She examined the clothes Naruto was wearing. Like the long, sleeved orange shirt underneath it, his black sleeveless jacket, which had 2 thick orange stripes on the side, flowed as another chilly wind blew through. Similar to his jacket, he wore black hakama pants with 2 thick orange stripes on the side. His fingerless glove was soft against Hinata's skin, and his black ninja shoes matched her movements. She frowned slightly as she looked up, detesting the way he covered his attractive face with a black mask that had an orange line running horizontally across his nose. But when Hinata sensed more glaring eyes on her, she dismissed it. She looked back with a smug smile, seeing a group of girls huddled together, admiring Naruto and then enviously observing her. She gave Naruto a playful tongue out before releasing his hand and giving him a firm embrace. Opening his eyes, Naruto gazed down at her. When he noticed that she was glaring back at the fangirls who were following them, he laughed. After deciding that Hinata shouldn't be the only one to play tricks on their fans, Naruto forced her to look at him by pressing his right thumb and index finger against her chin. He came to a halt, turned to face her, and gently brushed his thumb across her left cheek as they met eyes. The intensity of the other's gaze captivated both of them, and Hinata flushed before Naruto planted a tender kiss on her lips. They both grinned as the atmosphere grew heavier and the desire to kill increased. She put her arms around the base of Naruto's neck, and he put his around the small of her back. Every civilian fled inside a building and hid, too terrified to even look up, because the intent to kill was so great. Naruto, Hinata, and the fanboys and girls were the only people outside now. Naruto boldly reached out and groped Hinata's butt cheek with his right hand in an attempt to infuriate her fanboys. Although it was swift, it was slow enough for everyone to see. Naruto was relieved that Hinata didn't do anything more after she eeped. His instincts then took over, and Naruto and Hinata's bodies briefly flashed away before a barrage of shuriken and kunais struck the area they had just been in. Naruto and Hinata, who nearly suffered a heart attack, both exhaled in relief after emerging on the roof of the Hokage Tower. She blushed and slapped Naruto's face after looking up at him. Gazing at Hinata with a perplexed look, Naruto clutched his right cheek in agony. Hinata said, "Don't ever grope me like that," before fading away with a voice too low for Naruto to hear. Placing his left hand behind his left ear to improve his hearing, he asked, "What?" Hinata blinked several times before focusing on her feet, her blush deepening. She said, "Don't ever grope me like that, in public." Naruto grinned and gave her a quick peck on the cheek. Dropping his right hand from its spot on his cheek, he grinned. Naruto smiled lecherously and said, "Deal." When she saw how red his cheek was, she said, "I'm sorry." Naruto continued to smile. Before Hinata lowered his face and planted a kiss on the cheek she slapped, Naruto remarked, "It's okay, besides I heard kissing an injury helped heal it." He put his right hand behind his head and rubbed it, and his smile grew. Hinata laughed as Naruto remarked, "See, I already feel better. Come on, I'm sure Chan is probably getting impatient by now." Tsunade tapped her fingers impatiently on her desk. She knew she would lose it if she didn't receive what she had requested within the next minute. The door opened with a soft knock, and Tsunade got up from her chair. As Naruto and Hinata entered Tsunade's office, she remarked, "It's about." "Oh, it's just you two." As Naruto and Hinata approached her desk, she let out a sigh. Tsunade threw a thick book at Naruto, who brought both Hinata and himself down. "Well, sorry to disappoint you, Chan, but," it said. He dodged once more, barely avoiding a freshly sharpened kunai that was aimed at his forehead. "Hey! Careful now. Hinata, Chan's with me. They both jumped back, eager to get away from an enraged Tsunade, and nodded to Hinata. Hinata reluctantly begged, Hokage. Sama, please calm down. Naruto-kun. Apologized to Tsunade. Sama. Tsunade gave her a suspicious look, but when she reprimanded Naruto, she grinned. Despite his best efforts to avoid apologizing, Naruto hung his head in defeat after Hinata gave him a glare. Naruto apologized, leaving a bitter aftertaste in his mouth. "Sorry Hokage. Sama." Tsunade sat back in her chair and laughed. Her words, "It's okay brat," were met with a glare from Naruto, who then turned to face Hinata. Tsunade was staring down at Hinata when Hinata interrupted her laughter by saying, "Tsunade. Sama, don't you think that was a little rude?" Naruto-kun did apologize after all. Tsunade widened her gaze and said, "Oh, are you saying I should apologize to the brat?" But Hinata refused to back down. She may have faltered a little, but she didn't give up. Naruto added humbly, "Beg for forgiveness actually." Hinata gave him a light slap across the stomach. Hinata told him, "I'll handle this." Hinata stated, "I think it would be the right thing to do." Tsunade grinned and leaned back in her chair after continuing to gaze at Hinata. Naruto sulked but nodded his head, saying, "I like you Hinata." "Alright then, I accept your apology Naruto and I'm sorry for calling you, brat." Tsunade went on to say, "You had some girl there brat, you better not lose her." Not wanting to start another argument, Naruto was about to say something but changed his mind. He had a revelation following his recent ordeal. No man would ever prevail in a dispute with a woman. In an argument, only a woman can prevail over another woman. Naruto sighed as he took a seat in the vacant chair next to him, remembering this and committing it to memory. Hinata took a seat next to him and they waited for Tsunade to say something. Tsunade concealed her smile behind her clasped hands and remarked, "So, I'm guessing you both are wondering why you're here. Well, I'll tell you. I want you two and your other teammate to go on a mission for me. You three, along Shikamaru, will go to Suna and give their temporary Kazekage scroll that I already gave to Shikamaru. You'll wait for them to write a reply and return with the reply. This mission should last for at least a week and a half. Any longer and I'm send another team after you three, got that?" After seeing both of them nod their heads, Tsunade. Naruto and Hinata nodded once more before departing to find their fourth and last mission member. Go pack accordingly and meet up your Chunin leader in an hour. You're dismissed. After 3 days. As he and Team 7 passed the barren desert, Shikamaru moaned. Shikamaru was assigned a C-rank mission as his first Chunin mission. He had to go to Suna, deliver the new Alliance S role to their next.in charge, and then come back with their response. At the moment, Naruto was riding on the back of a weary Hinata who was sleeping. Shikamaru was beginning to grow weary of it as well, and they had been fighting non-stop for some time. However, Naruto remained silent. He appeared to be lost in thought, in fact. But Sasuke made Shikamaru question why he should be on the mission. He would agitate the slothful Chunin or start fights with Naruto. Shikamaru let out a sigh and dropped into step with his teammates. He wanted to visit Suna and pay a visit to a certain Suna Kunoichi, as much as he hated to admit it. Gaara and his siblings remained in Konoha's hospital to recuperate from their injuries after the invasion failed. Strangely enough, Temari was visited by Shikamaru while she was recuperating. Shikamaru gave in and asked if she wanted to play a quick game of shogi after they played a brief game of who would blink first. She had initially denied, but she eventually agreed because of her situation and her limited options. To put it mildly, Shikamaru was taken aback when she cornered his king but managed to get back up and win, albeit only by chance. Shikamaru was excited to see the young blonde and try again, grinning at the recollection of numerous unsuccessful but near victories thanks to Temari. Sadly, Shikamaru and Team 7 were unaware of the cloaked figure that trailed closely behind. He was extremely difficult to identify because the color of the cloak was uncannily similar to that of the sand. As he and Team 7 approached Suna, the figure grinned beneath the hood of his cloak. The figure followed silently and eagerly, having at last seen his targets depart from the safety of their home. The figure needed to target more intriguing victims because peddlers and stray travelers weren't enough anymore. When Suna's northern gates were finally visible, the figure grinned after 3 long days of travel. He knew this was going to be a lot of fun. The figure knew his mission would become more intriguing when he saw a red-haired boy and a blonde girl outside the gates. His master's third target was in view, and the figure couldn't help but laugh. He would soon receive a very large reward, as would his partner. When Naruto saw Gaara and his sister Temari waiting for them just outside Suna's gates, he felt a wave of relief. Even Naruto wanted to hop on a bed and sleep until he had to wake up after 3 days of running and walking to Suna. With his typical jovial grin, Naruto stopped short in front of Gaara and Temari as he ran up to the 2 sand siblings, keeping Hinata balanced on his back. As he spoke, Naruto gasped, "Man, you have no idea how glad I am to see you, too." Temari raised an eyebrow and opened his mouth to respond, but Gaara spoke first. Naruto nodded his head as Gaara said, "Welcome Naruto Uzumaki. I see you and your team have made it to Suna safely." After a minute, Sasuke and Shikamaru followed Naruto, with Shikamaru stealthily approaching Temari. Shikamaru approached Suna's interior and said, "Well, let's go inside and deliver this scroll to your temporary cage." Following in the Slack Chunin's wake were Naruto, Sasuke, and the Sand siblings. Naruto caught Gaara's attention with a barely audible whisper. Naruto said, "So what's up, Gaara?" Gazing upward, Gaara indicated a solitary cloud in the sky. Gaara's response caused Naruto to perspire. "That one cloud in the sun, also I think that is a bird. You know, if I didn't know you didn't have a sense of humor, I would have thought you were messing with me." Naruto replied. "What I meant to say is how have you been since we last met?" replied Naruto. Gaara gave him a strange look and then shook his head. He replied, "I've been alright I suppose." Gaara refused to look anywhere but the sky, and Naruto cocked his head in perplexity. He questioned whether he was thinking or merely attempting to ascertain what was actually above them. Naruto questioned, "You suppose? How so?" Gaara glanced at Naruto before turning to face Hinata, who muttered something about him. Gaara sighed and turned to face his feet. Gaara told Naruto, not so much out of concern as out of curiosity and self-doubt, "I've been having an odd feeling whenever I am out. It's a faint feeling and I suppose that it's nothing but it is almost as if I am being watched and followed. I, at times, think I'm imagining things and leave it alone, categorizing it as the shukaku messing with my mind again. However, the presence that follows these feelings of vigilance is anything but negative. It, well, harbors these feelings unknown to me." Gaara went on. Naruto said, "Oh? Does it bother you?" Gaara shook his head and closed his eyes. As he considered the name, Naruto grinned and said, "It's actually quite comforting, knowing someone out there doesn't see me as the demon hidden in the sand." Naruto continued to think to himself, "That sounds cool. Demon of the hidden sand." However, he stopped when he noticed Gaara giving him an odd look. "Sorry. Anyways, "Why don't you try and find this presence?" replied Naruto. Gaara answered, "I've tried, but this person is very elusive." Naruto and Gaara stopped walking when Hinata muttered, "She's behind the lamppost behind us." They turned to see a girl with short brown hair and black eyes observing them from behind the lamppost Hinata had mentioned. She blushed and fled completely behind the lamppost in a panic. Wondering how Hinata knew the girl was there, Naruto and Gaara were unable to speak. "How did?" Hinata blushed and shifted uneasily on Naruto's back. "Of course, Hinata. Chan has the Byakugan, so she was able to see her hide behind the lamppost." Hinata stammered, hoping they would never discover the true reason for her knowledge. "Why? Yeah, that how I know." Though he chose to ask her later, Naruto pondered why she stammered. Naruto shouted, "Hey, you over there, behind the lamppost," as Temari, Sasuke, and Shikamaru halted their progress. When a meek-looking girl looked at him as though he had attempted to kill her, they thought he was crazy for yelling at no one, but then they started to perspire. Temari, Shikamaru, and Sasuke continued to walk to the Cage's tower to deliver the scroll, knowing that it would likely be wise to part ways. Naruto nodded as the shy girl gestured to herself. Naruto shouted, gesturing with his hand for her to approach, "Yeah, you, come here." She approached Naruto slowly and then stood in front of him, occasionally glancing at Gaara. Although Naruto was aware of this, he chose to investigate further before drawing any conclusions. The girl fumbled with her short brown hair and stammered, "Why?" "Yes." Gaara furrowed his brow, recalling how he had previously recognized the girl's face. The girl blushed when she saw him staring. As they watched Hinata continue to change into two different shades of red, their smiles matched Naruto's. When Hinata saw the brown-haired girl do it, she blushed but bowed her head slightly. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and this pretty girl on my back is Hinata Hyuga, and this is..." Gaara gave the girl a curious look when she replied, "Sabaku no Gaara." Then Gaara recalled where he had previously seen the girl. The one who had asked to sit with him at lunch. I'm sorry, but I still remember you from the Academy." The brown-haired girl nodded when Gaara remarked, "I remember now, you were that girl who asked to sit by me one day during lunch." The girl was a little saddened by Gaara's addition. "Your name? I'm sorry, I don't remember your name." Since she tended to blend in with the background, she didn't expect him to know. He kind of twitched his lips as she said, "My name is Matsuri." Though not entirely undetectable, it was difficult to tell. Matsuri blushed and Naruto and Hinata grinned broadly when Gaara remarked, "Matsuri, that's a nice name." Their mission had become much more intriguing. Naruto grinned and said, "Hey Gaara, why don't the four of us go somewhere to eat? I'm starving." Adding a smile of her own, Hinata said, "Yes, I'm also hungry, and you and Matsuri-san are the only ones we know that know Suna very well." Matsuri cheered inwardly, her blush darkening. She noticed that Gaara had a somewhat irate expression when she looked up. Heartbroken, she halted the tears from streaming from her eyes and looked back down. As she began to think of a reason to leave, Matsuri thought, "He doesn't like me." Matsuri ran in the opposite direction without waiting for them to say anything. Actually, I have to go, do something." As she walked away, Naruto and Hinata thought they saw tears fall from her eyes. They gazed at Gaara, who appeared to have a frown affixed to his face all the time. Naruto waved a hand in front of his face, wondering what had enraged the Jinchuriki. "Gaara, who?" Gaara looked up at Naruto, bewildered, and blinked. Gaara tipped his head to the left and raised an invisible eyebrow, asking, "Gaara, are you okay?" "Yeah, why?" Hinata replied, "You looked kind of angry." Gaara confused Hinata and got a nod from Naruto by implying, "That's because I was talking to, you know who." Hinata became even more perplexed when Naruto asked, "What did the raccoon dog say?" Gaara turned to face the sidewalk's right side, flushed. Then he muttered something unintelligible. "What?" With a deeper flush, Gaara remarked, "He said that I liked the girl, Matsuri." Hinata and Naruto gave him a blank stare. The first to awaken from his daze was Naruto. Do you?" inquired Naruto. Gaara replied, "I don't know." Gaara began to move randomly before any more questions were asked. Naruto turned to Hinata, who recognized the implicit pact, and said, "Come on. Let me show you where I usually go to eat." Helping Gaara comprehend the perplexing feeling of love was their secondary goal. He was currently walking behind Temari with Shikamaru, who appeared distant to the outside world while guiding them to the Cage's tower. Shikamaru didn't really care that Sasuke was behind him. He was just as distant as he had been in the academy, and he still thought the last Uchiha was bothersome and annoying. Girls were staring at Sasuke with such affection and infatuation that it nearly made him feel ill everywhere he looked. Shikamaru sighed in frustration, put his hand in his pockets, and closed his eyes. Tamari turned to face him after hearing him sigh. She couldn't say he wasn't interesting, but she had never met anyone as lazy as him. She intimidated most boys her age because of her strength and heritage. However, Shikamaru was not at all intimidated. On the contrary, he made a point of annoying her in any way he could. Usually, this would make Tamari want to slap him with her big, heavy black fan, but when it came to him, she just wanted to slap the back of his head. Tamari saw that they had arrived at the Cage's tower and smiled faintly. Without saying anything, Tamari opened the door and let Sasuke and Shikamaru in. She then followed, shutting the door behind her. Tamari went into the first floor waiting room and told them the hotel and room number they would be staying at until they were forced to depart. Shikamaru couldn't help but observe the parallels between the Hokage's and Cage's towers as the three headed for the stairs. For starters, everything was essentially the same in terms of size and structure, but there were also some significant distinctions. The Hokage's tower was more red in hue, whereas the Cage's tower is more beige. This tower also didn't smell like tobacco that had just been lit. No, the smell of freshly dried ink and printed paper was exactly what a place of business should smell like. Snapping Shikamaru off his muse and blinking repeatedly, Tamari declared, "We're here." He mentally chastised himself for being so distant and was unaware that they had reached the top so rapidly. If the leader was off in his own world, it did no good to the team or the mission. Tamari opened the door and moved aside to let Sasuke and Shikamaru in. Shikamaru fought the impulse to face drop right then. He thought the man sitting in front of him was the intern Cage, but it was not what he had anticipated. Shikamaru anticipated seeing a middle-aged man with at least some facial hair and a few stray gray hairs growing in his hair. A man with a stoic expression on his face but an air of wisdom and prestige. With his vast experience, he appeared to be able to complete all of his work with his eyes closed. This expectation was not even partially met by the man in front of him. Tamari laughed sheepishly and walked quickly over to the Cage's desk. The man was soundly asleep on the Cage's desk when Tamari woke him with a soft but firm slam. The man sat up and snorted as fast, mumbling unintelligible words while using his forearm to wipe the drool from his mouth. The man exclaimed, "Ha! Wah! Oh!" as he quickly regained his senses. His face was covered in smudged purple war paint, which only got worse when he used his forearm to wipe away the drool. Shikamaru also thought he appeared a little too young to be the Cage. Shikamaru remarked, "So, this is your temporary cage. Gotta say, I'm a little disappointed." Tamari exclaimed, "What? No, hell no, Kankuro. What the hell are you doing here?" Kankuro stood and stretched, wiping the last of the sleep from his eyes. Kankuro yawned and put his left hand over his mouth. "The old bats wanted me to deliver some documents for the intern Cage to sign. But as you can see he's not here, so I decided to wait for him." He gave him a hard kick to the back, which sent him forward and knocked him unconscious by crashing his head against the wall. "It's a shame you woke me up, I had such a nice nap." With a drop of perspiration, Shikamaru questioned, Is he going to be okay?" Sasuke said sharply, "Who cares, let's just go already." Shikamaru glared at Sasuke as he turned to face him. Shikamaru's usual slack attitude belied his frustration and anger. "You know what, Uchiha, I'm starting to get tired of your stuck-up attitude. The entire trip here you've been nothing but a pain in the neck. You complain non-stop about wasting your time with such a trivial mission when you could be training that you're starting to sound like a broken record." Sasuke questioned, "What are you going to do about it, Nara?" and quickly received his response. Shikamaru slammed Sasuke against the doorframe behind him, clutching his collar in a closed fist. "Listen and listen well, Uchiha. The village may put you on this pedestal for being the only living Uchiha still loyal to Konoha, but I see past that. I see a spoiled brat who cries and complains when he doesn't get his way. Now this mission I'm leading is very important to Konoha since it deals with the already fragile alliance between Suna and Konoha. So as the leader, I expect you to show me the proper respect while on this mission. I don't give a damn if you hate me now or after the mission, but until then, I suggest you shut your mouth and be a good genin, or I'll make sure Lady Tsunade has you doing D-rank mission for a month. Do we have an understanding?" The voice was firm. As he released himself from Shikamaru's hold, Sasuke growled. After sneering at Shikamaru, he went downstairs to ask the secretary for the hotel room key. With a sigh, Shikamaru watched the final Uchiha go and returned his focus to Tamari. With a frustrated sigh, Shikamaru said, "I apologize for that, he was really beginning to irritate me." Tamari put her left hand on her hip and held out her right to catch the scroll, saying, "It's okay. Just toss the scroll to me and I'll wait here for the intern case cage. Casually, Shikamaru pulled out the scroll and tossed it to Tamari, who caught it and set it on the desk beside her. Shikamaru went to an empty chair in front of the case cage's desk and shut the door behind him. Tamari leapt onto the desk, leaned forward, and crossed her legs. Shikamaru said, "So, what do you want to do now?" Tamari leaned back from her desk position and grinned. With a raised left eyebrow, Tamari replied, "You know what I want to do." Shikamaru closed his eyes and grinned. You ready?" he inquired. He inhaled sharply as Tamari nodded her head. "Let's play then." Naruto and Hinata followed Gaara, who appeared to be lost in his own world, as they continued to wander aimlessly around Suna. "What are we going to do about Gaara, Hinata-chan?" Naruto asked. He had shown them numerous locations, including the hotel where they would be staying as well as a number of well-known eateries. "I'm not sure Naruto-kun, but we need to do something soon," Hinata continued. They both began to think of a plan while rubbing their chins thoughtfully and gazing up at the sky. "I understand," they both said at the same time. Then Hinata gave Naruto a doubtful glance. "Naruto-kun, Hinata exclaimed, perspiring. "Kidnapping both of them, throwing them in a room, and locking them there until they get together is not a plan, it's a felony." I can't believe you'd think I would come up with a plan like that." Naruto pretended to be hurt, but he quickly stopped when he saw Hinata's "prove me wrong" expression. With a drop of his own perspiration, Naruto said, "Okay, Hinata-chan, what's your idea?" "Well, using my Byakugan, will go look for Matsuri while you keep Gaara busy by talking about Matsuri. When I find her, I'll bring her to you too and we'll help them get together," Hinata stated to him. Hinata nodded when Naruto said, "But, how will you know where we'll—" "Oh right, your Byakugan. Well, good luck Hinata." Hinata kissed Naruto on the cheek and leapt to the roof of the closest building, saying, "Thank you Naruto-kun." Naruto couldn't help but gaze down at her butt as he watched her leave. He knew he wasn't ready, but lately he's felt the need to take things further with Hinata. Perhaps he was, but he was aware that Hinata wasn't. In addition, they were too young, and Naruto did not currently have any plans to get Hinata pregnant. Naruto pondered why he had been experiencing such cravings lately and why he had been picturing Hinata in suggestive poses until a voice suddenly entered his mind as he followed Gaara. Kyuubi said, "I knew this day would come, but I didn't think it would come so soon." This confused Naruto. "Kyuubi? What do you mean by that, and where have you been?" Naruto questioned his renter. "In here, I've been remodeling. What I mean is that your animal and primal instincts have become much more intense as a result of my influence. We have been gradually infusing together in every way because of your father's seal." Near the end, Kyuubi responded in a suggestive manner, "It began with all your senses, but now we've reached the stage where your desire for a mate has increased drastically, if you get what I mean." Naruto's eyes grew wide with surprise and comprehension. "You mean I'm in a state of extreme heat?" Naruto questioned in terror, hardly even interested in the response. "You fool. Only women experience heat." Naruto flinched as Kyuubi roared in his head. "You will always feel the need and desire to mate with your partner as a man. But I believe I may have accelerated these desires by influencing the seal in your thoughts. However, I'm sure you don't mind." Naruto blushed and muttered something under his breath as Kyuubi teased. Gaara interrupted Naruto in the middle of his inner monologue with Kyuubi and asked, "What was that?" Nervously, Naruto pondered Kyuubi's final statement and answered, Nothing." He put a friendly arm around Gaara's shoulders and drew him in after recalling what Hinata had asked him to do. Naruto's smile startled Gaara. "So Gaara, what about Matsuri, huh? She's pretty don't you think?" he asked. I suppose she's attractive." Naruto continued. "You suppose? Come on Gaara, it has to be more than that." Gaara questioned suspiciously, "What are you suggesting? That I am in love with the girl?" After dismounting from Gaara, Naruto defensively waved his arms in front of him. To allay Gaara's suspicions, Naruto responded, No, I'm just saying that Matsuri seems to have a thing for you." "I highly doubt that," was Gaara's direct response. Gaara sighed as Naruto gave him a questioning glance. "You saw the way she looked at me with fear. She was so frightened by me she could hardly speak properly without stumbling on her words. She sees me as what I truly am, a monster, a demon. She has no romantic interest in me, and even though she has never caused me harm, that doesn't mean she likes me." Gaara went on. Naruto gave him a sympathetic and sorrowful look. He never experienced love, so it was understandable that he didn't comprehend even a tiny bit of it. Naruto rambled, "Gaara, you don't really expect me to believe that you think you're—" Gaara nodded. Even though Naruto knew Gaara was depressed, he said, "That's right, a demon. I have become one with Shukaku and will never be loved." His lack of emotion and conformity made Naruto feel ill. He was aware of the emotion and the struggles he was facing, but he never once felt so depressed that he would never experience love of any kind from anyone. Naruto tried to reassure his friend, but he refused to listen, saying, "That's insane, Gaara. You're not Shukaku and you're not a monster. You're Sabaku no Gaara, the container of the one-tailed Shukaku, not the demon itself." Gaara merely gave a headshake. "No, Naruto, it's too late for me. Something like me was never meant to be loved, just used as a weapon. To fight for my home with my life," Gaara replied. The part where Gaara compared himself to Naruto was ignored by Naruto, but he knew it would not leave his mind. "You are just like me, Naruto, nothing but a weapon to be used until we have served our purpose. After that, we are tossed aside, like a tool. And as a tool, we have no room to love or to be loved." Naruto screamed, "So what? You're going to turn yourself into a tool?" and demanded that Gaara respond. Gaara's straightforward response was, "I am what I am. Nothing in this world will change that." "So what about Matsuri-shi?" Gaara exclaimed as loudly as he had ever spoken, "She's afraid of me. That's all. Whatever impression you may have gotten from her is delusional. She does not like me, she's afraid of me." At that moment, Naruto had a thought that explained Gaara's peculiar actions. Naruto looked into Gaara's eyes and asked gravely, "Is she really the one who's afraid, Gaara? Or is it just you?" He refused to back down, and Gaara stared back. Gaara grunted, turned his body away from Naruto, and closed his eyes. All he could say before sand engulfed him and carried him away was, "TCH." With a sigh, Naruto headed to find Gaara. This was not going to sit well with Hinata. As Hinata stood in front of Matsuri, preventing her from leaving for the third time, she was not doing as well as Naruto. Hinata began to grow impatient with Matsuri and said, "Why don't you accompany me to lunch with Gaara and Naruto-kun?" In hindsight, Hinata was aware that she had behaved in this way when she secretly harbored feelings for Naruto, but she questioned whether she was truly that obnoxious about it. I'm sorry, Hinata." Matsuri nodded as Hinata said it to her. With sadness evident in her voice, Matsuri replied, But Gaara won't want me there. Now if why? You'll excuse me." Matsuri used the skills she had learned to vanish in a clump of sand, temporarily blinding Hinata as she shielded her eyes with her forearm. When Hinata looked around and saw that Matsuri was not there, she sighed. Hinata turned to her left and saw Naruto panting as he landed beside her. "Hinata-chan," she exclaimed. Naruto refilled his lungs with a few quick breaths and asked, "So how'd it go?" "Naruto-kun. How'd you find me?" Hinata inquired, a little taken aback that Naruto could locate her in a village as big as Suna. As he recalled his earlier conversation with Kyuubi, Naruto blushed and said, "Well, it's because That's not the point, so where's Matsuri?" Hinata looked around Naruto and inquired. "She went off before I was able to convince her to come." She said, "Where's Gaara?" Hinata was interested in Naruto's frown and contemplative expression as he looked down and said, "He went off after we talked about Matsuri." "What's wrong, Naruto-kun?" Hinata approached him and gave him a hug. She would make sure his depression always subsided if she could because she didn't like seeing him so depressed. Naruto forced her to place her head on his chest while he placed his head on top of hers. He genuinely thinks that he is the demon trapped inside him. And I can only wonder how I'd be like if I never found the comfort of a loved one. I mean, we have so much in common, being the outcasts of our village and classes, being human sacrifices, and having cage fathers who were the reason we became human sacrifices. Naruto stopped and took a deep breath. Hinata looked up at him in disbelief and said, "And maybe he's right. Maybe I am like him. Not meant to love or be loved." Hinata firmly stated, "Naruto-kun, how can you say something so ridiculous? Of course you were meant to be loved, you're human." Hinata. Because of me you have been in harm's way so many times. You've been rained on by senbons by Haku because I let my guard down. You've almost been raped by my clone and almost died 3 times. 3 times, Hinata. Naruto yelled in pain and rage. I was not meant to be loved because all those who do only end up getting badly hurt or even worse, killed. All Hinata could do was stare at him in disbelief. Although she was unsure of the source of his delusions, she was determined to stop them. Hinata got ready to give him a motivational speech, making sure his gaze met hers. "Stop it, Naruto-kun. You know that's not true. I might have almost died on the bridge, but it was you who made sure I was taken to safety. Your clone may have almost raped me, but it was not only Gaara but you too who stopped him. I might have almost died twice by your clone's hands, but it was you saved me on both accounts. Hinata said but did not respond. Naruto shot back, but I was the reason they happened in the first place. Naruto attempted to turn away from her eyes, but she clamped both of her hands onto his cheeks, making him maintain eye contact. Then how do you explain you saving me from Kumo's second attempt to kidnap me? Did you cause it, Naruto-kun? She asked. You see, you don't have to be the cause of the problem to save me. Though Hinata merely gave him a kind smile, Naruto retorted, of course not, but I'll still save you anyways. Naruto closed his eyes and sighed, cursing himself, and why is that, Naruto-kun? He replied, because I love you. Hinata nodded. With her hands falling down his face and onto his chest, Hinata said, and I love you too, Naruto-kun, which is why I'll never let you go or let you say bad things about yourself. And just like you're there for me, I'll always be there for you. Naruto laughed and pulled her into a tighter embrace. Okay. You win, but I still don't think that it's safe for you to be around me. As he picked Hinata up bridal style and felt her cuddle up to him, Naruto nodded and said, I don't care, Naruto-kun. Like I said before, I love you and I refuse to let you go. Now let's go to a hotel and get some sleep. With a warm smile, he leapt toward the hotel that Gaara had previously shown them. The day was almost over, and Gaara watched the sun set from the top of the wall that defended Suna from outside invaders. He sat with his left leg out and his right knee up, with his left arm supporting his upper body and his right arm resting on his right knee. His mind wandered through its memories while his teal eye gazed off into space. He was aware that no demon or monster could ever love or be loved. The siren's song of love could not calm them. They were just too bloodthirsty and reckless. He was aware that he was a demon who would never be able to love. However, was what Naruto had previously told him accurate? That perhaps Matsuri was interested in him romantically? Gaara let out a heavy sigh and kept gazing into space. It didn't matter anyhow. He couldn't just approach Matsuri and inquire if she. Gee, Gaara? Gaara was startled to see Matsuri when he turned at the sound of his name. Gaara moved his weight around to sit comfortably and gaze at Matsuri. Matsuri, what are you doing here? He asked. I usually come here around this time. It's where I usually come when I have to think, she replied with nervousness. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I guess I'll. Gaara was interrupted by Matsuri, who said quickly, no, it's okay, I'll go. Unaware of Matsuri's blush, Gaara proposed, why don't we both stay? I see no harm in it. Sure. She moved cautiously to the wall's edge and took a seat a short distance from Gaara. The distance Matsuri placed between them saddened Gaara. Matsuri stumbled. So Gaara-kun. If you don't mind me circa calling you T. That. Gaara simply shook his head. Matsuri looked at him and cocked her head, saying, not at all, if anything, it makes me feel assured. She questioned, assured? What are you assured of? Gaara forced himself to look at Matsuri instead of the fading sun. Gaara replied, that you're not afraid of me. Matsuri said, as though it were the most straightforward thing in the world, I'm not afraid of you, Gaara-kun. Gaara blushed at his gaze and gave her a look of pure bewilderment and curiosity. If anything, I admire you. After some silence, he finally said, you do? She responded with such conviction that her stutter was absent. Yes, I do. Then, with a satisfied sigh, she turned to face the setting sun without addressing anyone specifically. She said, it's beautiful, isn't it? Yes, it is. Gaara replied, keeping his gaze fixed on Matsuri. The move that could put an end to everything was this one. As Shikamaru's gaze swept over the board, perspiration trickled down his brow. When Tamari noticed that he was having trouble making his move, she smiled. She had him in front of her, perspiring and bewildered, exactly where she wanted him. Shikamaru was examining his pieces when he turned to face Tamari. His gaze swept over her entire body before settling on her teal eyes. What exactly was she planning? Shikamaru struggled with that question because Tamari had undressed after every game, removing one item of clothing because it was a bit too hot. It wasn't warm enough for him to strip down, so he didn't buy it. Then Shikamaru understood what she was doing. He was so foolish to have missed it sooner. She was attempting to divert his attention. That makes sense, of course, since he's been too preoccupied to think clearly ever since she took off her outer armor. He closed his eyes and scoffed. He was still struggling to think clearly because his mind was picturing Tamari sitting provocatively in front of him, her smile making his heart race. As Shikamaru positioned his knight in the center of the board, he thought, damn that smile. Tamari quickly retaliated, shifting her rook behind his king and in front of his queen. He gave a furious grunt, and she grinned, as if she could read his thoughts. To put it mildly, this was problematic because she was holding him in the palm of her hand. Temari's sultry tone made Shikamaru shudder as she asked, "What's wrong, Shika-kun?" Careful not to ruin the game, she got down on her hands and knees and began to crawl over the board. She was directly in front of Shikamaru, lustfully gazing into his eyes. She was approaching him more and more, and Shikamaru leaned back. He appeared to be out in the rain without an umbrella as his perspiration kept trickling down his brow. "Come on, Shika-kun. You can tell me." Temari grinned as she stood just an inch from Shikamaru. He had to restrain himself from kissing her as her hot breath touched his lips, and she whispered, "I won't bite." He couldn't let girls, more especially, this unruly girl, disturb him from his mission. Shikamaru's cheeks flushed, and he cleared his throat. "Well, you're kind of on the board so." Temari smirked and pushed the board off the cage's desk, at which point Shikamaru stopped. He said, "I see." Temari scowled. Shikamaru blinked when she said, "Is that all you can think about? The game?" To his relief and dismay, Temari sighed and retreated, saying, Her gaze was distant as she sat at the edge of the cage's desk. Shikamaru observed her and sat next to her when she stopped moving. Shikamaru looked to his side as she said, "I don't understand it, Shikamaru." "What?" He rubbed his neck and asked in a bored tone. When he looked back down, he flinched as she glared at him. Temari's hands stopped Shikamaru before he could say, "I feel like smacking you around instead of beating you with my fan." Shikamaru raised an eyebrow. "If any boy had got on my nerves, they would have been in the hospital already, but you, I don't think I can do that to you, not without a better reason." Temari, she blushed and turned her head away from Shikamaru, saying, and, "I feel comfortable around you, Shikamaru, which is an odd thing for me." Temari looked up and started to say, "I just won." But Shikamaru's lips stopped hers from moving. Her body was rigid and her eyes were wide. Shikamaru couldn't help but laugh when he saw Temari's stunned and panting face after breaking the kiss. Shikamaru continued to look into her eyes and said, "You need to know how to shut up, you know that." After blushing, she finally settled on a glare. He was pushed away from her, his back resting on the desk, and he said, "Troublesome, what now?" When he looked up, Temari leapt over him, straddling his waist and holding his wrists down. Temari and he both turned a deep shade of red, but that didn't stop her from straddling him. She yelled, "I'm not going to be the uke." Shikamaru smirked, perplexing her. Before Temari could respond, Shikamaru gave her another seductive kiss, which dissuaded her enough that he was able to roll them over and have him over her while holding her wrist down. "There's no way I'm going to let you take over." She jolted out of her blissful reverie and became aware of their current state when they parted. Shikamaru attacked her neck with feather, like kisses while ignoring her growl. She didn't want to be the uke, so she refrained from moaning in pleasure from them. His kisses began to move lower until they touched her collarbone as Shikamaru grinned at her fortitude. Shikamaru laughed when she moaned a little because the feeling she was getting from it was nearly too much for her. But as he began to move even deeper into her cleavage, all the way to the valley, he refused to give her space to speak. As he relentlessly attacked the top of her breasts, she flushed and raked her hand through his brown hair. As he persisted in his attack, she encircled his waist with her legs. It was beginning to heat up. With a sigh, Gaara ascended the cage tower's stairs. He didn't want to leave Matsuri wandering the streets of Suna by herself, so he had just dropped her off at her house in the middle of the night. He heard something thumping, or at least banging against something, as he got closer to the office. "Temari." He heard the boy with the pineapple hair shout. When Gaara opened the door to the cage's office, he saw Shikamaru sitting on the cage's desk in the lotus position, waiting for Temari to move. As Gaara glanced around, Temari smiled and said, "Oh Gaara, how are you?" Gaara's deadpan tone, which sounded 10 times more exhausted than normal, asked, "What was that banging sound?" Gaara saw his older brother's unconscious form as she gestured to the corner. Gaara rubbed his temples and said, "The idiot said something that pissed me off. She always says that." "It's late, shouldn't you two be asleep or something?" replied Gaara. Temari suppressed a yawn as Shikamaru used his left hand to rub the back of his neck and shrugged. Shikamaru gave her a strange look before witnessing her toss the Konoha scroll at Gaara, saying, "We were waiting for you, Gaara." Gaara opened the scroll and said, "Here, this came for you." He then closed it and moved to the desk. Temari nodded when Shikamaru said, "Wait a minute, you mean your brother is the cage?" He questioned, "Why didn't anyone tell us?" "No one asked, and besides, this is more like a trail. This village still hates me for the demon in me, so they don't know about it yet. So please refrain from telling others unless completely necessary. Am I understood?" Gaara said, and Shikamaru nodded in agreement. Good, now you may go, I'll have a look at the scroll tomorrow. Gaara shook his head in response to Shikamaru's question, you're not going to read it now? Shikamaru nodded and departed the room, making his way to the hotel where his team had made reservations. There is something else of greater importance that needs my attention at the moment. Like I said, I'll take a look at it tomorrow. With a sigh, Tamari propped her feet up above the desk and settled into the chair in front of it. As Gaara gave her a weary glance, Tamari questioned, so what's so important that it needs your attention right away? Before he slammed his head against the desk and went to sleep, he replied, sleep. When Tamari went to check on him after gasping, she discovered that he was actually asleep. She chose to sleep in her own house after shaking her head. She shut off the room's lights and shut the door, saying, good night guys. Naruto closed his eyes and sat in the lotus position on the roof of the hotel where they were staying. Naruto left his team behind and crept out to sit on the roof after Shikamaru returned from his all-day location. His outer boy was stiff and immobile, and he was training with Kyuubi in his head. After practicing the hand signals Kyuubi was giving him, Naruto sensed that someone else was observing him from outside. Kyuubi said more than he asked, and Naruto nodded, so you sense it too. It's been following us ever since we left Konoha, he replied. Naruto shook his head in response to Kyuubi's statement, I've noticed that as well. It intrigues me that you didn't tell your cage about it. I wanted to know who exactly it was after. At first, I thought it was after me since every time I was near Konoha's borders, it was right there, but now, he's after me and Hinata. Chan. Naruto stated to Kyuubi. Kyuubi inquired, and what's going to happen now? Nothing, I'm not going to provoke it. Until it makes its first move, I'll just act like it's not there. Naruto replied. Naruto felt himself being forced out of his mindscape just as he was ready to ask Kyuubi a question. Naruto opened his eyes to see Gaara standing above him in the outside world. He rubbed his eyes after blinking several times. Gaara nodded when he said, oh Gaara, it's you. I'm guessing you're the reason I was pulled out of my mindscape. Naruto yawned and said, I thought you'd be asleep by now. According to Gaara, who was sitting next to Naruto, I was, but since I'm not used to sleeping, I usually only need 2 hours of sleep. I'm getting used to it little by little. Leaning back, Naruto gazed up at the stars above him. They remained silent, neither of them saying a word, and they were totally content with it. Naruto. Naruto's face twisted into a contemplative one as Gaara asked, you remember what you told me the day Jiraiya-sama fixed my seal? I want to say yes, but I can't because I don't, he replied. You told me, there's always someone out there to love, to trust. It just might be harder for some than for most. You also told me that the girl, Hinata, meant the world to you. Naruto nodded and encouraged Gaara to continue. So how did you know? Gaara nodded and said, that she was the girl for me? Naruto laughed and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly before saying, I can't really explain it. Man, how many times was I asked this question? Okay I got it. Hinata. Chan once told me that love is when you cherish a certain person above everyone else. That every moment with the person is like heaven and the moments spent apart is like hell. You would even go so far as to die for that person. I guess it doesn't make that much sense unless you've actually been in love, but... Well, I feel this way for my brother and sister. Not the heaven and hell parts, but I cherish them above everyone else because they stuck by my side, even when I was nothing but a hollow shell. Gaara replied. When Naruto and Gaara turn to face Hinata, they see her with her arms folded. Well, that's a different kind of love, especially reserved for family. Naruto said, Hinata. What are you doing up? Hinata approached Naruto and took a seat in front of him. She leaned back onto Naruto's chest, which he used as a pillow, as he wrapped his arms around her waist. She said, I couldn't sleep, something didn't feel right. Naruto gave her a worried look. What's wrong? He laughed when she said, you weren't there. Then Hinata smiled empathetically at Gaara. Love, Gaara, is a special emotion that is strongest when shared with another. Love isn't something you can buy or bribe, just an emotion Kami Sama gives you when she feels you have earned or deserved it, Hinata stated. Gaara remarked, I'm still confused, I just want to know when you know you found love. Love is like sunshine. It brings a golden glow to its beholder's face and a warm feeling all over their body. It awakens souls and opens eyes. And when it's over, it leaves billions of small memories called stars. To remind the world that it still exists. Naruto said as he tightly embraced Hinata. Hinata giggled while holding his head in her arm. Naruto laughed as Hinata remarked, you only know that because it was in that crystal heart. They both look up and notice Gaara looking thoughtfully. Well, it doesn't matter, as long as Gaara gets what I mean. They could only hope, even though they weren't sure if they reached him. Gaara said, "What about a kiss?" Naruto said, what about it?" He began to feel a little uneasy and asked, "How do they, feel like?" Hinata and Naruto exchanged glances before turning to face him. Shikamaru yawned and sat down close to the three, surprising everyone as they turned around. "It's like love, Gaara, hard to describe." "Is everyone going to wake up now? Should we wait for Sasuke to wake up and then we can really start the conversation?" sarcastically asked Naruto. Hinata asked, "Shikamaru, how do you know how a kiss, or love, feels like?" And he began to perspire. He said, "Are you saying I can't be loved?" And Hinata put her hands over her mouth. Hinata said, hoping she hadn't offended the Nara, "No, I'm just asking because, you don't seem to hang out with any other girl except Ino, and that's only because of your team." He shrugged and waved it away. With a frustrated sigh, Shikamaru turned to face the stars and said, "It's okay, I understand what you mean." Shikamaru said, "When you kiss a girl, or in Hinata's case a boy, it sends chills down your body and gives you a sense of contentment that you can't find anywhere else. It's troublesome, but it's something you look back on with a smile on your face." Naruto and Hinata stared at him incredulously, while Gaara was passive but was silently taking notes. Hinata nodded in silence as Naruto remarked, "That was deep, Shikamaru." Naruto teasingly remarked, "Also sounds like you know this from experience." With a trailing, "Yeah, Shikamaru ended the conversation. Gaara stood up and nodded. He said, "I think understand, thank you, friends," and vanished into a swirl of sand. Naruto and Hinata grinned as they watched him go. Then they remained silent and gazed up at the sky. Before long, their breathing synchronized, and they began to feel their bodies succumbing to exhaustion. Saying goodnight to the two lovers, Shikamaru got up and walked back to his room. When Naruto said, "You want to go back inside Hinata?" Hinata closed her eyes. Hinata said, "Only if you want to, I'm actually very comfortable right here in your arms." Naruto took both of her hands and began to play with them. As his body and hands warmed Hinata, he said, "Then I won't move from my place." Naruto felt her hands go limp as she yawned. He never let her hands go, but he stopped playing with them. He ripped his eyes from her serene face and turned to face the stars, recalling Hinata's sage advice on love. He closed his eyes and exhaled deeply, asking, "Kami-sama, what have I done to deserve the love of one of your angels?" Naruto, who was about to fall asleep, went on, "What have I, a demon, done to earn the opportunity to hold a beautiful angel in my arms?" As the two lay still on the hotel roof, Naruto's final words were, "Whatever I've done, I thank you for giving me my koibito." Matsuri could just make out the sounds of knocking at her front door. It was midnight when she looked at her clock. She dressed in a white shirt that was 2 sizes too big for her and walked blearily to the front door. When she opened it and saw her visitor, all thoughts of sleeping were shattered. Stunned, she said, "Gee. Gaara-kun. What are you doing here?" Gaara wanted to pinch herself to make sure she wasn't hallucinating or dreaming when she remained silent. But when his icy hand gripped her wrist as it rose from her side, she realized it wasn't a dream. She noticed a new emotion in him as she gazed into his teal eyes. Fear. As the emotion registered in her mind, she blinked repeatedly. Why would the great Gaara no Sabaku be something to be afraid of? When he tugged on her arm and she struck his body, she gasped. While his free hand slithered to the small of her back, he maintained his grip on her wrist. His eyes were terrified, fearful of her. Gaara leaned his head in her direction, but Matsuri was too preoccupied with her thoughts to notice. She didn't stop thinking until his nose touched the tip of hers, at which point she looked straight into Gaara's eyes. He remained silent, not wanting to disturb the silent tranquility that came with nightfall. She seemed to be drawn to his lips, and he to hers. Matsuri tilted her head away as a shock of electricity swept through her body as soon as their lips met. Gaara started to move again, but Matsuri stopped him this time by placing her hand on his chest. At that moment, Matsuri pieced together the fear in Gaara's eyes with their sadness, even though his eyes were still filled with fear. His fear of her rejection was evident. Matsuri's chest was rapidly rising and falling, so she asked, "Gaara-kun, what are you doing?" Her ebony eyes met his with understanding and kindness as he replied, "I don't know." She said, Are you trying to kiss me?" And Gaara hesitated to respond, his eyes displaying his anxiety once more. She bit her lower lip as he said, "Yes, I am." "Why?" she inquired. "I don't know. I used to think that everyone would eventually betray me, that you should only love yourself," he replied. "So why?" Gaara pressed his lips to hers quickly, not waiting for her to finish. Matsuri could only imagine how needy, hungry, and passionate they were. Here she was, kissing the person she liked and admired, and all she could think about was her dreams. She put her arms around Gaara's neck, closed her eyes, and returned the feelings he had for her. Because love is like sunshine. It brings a golden glow to its beholder's face and a warm feeling all over their body. It awakens souls and opens eyes. And when it's over, it leaves billions of small memories called stars. To remind the world that it still exists. Gaara cited, even though Matsuri wasn't aware of. Are you saying that you? He turned his head away from her and remarked, I don't know. Love is a foreign emotion to me. However, he says as he turns to face her, and the expression in his eyes leaves her speechless. I want to learn about it, through experience, he replied. Feeling a little taken advantage of, she said, so you only came to M.me because you want to know what love is. He gave her a hug and said, no, because you were the first to show me kindness. And also, there's something about you. I don't know what it is but, I feel, warmer around you. He said, sounding uncertain. Then he sensed a dampness on his shoulder, where Matsuri's head was. She was crying, and he stepped back to see it. Without the smile on her lips, he would have been in a panic. She said, thank you, as her legs began to give way and she collapsed into his arms, unconscious. Closing the door behind him, Gaara picked her up and carried her inside her house. He entered her room and laid her down on her bed with care. His hand brushed her cheek and he used his thumb to wipe away her tears. Unconsciously, she smiled as she leaned into his touch. As Gaara watched her sleep, she felt a sense of protectiveness toward her, as though she were a delicate yet exquisite crystal that needed to be shielded from anyone who dared to hurt her. As he watched her sleep, Gaara experienced a sense of inner peace that even subdued Shukaku's cries of disapproval and disgust. All of this stems from a single glance: strength, protection, and inner tranquility. To ensure that the stunning crystal before him would never break, he would need strength. With a smile on his face, he bent down and planted a final, gentle kiss on her lips. He experienced the same chill that the Slack Nin had described. Gaara conjured up a cloud of sand beneath his feet, lifting him off the ground as he left her house and checked to make sure it was locked. He gave the cloud instructions to transport him to his office so he could start working on the paperwork that was waiting for him there. He reflected on the kiss as he drove to the office, and his smile widened. He hoped he had simply discovered love in Matsuri, but it was a very complex emotion. As he, Hinata, Sasuke, and Shikamaru left Suna's entrance and made their way to their house, Naruto waved to Gaara. Tamari was giving him a seductive look when Shikamaru looked at her. He turned his head and waved to her from behind, blushing but grinning. He then turned to face Naruto, who was now focusing on his girlfriend, who was standing beside him and grinning. With an aura of brooding, Sasuke walked in front of everyone in silence. Hinata giggled, Shikamaru smirked, and Sasuke frowned as Naruto declared, I can't wait to go home. I can't believe we've been there for almost a week. As soon as I see Konoha, I'm going straight to Ichiraku's and eat ramen till I explode. When Naruto saw Sasuke's gloomy face, he scowled but remained silent, at least until they arrived in Konoha. It has been nearly 3 days since Shikamaru's team left Suna, and if the scenery was any indication, they were near Konoha. Sasuke's mood was worsening every hour, and Naruto was still concerned about him. He had asked Hinata and Shikamaru if they knew anything about it, but they were as knowledgeable as he was and had no answers. Naruto made the decision to confront him about it at last. Sasuke scowled at Naruto as he said, What's wrong with you, Sasuke? You look like hell. As he walked a little more quickly, Sasuke yelled, Leave me alone, Dobi. Naruto grabbed his arm as he ran up to catch up. What did I? Sasuke attempted to punch Naruto, but Naruto leapt back. Hey! Naruto dodged a roundhouse kick, but he failed to notice a side swipe. Sasuke's fist dug into Naruto's stomach, causing him to cough. Trying to ignore the pain in his stomach, Naruto stumbled backwards before getting up and running to Sasuke. However, Hinata grabbed his right arm and held him back. Naruto and Sasuke merely glared at one another when Hinata said, We shouldn't fight each other, we're teammates, remember? I don't know what your problem's been these days, Teme, but it's gotta stop, asked Naruto. Sasuke yelled back, You're my problem, Dobi. Hinata made a valiant effort to stop Naruto from approaching him closely. He exclaimed, Why does Itachi find you so interesting? And Naruto and Hinata retreated a few paces. Naruto hesitated, wondering if he was aware of his training with Itachi. What do you mean? He asked. Hinata feared that Sasuke would discover the truth and attack Naruto. You know what I'm talking about, when he came with that other blue guy to get you. What is it about you that has Itachi's interest? Sasuke yelled. Shikamaru calmly remarked, Sasuke, you're being troublesome. Calm down. Sasuke snapped back, you stay out of this, before turning to face Hinata. Sasuke commanded, you two, get out of the way. Naruto defended Hinata by saying, don't talk to her like that, with that tone. Naruto growled, but he saw a gleam in Sasuke's eyes that he had never seen before. And why not? I was the one who saved her by rushing her to the hospital when she went into cardiogenic shock. If anything, she should have left you for me. Where were you when she needed you the most? Oh, that's right, you were killing someone? Sasuke yelled. I'm surprised she stayed with you as long as she has. I almost feel sorry for her for having to love someone like you. You're nothing special. You're just like everyone else. Don't be surprised if one day she leaves you for me. Everyone stared at him with disbelief. Naruto's right fist struck Sasuke in the face, instantly sending him back. Shut up, Sasuke, you don't know what you're talking about, Naruto screamed, nearly losing control of his feelings of anger. Naruto nodded in his head as Sasuke stood, saying, breathe kid, he's just trying to get under your skin. Black, fire. Like shapes began to spread from the left side of his neck, and he began to laugh. After a moment, the black flames covered Sasuke's entire left side of body. Sasuke yelled, you want to fight? I'll give you a fight, as he vanished from view, only to be struck hard in the ribs. Before he recovered, he was rolling on the ground and turned to see where the kick had come from, but Hinata and Shikamaru were the only people there. Naruto moaned, to slow, as Sasuke's fist struck his face and he took off across the densely forested area. Every tree in Naruto's path was broken when his back struck one, then continued past it and onto the next. Picking himself up from the trees and dusting himself off, he recovered. When he looked up, he saw Sasuke approaching him slowly. Sasuke had no idea what he was in for the moment, but Naruto snarled as he drew one of his swords. Minato. Kun. Minato winced as he heard his lover's yell as he entered his house. He barely had time to think before a red blur struck him and sent him flying from the house. With concern, Kushina inquired, where were you? Minato kept blinking at her. Working, was his perplexed response. Kushina nestled against his chest and gave him a tight hug. Minato stood with Kushina still clinging to him like a lifeline as she said, I missed you so much. Kushina pouted when Minato said, but we saw each other an hour ago. She stepped away from Minato and said, what, I can't miss you anymore, you want me to leave you alone forever? Minato took Kushina by the arm and pulled her in for another embrace, saying, oh no you don't. She laughed when he told her, you're not doing that to me again, I learned my lesson the last time. Kushina teased, good, I was afraid that I was going to have to teach you everything. Minato blushed, recalling a specific lesson. Minato's red face and silence gave her the reassurance she needed to say, looks like you remember my favorite. The thought of their son remaining in Suna caused her pleasure to fade, and she let out a sigh. Observing her abrupt shift in attitude, Minato questioned, what's wrong, Kushina-chan? She responded, allowing her lover to console her, I'm still worried about Naruto. He's been gone for almost a week now and I miss him too. After picking her up in bridal fashion, he entered his house. Kushina grinned as Minato reassured her with a joke, come on, you saw how skilled he is when he attacked me. He's a strong shinobi who will need at least an army to stop him, not unlike his old man. Her arms were around his neck, and she said, you're right. We have nothing to worry about. As he ascended the stairs and kicked open the door to their room, she inhaled his aroma. Before he could do anything else, Kushina pulled him into a passionate kiss while her arms were still around his neck after he gently placed her on the bed. Boom! A loud explosion that shook the ground and reverberated throughout the entire village cut short Minato and Kushina's kiss. Looking out the window, Minato and Kushina noticed a cloud of smoke rising from somewhere around half a mile from where they were now. After Minato put on his Anbu mask, he and Kushina exchanged glances, nodded, and vanished in a cloud of smoke. Just outside their home, they saw a couple of Jonin and even fewer Anbu dash to the location of the smoke cloud. As soon as they sensed a huge amount of chakra building up close to the smoke cloud, everyone stopped suddenly. Boom! As the majority of the Jonin began to perspire, another massive explosion shook the earth from beneath them and the Anbu. They questioned whether the vast chakra reserves belonged to an adversary shinobi and, if so, whether they could stop it. Knowing who had enough chakra reserves to perform a jutsu that required a lot of chakra, Minato and Kushina knew better than to believe that. When they arrived, they were shocked to see Sasuke avoiding a swift swipe from Naruto as they started to run to where a fight was most likely taking place. Kushina-san. Kushina went to look at Shikamaru and Hinata. Hinata and Shikamaru stood in front of the two adults and shouted, Kushina-san. You have to stop them. as Naruto ducked a gigantic fireball and hurled a chakra blade at Sasuke. Minato peered at him from beneath his mask. The remaining Anbu and Jonin from earlier arrived a moment later and observed the battle from afar. Minato used his outstretched right arm to stop one Anbu from intercepting them. The other Anbu nodded their heads in agreement as he gave the order, "Let's let them get it out of their system first. We'll stop them when we have to." Then, as they glared at one another, everyone's attention was drawn to Sasuke and Naruto, who were both panting. Well, Sasuke was panting, and Kyuubi was healing Naruto's cuts and bruises. When Sasuke saw that Naruto wasn't even winded, at least not to the extent that it was obvious, his resentment flared. In order to see how strong he was in comparison to Naruto, his thoughts were fixed on harming him, possibly even killing him if necessary. Sasuke instinctively flicked through a few hand signals before he put his right hand around his left wrist. Sasuke's left hand was glistening with electricity, and he could hear the chirping of thousands of birds. After shaking his head and summoning chakra to his palm while spinning it, Naruto cocked his right hand to the side. After a while, Sasuke and Naruto were just looking at one another while obligingly listening to bellows and shouts coming from the side. Now, they didn't care about that. They were going to resolve this once and for all and determine which shinobi was superior. Both shinobi charged at one another with their attacks ready to be sprung after an unofficial signal. Naruto and Sasuke each launched their individual attack 10 feet away and waited for the impact until Ninja Art. Toad Mouth Trap. All of a sudden, something seized either Naruto's right or Sasuke's left wrist, as well as both shinobi's legs. Naruto composed himself after realizing that he was only a few inches from Sasuke and that his Rasengan was pointed at Sasuke's heart. His eyes widened as he realized that he was going to kill Sasuke or at least seriously injure him. Sasuke also saw that Naruto's left hand was just inches from his chest, and he cursed because he nearly killed him. Looking around, Naruto noticed that he was inside the esophagus of a large, fire-breathing Myobokuzen toad, with some of its skin wrapped around both of their wrists. Between the two boys, an Anbu materialized, squatting with his face turned toward Naruto. Sasuke was knocked out with a chop to the neck by a second Anbu that appeared behind him. After Naruto cancelled his Rasengan and the Chidori disappeared from Sasuke's grasp, the Anbu released the jutsu, and the devastation that had once been a forest once more encircled them. There were now enormous craters all around and trees that had fallen on top of one another. Naru-chan, Naruto thought as he turned to see Kushina glomping him after sprinting to him. As his mother began to nurse him, Naruto moaned to make sure he was okay before she struck him over the head. Naruto exclaimed, "Ow, what was that for?" but stopped when he saw his mother glaring at him. She reprimanded, "How can you do something so stupid, and to your teammate no less?" Naruto sneered. "Yeah right, what I did was not stupid, it was self-defense. I did continue the fight, only tried to survive it." Naruto defended himself. Kushina continued to glare until she rubbed her head and sighed. After hearing Sasuke scoff, Kushina turned to face him and said, "It doesn't matter Naru-chan. You could have killed Sasuke with your Rasengan." He rubbed his neck while seated on the ground. Minato, who was informing his team about what had happened in the toad's esophagus, shuddered in fear for his former pupil as Kushina said ominously, "It's true and you could have killed him with your Chidori, which reminds me, I still have a scarecrow to kill." Then Kushina took hold of Sasuke's and Naruto's ears and drew them to her. She said sweetly, "And if I find out that both of you pull this stunt again then you'll hear from me. Got that?" Both boys nodded apprehensively. "Good." Still exhausted from finishing her 2-day mission, she released them both and made her way back to her house. Minato walked back with Kushina, vanishing from the crowd. Sasuke and Naruto scowled at one another, aware that their battle was far from over. When Hinata was being questioned by an ANBU, Naruto was the first to break eye contact and approach her. Naruto took Hinata's hand and entwined their fingers, saying, "She'll finish this later, right now, we gotta go get debriefed by Tsunade." Sama. He wasn't sure, but he didn't really care that the Anbu appeared to be glaring at Naruto. Although the Anbu took a while to respond, Naruto didn't wait for him to do so before dragging Hinata and approaching Shikamaru, who was already on the path to Konoha. When Sasuke remained in his position, the other Anbu and Jonin began to scatter. He would have won the battle because his Sharingan, which was in use at the time of the attack, saw that Naruto's hand was closer to his chest than his own. This realization made Sasuke frown, and lightning encircled his hand. He roared in frustration and slammed his left hand down, expressing all of his frustrations at once. Sasuke dug his hand out of the ground after the dust had settled and looked at it, wondering why he was still weak. Sasuke kept staring at his hand when he heard a dark chuckle. When he turned and saw 4 other shinobi, Sasuke's frown deepened. So, I see you realize that you would have lost. It was clear that the person on the far right was a girl because she had pink hair and bandages on her head. The man on her left was a giant with 3 sections of orange hair, with a mohawk in the middle of it. A silver-haired man with what appeared to be a rosary around his neck stood to his left. The last one, with his hair up like Shikamaru and 6 arms, was really one of a kind. The person with 6 arms, who had spoken first, scoffed, "Pathetic. And we thought you were the top of the game, but it looks like it's actually the blonde brat." The 4 of them laughed as Sasuke yelled, "Who the hell are you?" The 6-armed man exclaimed, "The Sound 4, East Gate's Kidomaru." "South's Gate Jirobo," exclaimed the giant man. The silver-haired man said, "West Gate's Saken." The girl with the pink hair said, "North Gate's Tayuya." Sasuke said angrily, "The hell do you 4 clowns want?" And Kidomaru laughed. As he went on, Sasuke activated his Sharingan and charged at the man, saying, "Looks like someone can bark, but can he bite? Remember, kid, the weakest one in the game always goes down first." But before he could get there, Tayuya was standing in front of him, playing a song. Sasuke saw that she was applying genjutsu to him, but he was able to dodge it and kick her in the stomach thanks to his Sharingan. Unprepared for this, Kidomaru threw Tayuya back and caught him. Saken attempted to punch him in the face, but Sasuke ducked and kicked him in the chest, knocking Saken back. Sasuke put his hand between the holes in the purple belts they both wore and leapt over Jirobo, who attempted to knock him out with a blow to the back of the head. Kidomaru turned and threw both of them to the other 2 who were still getting over his kicks, but Sasuke grabbed the punch and held onto it. When they looked up, they saw their 2 teammates collide with each other. When the dust cloud cleared, Sasuke noticed that the other 4 shinobi had been replaced by 4 logs. Saken attempted a roundhouse kick, but Sasuke raised his right arm and stopped it. He extracted some wire from his pouch and wrapped it around the man's leg. Saken split up, but before he could move, Sasuke attempted to kick his face and tied his leg to a downed tree. Saken grabbed hold of it and blocked it, making Sasuke smile before he leapt and punched him in the face but was blocked once more. Unfazed, Sasuke twisted his body and kicked him with his other leg. Saken's arms crossed to block it, and Sasuke threw his free hand through Saken's defense. Sasuke screamed in agony as an unseen punch suddenly materialized and struck his sternum, knocking him back. Sasuke recovered by doing a backflip while dodging Kidomaru's sweeping kick. Kidomaru spat out a sticky substance, which Sasuke flipped and blocked before being pulled by it and Jirobo head-butted him. Saken gave a devilish smile as Sasuke flew straight at her. But Sasuke was crouching when he flipped in midair and landed in front of Saken. Sasuke kicked up and made contact with Saken's chin before Saken could react appropriately. Sasuke followed him into the air and punched Saken in the stomach. With his fist to Saken's face, Sasuke whirled around and gave him a backhand. Just as they hit the ground, Sasuke gave Saken a final punch to the stomach before kicking Saken in the chest with an axe. Sasuke felt someone grab hold of his heel and lift him off the ground, but his vision was blurry due to the dust. He was startled to see Saken clutching his heel while smugly staring at him after the smoke had cleared. How is he still standing like nothing happened when every attack hit? Am I really that weak? Sasuke thought indignantly. I know someone who had more experience than you. How pitiful, how could Orochimaru-sama want someone as weak as you? Saken replied. If you stay in that shitty village, you'll only get a bit stronger but never as strong as us. Tayuya continued. Sasuke frowned as his curse mark began to act strangely and he experienced pain in his neck. But if you come with us, Orochimaru will make you stronger, stronger than you can imagine. As the Sound 4 closed in on him, Saken dropped him. Kidomaru said, "It's your choice, come with us, or die right now." Sasuke frowned. The Sound 4 grinned as Sasuke questioned, "So, you said I can attain strength beyond my imagination?" Sasuke saw the 4 of them begin to laugh as Saken said, "Yes, but there is one thing you have to do before we take you back." Sitting on top of the log where Hinata was practicing her Jiyuken strikes, Naruto complained beneath his mask. Naruto yelled, "Can you believe him, Hinata-chan, saying you should go with him?" "Huh?" As Hinata gave a nod. "Please, you're mine." Hinata halted and gave him a staring expression that said, "Wanna repeat that?" Naruto laughed uneasily and began to perspire. Hinata sighed and maintained that expression. "And I'm yours." He said, "You know what I meant. I know you wouldn't leave me just like I wouldn't leave you. We're inseparable." Hinata smiled and nodded, and Naruto pondered how much time he and his mother had spent together. Naruto went on, That Teme is really losing it if he thinks I'd give you up without a fight or something. Hinata paused, inhaled deeply, and dabbed at her perspiration. Naruto leapt off the vertical log and landed next to Hinata after Hinata said, "Calm down Naruto-kun. I might not have liked what he said, but he's still part of Team 7. Let's just cool down before we do something we'll regret." He said, "Yeah, okay, but I'm still a better choice than the Teme, right?" And Hinata chose to play a practical joke on him. "Well, Hinata-chan." Naruto laughed when he noticed the smile on her face. When Hinata turned back to face him, he gave her a back hug and said, "I guess I'm going to have to prove to you I'm better than the Teme. Is that it?" Hinata leaned back into Naruto's arms as he said, "I bet the Teme can't hug you like this, not like I can." Naruto lightly kissed Hinata's neck, saying, "He can't kiss your neck," which made her blush and giggle. Naruto then turned her around, forcing her to face him and taking her by surprise. "Like I can." He smirked at her startled expression and lowered his mask to give her a kiss on the lips. A second later, his lips curled upward as she closed her eyes. He laughed when he saw her pout and broke the kiss. Naruto remarked, "Sasuke can't kiss like I can." Hinata flushed. He pressed his forehead against hers and gave her a hug. She looked into his lavender eyes and saw the truth when he said, "And I'm sure as hell that he can't love you like I do. Look into my eyes and tell me I'm lying." She said, I can't say you're lying." Naruto grinned. He took her hand and led her through Konoha hand in hand, saying, "That's because I'm not. Now come, I'm taking you out tonight." Naruto grinned as Hinata asked, "Where are we going?" Hinata grinned and giggled as he started to run after Naruto said, "To eat, but we gotta look our best." As Neji gaped at him in shock, Naruto laughed and smiled tensely, asking, "What do you want?" Naruto took her home and waited for Hinata to prepare. But he recalled that he wasn't exactly dressed nicely, and Neji was, regrettably, the closest person who most likely did. Neji blushed, crossed his arms, and muttered denials. "I said, well, if I can borrow a fancy outfit of yours. You know, something you use when you take Tenten out." "Come on. Just this once," sighed Neji, while Naruto whimpered. Naruto saluted Neji and stood at attention, saying, "Okay, but I better get it back in the same condition I got it in. Got it, Uzumaki?" Naruto yelled, "Yes sir," and Neji escorted him to his chamber. Neji said, "You can be such a child sometimes." Naruto frowned. Neji halted and turned to face him. "Yeah, the same child that beat you up, twice." Naruto winced and waved his hands in front of him, asking, "Care to repeat that?" Neji went on, and Naruto sagged his back and followed, murmuring about stiff Hyugas and how Hinata might be from that clan. No, I'm fine. I didn't say anything." Naruto entered his room and gazed in wonder. He had never seen a more orderly room in his life, with what appeared to be a bed on which he could leap and be flung through the roof at once. A desk, a chair, and other items belonging to him were present. As Neji went through his closet, Naruto nodded his head. This was precisely how he had imagined his room to look. As Naruto muttered, "Lee so owes me 25 ryos." Neji threw him a long, dark blue kimono with a light blue obi. As Naruto examined it, he noticed that the back was inscribed with the yin-yang symbol. Neji nodded in response to Naruto's question, "This is it?" Naruto's forehead vein appeared, and he scowled at the Hyuga, saying, "It's the smallest kimono I have, and even then, I think it'll be a little too big for you." Naruto screamed, "You calling me short?" And Neji grinned. Naruto averted his gaze and said, "Not in so many words." Neji's smirk vanished as Naruto declared, "I'd definitely kick your ass, again, if you weren't lending me your shirt." Naruto said, "Huh? No more smartass remarks, huh?" as he entered the hallway and ran into an object. "Ow." Naruto looked up and rubbed his head, but when he saw the clan head of the Hyuga clan directly in front of him, he quietly yelled in surprise. "Da! Hyuga! Sama!" Heishi remarked, "Uzumaki, please refrain from using such language in my home. It might be acceptable wherever you live, but here, we like to keep an air of maturity and civility." Naruto nodded and then used his head to rub his back. Heishi nodded and Naruto reassured him, "Sorry, it won't happen again." Heishi saw Naruto carrying one of Neji's older garments as he was ready to head to his office. Heishi asked, "If I may ask, what exactly are you doing with Neji's clothing?" And Naruto came up with a response. But Neji bowed to him as he emerged from his room. Naruto looked at Neji with a sense of betrayal and a lot of tears. Heishi. Sama. Naruto plans to take Hinata out to eat. Naruto gazed at Heishi with puppy dog eyes and asked, "Oh, does he? With whose permission?" "Yours?" Naruto inquired, and Heishi simply gave him a serious look before letting out a sigh. His forehead touched the floor as he bowed deeply, dropping to his hands and knees. Naruto's politeness surprised Heishi, Neji, and even the person hiding behind a door. I wish to take Hinata-chan out to dinner, if you'll permit it, Hyuga-sama. Hieshi's lips curled upward with the smallest of movements, and then he turned to leave. He smirked as Naruto stood there and said, "You have my permission. Just be sure to bring her home at an appropriate time." He smiled mischievously at Neji. "Wasn't so hard, now if you'll excuse me." Naruto slammed his face into the doorway as he passed Neji. Before shutting the door behind him, he holds his head. With a sigh, Neji raised his head and knocked on the door of his bedroom. Neji snarled and yelled, "Why are you changing in my room? Go to the bathroom," as Naruto began to whistle loudly. When Neji heard giggling, he turned around, but his mind was blocked before he could see who it was. "Hi. Hinata-sama." If he didn't say it himself, Naruto didn't look too bad, so he grinned as he examined himself in the mirror. He went to the door, opened it, and unlocked it. "Yo." As he saw Hinata speaking to Neji, he interrupted his sentence. She had on a lovely lilac kimono with sporadic sakura petal designs. She wore sandals with open toes and a white obi. She hardly applied makeup and her hair didn't look much different, but her cheeks did have a slight flush. Her dark was darkened when her eyes met his. She felt like a goddess because of the way he was staring at her, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing. In the end, Naruto's rambling greeting sounded like he was only 2 years old. "Hello, Naruto-kun." She took his left hand while giggling. "Come on, silly." As he allowed Hinata to pull him from her house and onto the sidewalk, Naruto grinned. She halted and turned to face Naruto, who at last gathered his thoughts. When Hinata asked, "So, where are we going?" Naruto took her hand, entwined their fingers, and began to move. Hinata's eyes widened as Naruto replied, "To the Calm Leaf." Hinata said, "See. Calm Leaf. But that's the most expensive restaurant in Konoha." Naruto gave a nod. Naruto laughed and turned his gaze away from Hinata, saying, "And the fanciest. Nothing's too good for my girl." He considered saying, "It doesn't hurt that the owner still owes my mom a favor," but he decided it was too unimportant to share out loud. Hinata grinned and thanked Kami for allowing her to find joy in Naruto, but she was only able to look at the back of his head. She pondered what had caused Naruto to stop walking. She saw Naruto-kun looking closely at the forest to their left and asked, "What's wrong, Naruto-kun?" After giving her a serious look and shaking his head, he leaned close to her left ear. Naruto whispered in Hinata's ear, "Hinata, use your Byakugan and tell me what's over there." With a nod, she discreetly triggered her Byakugan. She turned back to the forest, gasping. Naruto-kun. Sasuke's out there and he has. Naruto turned to face the forest and used his chakra to encircle it, saying, "Yeah, I thought that was what he had. Hinata, I want you to go tell Ba-chan about this while I try to stop him." When Naruto saw something flee from him, he swore, "Come out Sasuke, I know you're there." "Damn it Teme." Naruto sprinted after him, determined to reclaim what was rightfully Konoha's. Naruto persisted, and Hinata chose to pay attention to him, making her way to the Hokage's tower. Naruto-kun, wait, he said. When Hinata stormed into the Hokage's office, she was shocked to find it empty, the blinds drawn, and the lights out. When Hinata turned around, Shizune was staring down at her when she bumped into him. "Hinata. What are?" Hinata began, no time to explain Shizune-san Sasuke. But Shizune walked right by her and into the vacant office. She cried out, "Where is Tsunade? Sama?" Hinata followed her, but Shizune continued to pass her. "Oh my, this isn't good. Shizune." She called, but she vanished down the hallway before Shizune could hear her. Biting her lower lip, Hinata contemplated her next course of action. In search of assistance, she fled the Hokage tower and headed down the street. Hinata yelled, "Neji-ne-san," and attracted her cousin's attention. Neji started to say, "Hinata, Sama, I thought," but was cut off. "I know, but I need your help. Sasuke is trying to leave the village and Naruto-kun's already gone to stop him. And besides that, I noticed that 4 other people were waiting for Sasuke a mile or so outside the village. We need to help him," she replied with a nod. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. You will use the Byakugan to find any available shinobi and tell them this. I'll go after Naruto and act as backup. Agreed?" Hinata nodded and the two of them left. Hinata hoped Naruto and Neji would return alive as she looked for assistance. When Naruto saw Sasuke's silhouette, he hurried past the trees. When he increased the pace of his run and was now only 2 feet behind him, his eyes narrowed. "Sasuke!" exclaimed Naruto. Before he looked forward once more and was able to put more distance between himself and Naruto, Sasuke's head turned toward him. In a fit of rage, Naruto launched himself into the air, hovering just above Sasuke, as chakra erupted from the soles of his feet. Naruto inhaled deeply, then slammed his fist back and growled ferociously. When Sasuke looked up, Naruto punched him in the face, causing him to crash to the ground and leave a trail as his momentum viciously dragged his body against the ground. Sasuke was holding something that fell to the ground and rolled beneath a tree, but Naruto was too focused on him to notice. With a silent thump, Naruto landed a few feet from Sasuke and waited for him to get up. Sasuke stood, struggling, and used the back of his hand to wipe the blood from his mouth as he laughed. Naruto growled at Sasuke after he said, "You actually hit me." Sasuke laughed when Naruto said, "Where the hell do you think you're going with the scroll of sealing? If you keep escaping from me, I'll do more than that." With a smile that made Naruto question how stable Sasuke's mind was at the moment, Sasuke told him, "I'm going to take it to Orochimaru, where he'll take me in and make me even stronger than I am now." Naruto pulled one of his swords from inside his kimono and declared, "That's not going to happen. Not while I'm alive and breathing." With a laugh, Sasuke pulled out a kunai. When 4 new figures emerged behind Sasuke, Naruto tensed, thinking, "I guess we'll have to do something about that then." Sasuke bellowed at the sound 4, "I can handle him." Sakin threw Sasuke a black pill after saying, "I'm sure, but we have to do something to you before you can come with us." "Here." Sasuke gazed at the pill, then snarled and consumed it, saying, "Eat it and then leave the rest to us." Naruto frowned as the sound 4 grinned. Naruto would have a difficult time with this. Standing in front of a home belonging to someone she knew could be of some assistance, Hinata gasped. When she knocked on the door, she was relieved that the person she was seeking was there. Kiba was shocked to see Hinata at his house at such a late hour and asked, "Hinata, what are you doing here?" He had long since concluded that he was no longer in the arduous race for Hinata's affections. He knew in his heart and mind that he would never be viewed as anything less than a friend, if that, in Hinata's eyes, even though a tiny spark of affection was still present. Kiba glanced around, but Naruto was nowhere to be seen. He said, "And where's Naruto?" And Hinata took hold of his sleeve. Hinata informed him, and Kiba arched an eyebrow, "That's just it, something happened with Sasuke and now he left the village. Naruto.kun and Neji.ne.san went to go recover him." "So, sure Sasuke is pretty good, but he's got Naruto and Neji on his tail. I'm sure the numbers game will eventually play in," Kiba replied. Hinata gave a headshake. There were 4 others waiting a mile away, no doubt to reinforce Sasuke. Hinata was crying, "Please Kiba, help them." Kiba couldn't bring himself to refuse Hinata's request after looking into her eyes. He sighed and yelled for Akamaru before announcing his departure from the house. After they were outside, Kiba trailed behind Hinata as she used her Byakugan. It was nearly a minute before he let out another sigh. Hinata turned to face Kiba as he asked, "So, what do you want me to do?" Kiba nodded when Hinata said, "I want you to go after them and help them. I have no doubt that they're fighting as we speak." However, Kiba took a quick look at his hands before leaving. Akamaru yipped at him, seemingly encouraging him to say what was on his mind, while Hinata blinked at his hesitation. Hinata's perplexed expression turned to one of sorrow as she said, "Listen, Hinata, it's probably obvious by now, but I've had a crush on you since the academy." She started to say, "Oh Kiba," but Kiba stopped her with a raised hand before she could finish. Kiba inhaled deeply and said, "No, let me finish, I have a little more to say." Hinata nodded to indicate that she was paying attention. "I've tried so hard to get your attention, from being a jerk to others just so you'd notice me to trying to outdo and even hating the one you loved. It's hard to explain, but I guess just because you were different. In a good way. From the other girls, I felt that you were right for me. I still think you are," he said, "but it's obvious that I'm not right for you. I see it now. It's taken me some time, but I know now that I can never be nothing more than a comrade to you," Kiba said with a sigh. Hinata nodded and closed her eyes as Kiba said, "I accept this, but I just wanted to let you know." Kiba looked up and saw Hinata grinning at him. "Kiba," he said. Her words made Kiba feel as though they were knives that pierced his heart. "I'm flattered, really, I am, but it's as you said, I belong in Naruto and he to me. Nothing in this world can change that." Kiba gave her a, "I think I should," look as he looked up at her, "but, just because I don't feel the same way doesn't mean you should give up on love. I'm serious. In this world, I'm sure there's a lucky girl out there waiting to meet and eventually fall in love with you," Hinata said with conviction. Kiba saw no deceit in her eyes and sighed. For now, you have to be patient and wait for this girl to enter your life. Closed his eyes and hung his head, Kiba said, I guess I have no choice but to wait. But when he felt Hinata kiss his cheek, he was taken aback. Startled, he looked up. She hurried away after saying, thank you for helping me. Kiba sighed as he watched her go. He had felt nothing after the kiss, no fireworks, no heartbeat as quick as a flying kunai. If what she said was accurate, he still had a chance at love, but he figured he was truly over Hinata. As long as he lived through the ordeal he was about to enter. Jirobo, the largest of the Sound Four, was the target of Naruto's hateful gaze. Sasuke was taken by the others shortly after Jirobo was ordered to kill Naruto in addition to keeping him occupied. Naruto was aware that a single move would be enough to defeat this joker, but in order to instill some common sense in Sasuke, he wanted to preserve as much chakra as possible. Jirobo cursed at Naruto in his head as sweat trickled down his brow. He hasn't even perspired yet, but he was too fast for the majority of his jutsus. Jirobo pondered whether he would have to use the curse mark's first level. Naruto was startled to see Neji when he turned after hearing footsteps approaching. Neji? Asked Naruto out loud, and Neji grinned. Neji remarked, I thought I told you to return my kimono in the same condition you received it. Naruto also grinned. Neji shook his head in response to Naruto's statement, not in so many words, and besides, the night isn't over yet. Neji inquired, where's Sasuke? Jirobo, who was observing Naruto's chat with Neji, caught Naruto's attention. Gazing at Jirobo, Naruto informed him, he's up ahead with 3 others, all at least mid-Chunin level. In addition to studying Jirobo, Neji turned on his Byakugan and searched for the other 3. Naruto's eyes narrowed as Neji said, I see them and Sasuke's in some barrel. Jirobo became so enraged at Naruto's statement that he charged at the 2 Konoha genin. Yeah, it happened just before they left. Those bastards drugged him and put him in some barrel. They kept Tubby here to keep me company while they ran off. He slammed his hands on the ground, shaking it and sending debris flying into the air, and both leapt away from him. Neji landed beside Naruto and said, you go ahead Naruto, go catch up to them. After giving him a brief glance, Naruto shook his head. Neji shook his head and said, I need you and your Byakugan to come with me, so they don't get me by surprise. Neji insisted, it wouldn't matter if they get away. Naruto shot back, it wouldn't matter if they blow me up by some trap. Jirobo seized Naruto's and Neji's necks and uttered, it won't matter once I'm done with you too. Neji's reaction was swift, and he released himself by using his rotation. Naruto laughed and substituted a log with an explosive note on it for himself. Jirobo released Neji without hesitation, but he was blind to the new object that had replaced Naruto, and it exploded in his grasp. He threw back his hand and swore aloud. After giving it some thought, Neji nodded and said, how about I just distract him with shadow clones long enough for Hinata's reinforcement to arrive? Naruto gave a cheeky grin. Naruto yelled, time to go to work. Shadow clone jutsu, as he made a hand gesture and smoke filled the clearing. While he waited for the smoke to subside, Jirobo activated his first level curse seal. To his surprise, he was surrounded by over 20 Narutos. As he dashed into the Naruto crowd, he swore, damn it. With his Byakugan active, Neji uttered, come on, we can still catch up to them if we go now. After Naruto nodded, they departed in the hopes that they would both live through this ordeal. He did what? Shikamaru questioned incredulously. Hinata said, he ran off and I need your help, and yours too, Choji. Shikamaru glanced at the ground as Choji nodded. Shikamaru asked, you know this is going to be troublesome, right? And Hinata gave a nod. All right, Shikamaru said, let's get this over with. Not without me, you guys won't. Lee startled Hinata by leaping down from somewhere. Hinata said, oh Lee, you scared me. Lee laughed and kept crouching from his landing. Lee nodded in response to Shikamaru's question, so, you want to come to you? I guess the more we have, the better. We better go now, we're wasting time. Later. Shikamaru heard grunting and punches hitting flesh and questioned, what's that? Sounds like a fight. Lee replied briskly. Hinata and the others approached and she said, come on. To their surprise, there were only 3 Narutos engaged in combat with an unknown individual. Naruto.kun. Jirobo and the 3 Narutos paused their battle to gaze at Hinata, who was standing with Lee, Choji, and Shikamaru on the edge of the clearing. Jirobo mocked, more roaches? No, not roaches, more like meals. As he crept up behind Jirobo and nearly severed his head off his shoulders, one of the Narutos yelled, like hell they are. Jirobo then ducked, turned, grabbed the Naruto by the neck, and slammed him to the ground. Hinata yelled, "Naruto-kun," and was ready to go assist him when Shikamaru intervened. He grinned when she turned to face him. He insisted, "It's okay. They're all clones." Hinata hesitated a little before nodding. "By my guess, Naruto must have kept this guy busy by using his clones to attack him," Shikamaru responded. Shikamaru closed his eyes as Choji asked, "Then, where'd he go?" Hinata remarked, "He must have gone ahead to catch up to Sasuke." Shikamaru remarked, "Maybe. If that's the case, then we should get moving." Squeezing the final clone to death, Jirobo declared, "You punks aren't going anywhere." Shikamaru said, "Damn, we need to stall him." Choji glanced down at his hands, then up at Jirobo. Choji remarked, "You guys go ahead, I can handle this guy." Lee questioned, "What? Are you insane? You guys need to catch up to Naruto and Sasuke." Shikamaru said so himself. "I can stay behind and finish dealing with this guy," Choji replied. Shikamaru told him, "You're definitely insane if you think I'm leaving you behind." Deactivating her Byakugan, Hinata said, "I can barely see them now." While trying to think of a way to avoid leaving Choji behind, Shikamaru muttered curses to himself. Jirobo charged at them, impatient now. Before sprinting to meet Jirobo in the center, Choji clenched his fists. After yelling, "Go! Now!" Partial expansion jutsu. Choji's fist grew 10 times larger and he cocked his right arm back. Jirobo was only momentarily surprised, but in that brief moment, Choji gained the upper hand and delivered a forceful blow to Hirobo's face. 20 feet from Choji, he landed after flying across the clearing. Shikamaru hesitated for a second before nodding. When Shikamaru said, "You better stay alive, no heroics, got it?" Choji simply grinned and saluted him. He returned his focus to Jirobo and bided his time until he took action. Lee went ahead and said, "Let's go." Hinata placed a hand on Shikamaru's shoulder after turning to face him again. Hinata said, "He'll be okay." Shikamaru nodded a moment later, and they both continued. Choji sighed as he watched them leave. "I'm already aware that this won't be simple, I'll need to put my all into it. I apologize, Shikamaru." While Neji used his rotation to block a giant, running Doki, Naruto made quick hand gestures. The giant Doki stopped rotating, then sent its left arm down to kill Neji after rearing it back. Naruto yelled, "Fire style! Fireball jutsu!" and hurled a fireball directly at the Doki's face. It stepped back and threw its head back. Neji's reaction was swift. He repeatedly tapped the Doki's left leg before leaping away. With a growl, the Doki fell to one knee. Tayuya shouted, "You piece of shit," as she sent another Doki to cover the Doki that had fallen. In contrast to the first one, this one had bandages covering his face and everything above his waist, giving the impression that he had escaped from a mental health facility. Even though his head was upside down, a smile still managed to appear on its lips. Naruto sighed as he pulled out both of his swords and covered them with a layer of Kyuubi's chakra after Neji remarked, "He's at it again." Suddenly, 2 arrows were aimed directly at Neji, but Naruto cut them in half with his swords before they could strike, making them useless. Naruto remarked, "He's starting to get annoying." Neji nodded. Neji went on, "We need to get rid of him." From a safe distance, Kidomaru observed his prey mumbling to one another. When he saw Naruto growing irate, he laughed. His movements became a little sloppy, and his muscles grew tense. As Neji's Byakugan eyes scanned the area, Naruto inhaled deeply and said, "Calm down, Naruto. This is exactly what he wants. Naruto, I have a plan. Just follow my lead." Neji launched himself into action, sprinting directly towards Tayuya. She smirked while using her flute to play a tune. As Kidomaru fired several arrows at Neji, each joined by a lengthy spider string, he muttered to himself, "Idiot." As he continued to deflect the arrows and channel Kyuubi's chakra into his swords, Naruto swore. Naruto caught a glimpse of the 3 Doki getting ready to kill Neji before he could get to their summoner and master. He didn't bat an eye, and Neji grinned. Shadow Possession Jutsu. Neji zipped past the 3 Doki, who froze in place as he appeared inches from a startled Tayuya. As Neji got ready to close Tayuya's chakra points, Tayuya's eyes widened and he said, "You're in my field of divination." Before being engulfed by what seemed like 100 spiders, he halted and leapt back. Neji said, "That was close." Shikamaru, Lee, and Hinata landed beside Naruto as he nodded. "Hinata-chan?" inquired Naruto. "What are you doing here?" Hinata asked with a smile. He smiled and shook his head when she said, "I'm happy to see you too, Naruto-kun." Hinata nodded and said, "I'm guessing that you're here to fight, aren't you?" She shook her head, asking, "Not gonna leave?" Naruto glanced up at Tayuya, who was encircled by the army of spiders, and said, "Figures." There was a chuckle in response to Tayuya's shout, "Kitamaru, you asshole, I don't need your help." Hinata inquired, "Where's Kiba?" and Naruto sneered. Dog Breath wanted to play hero by throwing himself, along with one of the lackeys, over some cliff. "Don't worry, he'll be fine. He's too stubborn to die," Naruto replied. Hinata let out a sigh. Everyone stared at Neji as he said, "Someone needs to stay behind." Everyone glanced at one another and said, "Two, actually, maybe three." According to Shikamaru, "I'll stay." Neji offered to help, saying, "I will as well." Naruto gave Hinata a crazy look and said, "Me too." "Like hell you will," exclaimed Naruto to the crowd. Naruto.kun. Naruto turned to face Neji as though he had lost his mind. "Hinata's right, Naruto. It's better if she stays here." Naruto nodded, but he growled as Neji stepped closer and whispered, "We're dealing with the underlings of Orochimaru here and out there. Further ahead waits a foe stronger than all four of the Sound Four." Neji said, "Now go." Naruto stepped forward to face Hinata. Hinata chuckled as Naruto said, "Be safe, come back alive." "I was about to tell you the same thing," Naruto said with a smile before quickly planting a kiss on Hinata. Hinata nodded in agreement, and Naruto and Lee exchanged nods before vanishing. "I'll come back, I promise." Tayuya sent her Dokus to get Naruto and Lee and yelled, "Come back, you dickheads." As he leapt in front of the Dokus, Neji shot back, "Not so fast," rotation, as Neji spun and released chakra from his chakra points. A barrier of chakra materialized around him. The sudden attack caused two Dokus to lose their balance and were blasted back. The third managed to land behind Neji after leaping over him. But Hinata stepped in its way and assumed the gentle fist stance before it could pursue Naruto and Lee. As it charged, Doki, the insane asylum escapee, roared at Hinata. With her eyes closed, Hinata began to move her hands at various angles across her torso. Her arms began to accelerate as she pumped a steady flow of chakra from her palms, forming jagged blades of chakra. The continuous chakra blades struck the Doki as it connected, then sent it flying back, slamming into the other Doki. When her technique was finished, Hinata kept her eyes closed, her arms completely stopped at her sides, and her right leg was in front of her left. Veins appeared next to her eyes as she opened them. Eager to catch up to Sasuke and the man holding him, Naruto and Lee dashed through the forest. Naruto brought a tracking summoning tiger with them. The moonlight that could pass through the different openings in the tree's leaves caused its red, orange fur to shimmer. Naruto said, "Heat, you sure we're going the right way?" As he guided Lee and Naruto through a strange trail, Heat answered, "I'm sure." His forehead furrowed as the heat abruptly stopped. Lee questioned, "What's wrong?" Heat took a whiff of the air before snarling. Naruto and Lee exchanged glances before nodding in agreement as he stated, "The air's tainted." Lee guessed, "That's probably Sasuke." Naruto nodded. "No doubt, come on." Heat was only a burden and a tracker, not a fighter, so Naruto nodded and said, "My job is done here. It'll be risky for me to follow after you." Heat nodded and went back to his world. "Thanks. Tell Akio to be ready at a moment's notice. I might need him." Lee and Naruto dashed into a vast clearing after running through the woods. They could sense the tainted air he was referring to instantly, despite the fact that their senses were not as keen as Heat's. With just their shoes and headbands, they seemed to be standing in the middle of the snow country. Naruto nodded in response to Lee's question, "You feel it too?" As a silhouette emerged across the clearing, a chilly, stoic voice said, "So you found me, how unfortunate for you too." There was a barrel beside the silhouette. Naruto growled and said, "You jerk." The barrel began to tremble and the silhouette peered down at it. As the barrel exploded and purple smoke surrounded it, he said, "It's about time." Naruto noticed Sasuke's silhouette standing when it vanished. "Sasuke, did your little beauty sleep help you snap out of it or do I still need to beat it out of you?" said Naruto. After turning his head, Sasuke grinned and scuffed, then fled. Naruto muttered an expletive. After a brief glance at Lee, Naruto grinned and said, "Go Naruto, I'm pretty sure I can handle this guy." "No heroics," said Naruto. Lee looked at his new enemy and remarked, "Who do you think you're talking to?" "I'm a student of Guy Sensei." With a smile, Naruto shook his head and said, "Of course I'm going to be heroic." Without listening to Lee's reply, Naruto dashed across the clearing and halted when the silhouette emerged from the darkness, revealing a sickly looking teen with white hair. "Whatever, you better come back alive." "Get out of my way." Naruto swung his sword down, but Kimimaru managed to dodge it. But when the sword struck the ground, Kimimaro didn't anticipate that it would release chakra, sending debris skyward. As he leapt away, he covered his face, allowing Naruto to sprint past him and pursue Sasuke. Kimimaro growled in rage, but Lee showed up before he could stop Naruto. Leaf Hurricane. Kimimaro ducked as Lee touched down, stepping back from him. "I'm your opponent now." Because Sasuke exuded an evil aura, Naruto was able to follow him. More than anything else, it was an instinctive feeling. His eyes narrowed as he accelerated, but he halted when he noticed Sasuke standing atop the notorious Madara Uchiha statue. He approached Hashirama Senju, the head of the first Hokage, and saw Sasuke turn slowly. Sasuke said, "You're a dobe for following me." Naruto grinned. Naruto wiped his smirk from his face and went on, "You're a teme for making me follow you." Sasuke laughed and covered his left eye, concealing the black sclera and yellow pupil, saying, "You know I can't let you leave, not this way." Naruto snarled, "Ah yes, that's right, we never did finish our fight." Naruto yelled, "That's not what I'm talking about and you know it." Sasuke scowled. "A dobe like you has no right to talk to me like that. I'm Uchiha. I do as I please." Sasuke said. He went on with a hint of hysteria, "And as Uchiha, that means I'm naturally better than you in every way imaginable. When it comes down bloodline, I can't argue with you." Naruto bowed his head. Naruto pulled out one of his swords and remarked, "But between you and me, in this fight, bloodline means nothing. I will bring you down, Sasuke, not matter which family you belong to." Sasuke remarked, "We'll see about that, dobe." Naruto squinted his eyes and leapt into the air. Sasuke mimicked his motion, and the two of them were now in midair, Sasuke holding a kunai and Naruto brandishing his sword. Teme. Dobe. Unbeknownst to the two, a snake slithered through the forest, uninterestedly observing the numerous fights it passed. As it looked for its prey, a cunning smile appeared on its face. The snake will eventually spring at the best possible time. With a quick movement, Naruto slashed down at Sasuke. Sasuke used his kunai to block it and his free hand to seize his right arm. When Sasuke doubled over, Naruto instantly reacted by driving his right foot into his stomach. Then, he brought his left foot over Sasuke's head and slammed it down on his head. Water sprang up as Sasuke plunged into the water beneath them. Naruto leapt back into the first Hokage's head using Sasuke's head as leverage. Sasuke emerged from the water and stood looking up at Naruto while he stared down at him. When he saw Naruto leap into the air and make a direct course for him, he narrowed his eyes. When he was just 5 feet from Sasuke, Naruto raised his sword above his head and brought it down, and he readied himself. He was sidestepped by Sasuke, who then kicked him in the face. Naruto fell into the water after spinning to his left. Naruto stepped out and stood atop the water, while Sasuke dropped into his battle stance. After shaking his head to get rid of extra water, Naruto scowled at Sasuke. They gazed at one another in complete silence. The sound of the waterfall was the only sound audible, not even the birds soaring overhead. Naruto was unnerved by the eerie silence of the birds above and the surrounding area, not because he thought he had lost his hearing or anything, but rather because it sounded too much like the fleeting but profound silence that frequently descends upon the natural world following an unexpected act of violence. When a fox bites into a mouse and shakes it to death, or when a coyote catches a rabbit and snaps its neck. Even if it is almost imperceptible, the prey's death silences the surrounding area. Naruto was aware at the moment that Sasuke would be the coyote and the rabbit, the mouse to his fox. After dismissing Sasuke, Naruto finally said, "Mother Nature is beautiful and generous." He went on, "But she is also bloodthirsty. The never-ending killing in which she presides over is never seen in pictures or calendars. It's not the quality well liked by children and people." Naruto thought. "Have you noticed whenever she gets in this mood, everything becomes quiet and eerie? Even the animals don't make a sound." Sasuke said, "What are you blabbering on about, dobe?" Naruto grinned as his posture eased and he glanced up at the sky, where dark, menacing clouds were beginning to form. As he extended his arms, Naruto said, "I used to think it was some sort of instinct they had that told them to be quiet and witness Mother Nature's murderous personality in silence. I know better now, though. They remain silent not because of instinct but because they hope to avoid becoming the next object of her attention." Sasuke repeated, "Where are you going with this, dobe?" Naruto grinned and removed his second sword from its sheath. Sasuke glanced around as Naruto asked, "Can't you tell? Can't you hear it?" Some of the birds landed on nearby trees or vanished over them, and it was observed that they would not let their beaks make any noise. In a grave tone, Naruto reverted to his fighting stance and uttered, "The silence, the absolute silence that comes before the kill. This is what I'm talking about." Mother Nature's children are here to witness her at her cruelest. They're here to see me end the life of a treacherous Uchiha. That's not going to happen. Sasuke grinned. You're the one that's going to fall here. Naruto shot back, I don't think so, I have too much at stake to die now. Naruto waited for Sasuke to approach him before he charged, saying, TCH, we'll see Dobi. Now let's stop talking and start fighting. As Sasuke made a horizontal swipe with his kunai, Naruto leaned back. When Sasuke threw his kunai and it pierced his heart, he backflipped away from him but stopped. Before the water could engulf him, Naruto fell and vanished in a cloud of smoke. 3 water geysers erupted into the sky, and 3 Narutos emerged from the water as Sasuke blinked. 2 Narutos, each holding a sword, surrounded the Uchiha and charged at him. Sasuke turned on his Sharingan eyes and blinked again. He witnessed 3 Narutos. One thrusting his sword forward, another attempting to cut Sasuke's head off, and the final one watching from a distance with his swords still in their sheath. As the Naruto was ready to cut off his head, Sasuke leapt over him and dispelled it by slamming his right knee into its skull. When the second Naruto swung his swords forward, Sasuke dodged them, leapt to his feet, and dropped a kick to Naruto's face, which vanished in a cloud of smoke. As all of the data from his clones returned to him, the Naruto in the back nodded his head. He smirked as he saw Sasuke sprint in his direction and braced himself. But before Sasuke could see him smile, a 4th Naruto emerged from the water beneath him and gave him a straight uppercut to the chin. Naruto, who was standing back, ran up to the clone and planted a foot on his left shoulder as he shot into the air. He forced himself to leave his clone and made his way to Sasuke, who was dazed from the blow. He was upside down when he grabbed Sasuke's midsection, latching onto his back with his legs wrapped around Sasuke's head and his head on the left side of his hip. Then, while seated, Naruto turns them over twice before slamming Sasuke's head into the water. Naruto yelled, Naruto Uzumaki Devastation, and leapt to his feet, staying above the water until Sasuke recovered. As the original closely observed the location where Sasuke was sent, he scattered. His eyes widened as a giant fireball engulfed him, and he saw a red light and air bubbles appear beneath him. Watching his fire begin to fade a bit, Sasuke climbed out of the water. When he saw the fire grow smaller, he grinned triumphantly, but it was extinguished when a lot of chakra was focused in the center of his flames. Sasuke lost his balance as the sudden shockwave caused it to implode and spread outward. Sasuke was momentarily blinded by a bright light, and upon regaining his vision, he was astounded by what he saw. Naruto showed up without any burn marks. His face, complete with whiskers, was visible through his charred mask. He was still wearing black shorts and a black sleeveless muscle shirt. Sasuke smirked and taunted, I highly doubt Adobe like you could afford those fancy clothes I saw you in earlier. Naruto glared at him and refused to respond when he asked, so whose was it? Without saying a word, Naruto charged at Sasuke and punched him in the face. Sasuke dodged and punched Naruto in the head. Making a ram sign, Naruto leapt back after catching it with his left hand. With the cry, Shadow Clone Jutsu, 3 additional Narutos emerged to join the original. A clone sprinted directly towards Sasuke without a spoken order. Sasuke witnessed Naruto spin on his heels, turn his back to face him, and then perform a backflip while his Sharingan was still active. Just before the clone kicked him behind his head, Sasuke leapt back. Sasuke slammed his foot into the back of the clone's head, leaving him helpless as he recovered from his attack. Before he vanished, he was propelled forward and stopped in front of the other Narutos. Naruto nodded his head while glancing at his clones, and the 3 of them dashed in Sasuke's direction. Sasuke also charged, attempting to use a kunai he had removed from his pouch to swipe one of Naruto. Naruto kicked Sasuke in the stomach after sidestepping the swipe. With his momentum sustaining him, Sasuke ran up to a second Naruto, and before he could react, the Naruto in front of him pinned Sasuke's head with his right elbow. A third Naruto slid towards Sasuke and kicked him in his solar plex, causing him to glide over the water about 2 meters away from the Narutos before he could sink after his face struck the water beneath him. Sasuke ran to the center of the 3 Narutos and elbowed the middle in the face after he had recovered. He quickly disposed of the Naruto on the right with a hard and quick kick to the neck after reeling his left leg back and jumping. Sasuke landed on his feet as it vanished in a puff. He was run at by the final Naruto, who punched him in the face. After using his left arm to parry it off, Sasuke grabbed it and tossed the clone to the other Naruto. They both vanished when they collided, briefly perplexing Sasuke before he realized he was up against Naruto's clones. Sasuke snarled as more Naruto emerged from the water. As he avoided, stopped, or parried the clones' advances, Sasuke said, "Coward! Sending your clones to do your dirty work." He twisted his body to backhand a clone, then grabbed another clone's shoulder to launch himself over the numerous clones into the air. Sasuke quickly made a series of hand gestures before covering his mouth and taking a deep breath. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. He sent a huge ball of fire to the Narutos beneath him after conjuring it from his mouth. Many people put their arms over his head and face, but it was in vain because they all exploded due to the fireball's increased heat. There was only one Naruto left, smirking and unmarked. This surprised Sasuke once more, but this time his surprise was short-lived. Naruto had plenty of time, so he leapt to meet Sasuke in the air and gave him a devastating foot to the face. Sasuke landed on his feet after he righted himself after falling. As Naruto attempted to axe kick him from above, he grasped his face in agony, looked up, and retreated. Naruto and Sasuke resumed their punching and kicking exchange after he landed. With each breath, Naruto could see that Sasuke was growing weary. His red eyes were becoming less intense, and a trickle of sweat trickled down his forehead. This diverted Naruto's attention long enough for Sasuke to punch him in the face. In a swift retaliation, Naruto punched Sasuke back. Grabbing Naruto's head from behind, Sasuke jerked it downward while simultaneously lifting his knee, causing it to collide with Naruto's nose. After pulling his head back, Naruto grabbed Sasuke's head by the back with both hands and pushed it forward. He then raised his head again and gave Sasuke a headbutt that struck him squarely in the forehead. Sasuke stepped back, away from Naruto, unable to recover from this blow too quickly. He became enraged when he felt blood trickle down his cheeks and brow. Naruto also saw that he had cut his forehead open, but that it had healed fast because of the Kyuubi's power over him. He saw Sasuke begin to tremble with rage as he looked back up. His entire body began to be covered in tattoos that resembled black fire, and he narrowed his eyes. Naruto blinked, and Sasuke had vanished from view. Sasuke came up behind him and kicked Naruto behind his left leg before he could look around. Naruto hissed in agony as he fell to his left knee. Sasuke wasn't finished yet, as he forced Naruto to his hands and knees with a punch to the back of his head. After leaping over Naruto's head, Sasuke descended and pushed his shoe soles against the back of Naruto's head, sending him into the water. As Sasuke gradually sank farther into the water, Naruto glanced up at him. "So, Sasuke, you want to make this harder for me? Alright." The scroll of sealing was safely resting beneath the cover of a tall tree in the middle of the forest, far from the dangers of the battles. The scroll was difficult to see under the shadow of the tree, not illuminated by the silvery luminescence of the moon. A sleek silhouette crouched in front of the scroll, slowly approaching it. It was about 13 years old and had the shape of a young woman. She looked up at the moon and smiled as she picked up the scroll. The young woman's smile widened, revealing her sharp fangs and amber eyes that gleamed from the moonlight. Glancing at the scroll, she brushed her fiery red hair away from her face. She swayed her hands, and the scroll vanished. The girl followed her instincts and wandered aimlessly until she found her master and lady. With the scroll of sealing, perhaps she will please her master and ease some of his concerns. The red-headed woman stopped en route to her master to blink at the unconscious figure of a young man. His hair was spiky and brown, and his body was athletic. He was wearing a green jacket around his torso and gauze around his arms. Even though he was wearing other clothes, the young woman was concerned about his pale face and shallow breathing. She approached the slumbering teenager and knelt before him. With a smile, she put a soft hand over the teenager's heart, which began to glow a pale pink as pink fire encircled it. After moving from her hand to the teenager's chest, the fire vanished. The young woman grinned broadly as she watched the color gradually return to his face as his shallow breathing deepened. She got back up and ventured farther into the forest in the hopes of encountering her friend and master. Choji opened his eyes slowly as he began to regain consciousness. He glanced around, but there was nobody there. He was breathing and alone. Even though he was still too exhausted to move his arms or legs, he sensed that he wasn't in imminent danger. Knowing the consequences of taking the red chili pill, he pondered why he had eaten it. Now that he realized how worn out his body was from the battle, all he wanted to do was relax. He discovered that he was losing consciousness once more and that all he wanted to do was go to sleep. Choji fell asleep in the watchful light of the moon, resolving to consider this miracle later. Hinata also avoided Kidomaru's kunai, but Neji backflipped away from a shower of his that nearly killed him. Kidomaru watched his prey sidestep his advances with a slight ease, surrounded by swirls of black lines on his skin. With a grunt, he made hand signals with both upper arms while creating a web with his lower arms. He then slammed his right palm on top of the web to finish the summoning. A puff of smoke revealed a gigantic spider that was easily larger than any man ever born, and Kidomaru emerged over it grinning triumphantly, The giant spider spit out a huge web from its back, which, when torn open, called forth a large number of its followers. They dropped from their position far above the two Hyuga and made their way directly toward them. Hinata was about to argue when Neji shoved her back and began to spin rapidly. "Stand back, Hinata. Sama, I'll handle this." Rotation. The spiders slammed into Neji's chakra barrier, but they bounced off it instead of passing through. However, the web remained attached to it and began to slow its rotation. "I'm slowing down, damn it." As he stopped, Neji thought, "This is not good." Kitamaru threw another kunai at Neji's blind spot and snapped his eyes open. As he kept spinning due to the momentum of his technique, Neji noticed it coming toward him. He was able to keep it out of his skull by calling his chakra to his cheek. Near Hinata, it bounced off and became embedded in the ground. As he saw more spiders emerge from their mother's cocoon, she let out a gasp. As Neji closed his eyes and dropped into the gentle fist, they rained down on him. With the exception of the green field of divination under Neji, everything turned black and white for him as he opened them, just as the spiders were about to attack. 8 trigrams 60. 4 palms. Neji began using his technique to swat the spiders away, and his speed increased. Hinata was amazed to see her cousin fend off numerous spiders that were falling on him, but she knew the trick would eventually be abandoned. As his technique came to an end, Neji gasped, but the spiders kept falling. He inhaled and then shifted back into his gentle fist position. Kitamaru questioned why his stance changed, while Hinata gasped when he realized what he was doing. Hinata said, 8 trigrams 120. 8 palms. She was shocked that her cousin could perform such a feat. However, she realized that even with this method, he wouldn't be able to eliminate every spider, at least not by himself. Neji ducked, blasted another spider with his chakra, covered fingertips, and kicked another away. His method quickly came to an end again, and he growled as he attempted the rotation technique but was unsuccessful due to the sheer number of spider webs encircling him. 3 kunai attempted to pierce him as he ducked, but one of them cut the side of his right arm. When Kitamaru eventually located Neji's blind spot, he grinned. He scowled at the mire spiders that fell. "Move ni.san," exclaimed Hinata as she emerged behind him and prevented her cousin from being struck by another of Kitamaru's handcrafted kunai. She assumed her family's fighting stance, and Neji followed suit. They both exclaimed, 8 trigrams 60. 4 palms, as they moved in unison, vanquishing a large number of the spiders that were in their immediate vicinity. With a frown, Kitamaru pulled a spider web from his right index finger. After registering the command and releasing its grip on its web, his summon began to move toward Hinata and Neji. At the conclusion of their technique, they both looked up, and Hyunta grinned. She closed her eyes and shoved Neji aside this time. Neji yelled in fear, "Hinata! Sama!" but Hinata disregarded him. As she began to move her hands around herself and emit a tiny beam of chakra from the middle of her palms, Hinata thought, "It's still not complete, but it'll have to do." The more chakra she was pumping out, the faster she moved. Hinata was encircled by an enormous, net-like barrier of chakra, and when the summoning touched it, it began to struggle with the barrier before being blasted off it. Hinata jumped up to the summoning, seeing an opportunity present. She struck the summoning in the spider's underside and said, 8 trigrams 60. 4 palms. The spider promptly exploded, leaving behind the remnants of its web. When Neji saw his cousin employ a technique that no Hyuga had ever seen or used before, he was astounded. Has Hinata Sama developed a novel method? As Hinata landed gracefully on the ground, he pondered. She grinned and gasped as she glanced up at Neji. Neji, who had recovered from his shock, also grinned. Player 1. Game over. Suddenly, a number of kunai made their way directly to Hinata. As each kunai hurled at Hinata struck its target, the eyes of both Hyugas widened. Hinata's eyes went glassy as the agony she experienced overcame her until she passed out. Neji rushed to her, exclaiming, "Hinata! Sama!" but was stopped when a kunai struck his leg out of the blue. He was only a meter from Hinata when he stumbled and fell to his knees. As his black-lined tattoos began to change and transform him into his second cursed mark form, Kitamura grinned. So he prepared to end this so-called game by spitting out a giant bow and arrow. As he pointed his arrow at his target, he told himself, "Spider War Bow. Terrible split. Ninja arrow at 100%. He fired the arrow and it went directly toward Hinata, saying, "Damage, at maximum." Neji glanced up, saw it coming, and grabbed Hinata at the last second to get her out of danger. He did not, however, witness a kunai pierce his back as it flew through the air. He fell to his knees and grunted as he let Hinata fall to the ground. Neji stumbled to his feet and swore, "Damn. Neji was shocked to see a young girl standing in front of him without his awareness. "Need some help?" he asked. Her long red hair framed her face, and her amber eyes gleamed with joy. Her red kimono embraced her voluptuous figure, and her creamy skin radiated the moonlight. Neji's deep amber eyes met his, and she couldn't help but flush. He recovered from his surprise. Since she wouldn't be in Kidomaru's direct line of attack, he was forced to trust this girl with his cousin. She nodded when Neji said, "Take her away from here." Then she picked up Hinata and vanished into the woods. "Good, now she's safe." "But you're not." Neji's forehead protector was removed as a giant arrow sailed past his face, scratching the side of his head. It landed a few feet away after flying across the forest. Neji collapsed on his face, cursing his inattention to his surroundings. He suddenly became aware of something. He grimaced as he got up slowly and fought to stay upright. Kidomaru made another arrow and pointed it at the motionless Neji from 50 meters away. Thinking he had struck Neji, he let the arrow fly and grinned when it lifted dust from the ground. But it was taken out of his mouth when Neji was still upright and had shifted slightly to the right. He gasped, "Just as I thought." Angry, Neji thought, he knows about the Hyuga's blind spot. The wound he sustained from the arrow going through his left shoulder caused him to cough up blood. As he began to move forward, he swore once more. Before long, he started running away from Kidomaru. Kidomaru smirked and spat out another arrow, this time with a long string of spider's web attached, saying, "Player 2. Game over. No matter where you go, my arrow will still find its mark." He pointed it at the blind spot of the Hyuga, beneath Neji's first vertebrae. He fired it, but before the arrow could kill him, Neji, who had his chakra surrounding him, was able to sense the disruption and jump behind a tree. As he dropped to his hands and knees, Neji thought, "That was too close." Kidomaru merely laughed. Neji clenched his fist as Kidomaru's voice reverberated throughout the forest. "It's useless to resist. It'll all be over soon. Strong. He's much more powerful than me." Neji's vision blurred and he gasped, "I'm almost out of chakra." Neji looked at his forehead protector a few feet away from him and said, "I doubt that I'll be able to avoid the next attack." Part of it was covered in his blood, and the moonlight illuminated the emblem of his village. "Is this it?" To increase the arrow's velocity, Kidomaru spat out another arrow, this time with a swirl on the tip. "No, I'm not going to give up. I will not disappoint Naruto, who is depending on me. Not Konoha, not the Hyuga clan, not him, not Hinata. Sama, not anybody." With his back to Kidomaru, Neji grinned while remaining motionless. "Is he giving up?" Kidomaru considered. He continued as he fired the arrow, "I can't take my chances." As it sped past numerous trees, it kicked up dust. At the last second, Neji turned, causing the arrow to strike his lower right torso rather than his heart. He flew backwards until his back struck a tree due to the arrow's momentum. Neji was fastened to the tree since the arrow's butt had a spider web fastened to it. He bowed his head forward and pumped chakra into his right hand, which rose and grasped the arrow's spider web. As his chakra swiftly moved up the web and into Kidomaru's mouth, he thought, "This is my chance." Kidomaru was startled by this since his body began to ache. "What?" Kidomaru fell from his branch and made his way to the merciless earth, many of his internal organs now damaged. After cutting the string that was connected to his mouth, he discovered that despite the damage, he was still able to move his body. Neji cut the string that was fastened to his lower abdomen and turned on his Byakugan, searching deep within for the energy he needed. Neji ran after Kidomaru, who was still falling and getting better, without falling. "I refuse to give up," Neji said. "Even if you are more powerful than I am. Even if my body is immobile." Neji watched as his target slowly straightened himself out and swung around a number of branches. "I won't lose." Unaware of the Hyuga sprinting in his direction, Kidomaru thought to himself, "I made a mistake. I promise not to make the same mistake twice." When Neji appeared in front of him, his eyes widened. "This is it." Neji repeatedly struck Kidomaru in the face with his middle and index fingers on both sides. Kidomaru grunted every time he struck. Neji hit Kidomaru in the left temple with a last spin, channeling the last of his chakra into his left hand. Kidomaru was thrown around until he lost his balance and landed on his back. He managed to stay upright long enough to stop in front of Kidomaru before collapsing to his left knee as Neji spun beside him. Kidomaru stared at Neji in wonder and reverted to his normal form. H said, "H. How?" And Neji turned to face him. "I knew that you'd aim at my blind spot since you knew where it was. So it wasn't hard to release my chakra into that only. At the last second, I was able to avoid a fatal hit." Kidomaru cracked a grin. He looked into the icy, worn-out silver eyes of Neji and said, "So you took the hit on purpose, even though it was a risky move. Why would you go to such lengths? Neji began. You have been one of the strongest opponents I've faced in a long time. Kidomaru could hardly sit up and smirked at Neji as he said, but there is one person who's still the strongest I've ever faced. What he told me was this: unlike me, you're not pathetic you. As he pulled his forehead protector from his pocket, Neji was able to return the grin, saying, it doesn't matter now though, you're going to die with me. Kidomaru's eyes rolled to the back of his head as Neji told him, I'm not dying that easily. He then collapsed onto his back. Neji went down on his knees and then onto his face. My part has been completed, it's up to you guys now. The red-haired teenager returned with Hinata on her shoulder a few minutes after Neji passed out. The teenager knelt in front of Neji and applied a pink fire-covered hand to his chest and wounds, saying, Master was right, you have changed. When she was done, she grinned and turned to face Kidomaru. This won't completely heal you, but at least it's better than your current condition. Fool. She grinned as she looked at Hinata. As she passed Neji and Kidomaru and proceeded to locate her master, the teenager remarked, at least you're alright now, milady. With his arms raised and his face shielded by his forearms, Naruto struck Sasuke with both of his fists. After sending a right, and another left hook, Naruto lifted his knee and rammed it into Sasuke's midsection, causing his lungs to lose oxygen. Jumping to his feet, Naruto put both hands together over his head and then lowered them onto Sasuke's back. Despite not sinking into the water, Sasuke went to his knees. A dark, purple aura surrounded Naruto as he leapt back, away from Sasuke. Naruto remarked mockingly, how the mighty have fallen. He was observing Sasuke as he stood slowly, his body entirely covered in tattoos that resembled black flames and the dark aura that was adhered to his skin. With a crazy gleam in his eyes and his newly discovered speed, Sasuke roared, you know nothing about me, as he ran towards Naruto. Unprepared for the unexpected speed of Sasuke's stride, Naruto left his body exposed as Sasuke closed in and delivered a rapid barrage of blows. Every blow Sasuke delivered to Naruto was more powerful and swift than the last, forcing the air out of his lungs. When Sasuke noticed that Naruto's face was covered in shock and pain, a savage smile spread across his lips. Sasuke finished his jab combination by spinning and kicking Naruto's chin with a roundhouse kick. Sasuke's foot gave Naruto momentum, which caused him to spiral back through the air, striking the nearby rocks with his back. After he recovered from the blow, he looked up to see Sasuke coming at him once more. He appeared in front of Sasuke after pushing himself off the rock behind him. After a barrage of punches, kicks, blocks, and dodges, Naruto finally got the upper hand with a well-timed knee to Sasuke's chin. Before his back struck the rocks, Sasuke managed to catch himself as he flew back. Naruto performed a backflip and leapt high into the air, landing far from Sasuke. Sasuke ascended the nearby rocks, frustrated that he still couldn't defeat a low-class shinobi like Naruto. At the top of his ascent, he halted and used his chakra to secure his feet to the rocks. After making a few hand gestures, he grabbed his left wrist with his right hand and used his chakra to create a circle of electricity powered by his chakra around his left hand. Disappointed, Naruto shook his head and conjured the Rasengan by spinning his chakra in his right hand in erratic directions. Sasuke hurried down the flanking rocks and headed in Naruto's direction, content with his Chidori. Naruto, never one to be outdone, charged at Sasuke, and as they were only a few feet apart, they both launched their attacks forward and collided. Naruto and Sasuke glared and grunted as they tried to defeat the Rasengan and Chidori in their struggle for dominance. A pair of blue eyes, driven by the will of fire, his mother's insistence and his father's righteousness, locked onto Onyx's eyes, driven by the pain of losing his family, the hatred stoked by his murderous father, and the madness brought on by Orochimaru's curse mark. Naruto screamed, I won't lose to you, as he took Sasuke's left hand in his right. Sasuke's hand was surrounded by lightning, but Naruto ignored it and cocked his left fist back before releasing it and punching Sasuke in the face. He held his face and stumbled back. As he worked out his right hand, Naruto grinned at him and said, TCH, Dobi. Naruto nodded his head in agreement as Sasuke remarked, you know this is just getting started. Naruto said, want to call a timeout? And Sasuke gave him a fierce snarl. Naruto sneered, not for me, I'm fine. You, however, look winded. Sasuke produced a number of shuriken and kunai from his pockets. Naruto avoided every kunai and shuriken, but his eyes widened when he saw that each one was connected to a ninja wire. Don't make me laugh, Dobi, he said. With a sly smile, Sasuke withdrew the kunai and shuriken, and they whirled around Naruto until they bound him. Naruto gritted his teeth as some buried themselves in his flesh. Sasuke was still able to make hand signals and release a strong burst of fire while holding the ninja wire in his mouth and hands. The fire spread toward Naruto and consumed him through the ninja wire. Sasuke used his lightning affinity to send the ninja wire traveling down it because he was not disdainful of his current attack and wanted to make sure he trapped Naruto. As the lightning began to burn his nervous system, Naruto screamed in agony inside the flames. This was music to Sasuke's ears, and if he had anything to say about it, he would keep hearing it. When he added more chakra to the lightning, Naruto thought he was about to blow up. Naruto let out a grunt as he fought to stop crying. He searched for a method to escape Sasuke's hold, but he was unable to come up with anything. Naruto retreated to his mindscape and gazed up at his tenant after hearing his mentor's words, "You can't do this alone." The Kyuubi raised his head curiously as Naruto told him, "If I rely on you and your power too much, then I'll never get stronger by myself." The Kyuubi asked, "So you rather die here?" Naruto opened his mouth to respond, but he couldn't think of anything. Stupid kid. "So what? I come running to you whenever I can't handle something," replied Naruto. With a weary grunt, as though he had completed a challenging and taxing task, the Kyuubi moved in his place. "You're so reckless and impatient. The Uchiha brat will eventually shut down your nervous system. Be grateful I'm dealing with it as we speak." With seriousness, Naruto said, "Answer my question. You're still a kid, brat. As you grow older, you'll be able to handle more situations without my help." The Kyuubi started. "For now, alone, you're at your strongest without actually pushing your body's natural limitations. With my help, you'll be able to do far more than what you can normally do." Naruto pondered this and turned away. Naruto said, "It seems like you're doing the majority of the work." Naruto looked at the Kyuubi and raised an eyebrow, saying, "Just think of it as me setting a higher standard of limitations that your body can momentarily meet. You'll still do all the hard work." "Whatever." The Kyuubi's red chakra encircled Naruto as a smile stretched across his lips. The Kyuubi's chakra vanished as Naruto nodded his head and said, "Just remember, don't get lost in the bloodlust." Sasuke was about to break up the fight outside his mindscape when the wires relaxed and dropped to the floor. Looking into the flames with his still developing Sharingan eyes, he was taken aback by what he saw. Naruto was huddled, his arms folded across his head, his body trembling, surrounded by red chakra. Sasuke was terrified by the level at which he was using his chakra, but before he could do anything, Naruto leapt to his feet and gazed down at Sasuke from his position in the sky. With his longer nails, thicker whisker marks, wilder hair, and cold, deadly crimson eyes that seemed to be piercing his soul, Sasuke captured every detail of the airborne Naruto. He had been fighting this Naruto for the past hour or so, but this Naruto was much more animalistic, hardcore, and almost demonic. The red chakra that had encircled Naruto vanished like a drop of water over a flame as he landed closer to Sasuke. They looked at one another without averting their eyes or blinking. Naruto couldn't help but smirk as Sasuke stammered, "Why? You're an monster." Something much more. Hinata clenched her eyes and slowly opened them, seeing a red blur in front of her. "Milady, wake up." She looked into the amber eyes of a girl her age when her vision cleared. She blushed and blinked at the girl's closeness. She stammered, "Anyo, you're a little too circa close." The girl grinned. The girl exclaimed, "Milady, you're awake," and Hinata arched an eyebrow. Hinata observed Shikamaru, Lee, and Kiba observing her when she looked up. Near them, Neji and Choji were unconscious, with minor scratches but nothing life-threatening. "So you're up, huh?" Kiba asked, grinning wearily. Sitting up, Hinata surveyed her surroundings. They were all seated beneath a tree's shade, and it was still night. Shikamaru gazed at the unidentified teenager as Hinata questioned, "What's going on?" "We're not completely sure. Lee, Kiba and I were saved by this girl just before we were about to be killed. I'm not sure about Neji or Choji since they've been unconscious since we got here," Shikamaru stated before his gaze hardened. The teenager laughed when he said, "So now the question is, who are you?" Before becoming somewhat serious, she said cheerfully, "No one special, just a friend." The four alert teenagers gave the girl a strange look and said, "And as a friend, I'd advise you six to return to Konoha." In a tone that left no room for doubt, she informed them, "What you six have just experienced is only the beginning. As we speak, there are enemies coming here too, so to speak. Put out the will of fire," Shikamaru spoke after he recovered from his shock. The girl shook her head when he said, "So you want us to retreat? What about Naruto and Sasuke?" "It's too late for the spoiled brat, but rest assured, Naruto will not be left to fend for himself. As for you six, I want you to return to Konoha and inform you Hokage of what I've just told you and request for backup. About 4 or 5 of your top shinobi would do. Hinata replied incredulously. Kiba asked, why should we trust you? And the girl gave him a look. Everyone was shocked when I said, I'm not sure what I can say that will convince you all. If you refuse to take my advice, Naruto will die. The enigmatic girl got up and left. Wait, however, Hinata intervened to stop the girl before she could vanish into the sea of trees. She turned to look at Hinata. With conviction and resolve, she declared, I'm not leaving without Naruto. The girl's gaze became stony. Hinata nodded when she said, Milady, you said that as if you were serious. She shot back, I am. The girl smiled and relaxed her gaze. Hinata stood next to the girl and said, fair enough. She heard Kiba say, Hinata, be careful out there. She nodded without turning, and then she and the enigmatic girl vanished. There was silence for a few minutes, then Shikamaru stood and grunted. Lee and Kiba nodded as they stood and each seized their comrade, saying, come on, we still need to get Choji and Neji to the hospital and tell Lady Tsunade the troublesome news. As they left for Konoha, Lee and Kiba nodded once more, saying, I'll cover you guys. Suffocating, Sasuke knelt before Naruto. Naruto clearly had the upper hand in this battle in his feral form. But Sasuke had an ace for that kind of situation. He got up and stumbled out of Naruto's way. Naruto's question, running away, caused Sasuke to halt and turn, grinning slyly. He lifted his middle finger and slowly raised his right hand. With a growl, Naruto charged at him, too fast for Sasuke's Sharingan to follow. Naruto slammed his right fist into Sasuke's stomach before he could get out of the way, pulling him through the water and slamming into the nearby rocks. Sasuke was covered in dust and debris that was thrown into the air. Sasuke kicked Naruto off, causing him to fall to his knees. He looked up, shocked, and shook his head from the blow. Sasuke emerged from the dust cloud looking different. He had a black star on his nose, darker and longer hair, and dark gray skin. In addition, Naruto saw that his Sharingan had all 3 Tomo and that his sclera had turned black instead of white. With restored vitality, Sasuke uttered, come Naruto, your death awaits. Naruto felt his anger building and snarled. The familiar but unwelcoming voice made Naruto's eyes widen. So eager to finish the fight, huh Sasuke? He asked. Kabuto and Orochimaru smirked at Naruto as they fell next to Sasuke. As Naruto snarled, Orochimaru. He secretly feared the renegade Sannin just as much as he detested Orochimaru. Naruto knew he had no chance of surviving with these 3.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.